pointed out that the court does use some language mirroring at times in sort of the more specific application of the test that mirrors reasonable suspicion. But this court has done that in TLO and the special needs cases. And so what the court is looking to do is make sure that the scope and
elected candidate of choice, we have to be really serious. Truly, it means that I am a second-class citizen if I cannot have representation in the halls of Congress, the halls of my state legislature, my local government, and in my school boards. And that's truly the enormity of what we are facing today. We have come too far to accept a future where my children will have less rights than their grandparents, where my vote could hold less weight than my neighbors, where the voices of thousands of Black Louisianans are continually ignored. I've spent my whole career fighting for a multiracial democracy that I've never seen. But a multiracial democracy I do believe in. We know that it is possible. We are here to do the work to realize a multiracial democracy, and we ask that you join us in this fight. Thank you so much.
Morning. My name is Damon Hewitt, President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Law. I want you all to give Ashley Shelton another round of applause for her leadership and everybody from Louisiana. I stand before you as the head of the Lawyers Committee, but I also stand before you as a Louisiana native, as a native New Orleanian. Let me tell you something about our state. Our state is one that's a complex gumbo of culture, of politics, but also racism has been part of that mix. Racism has been part of that mix in voting and voting rights. As long as we've had elections in this country and in that state, there's been racial discrimination in voting, not just at the ballot box, but also in the drawing of maps. My very first depositions that I sat in on as a lawyer was almost 25 years ago in Louisiana because of unfair maps, racially gerrymandered maps. What I want to do this morning is disabuse you of a couple of myths. One myth is that this case and cases like it are all about partisanship, about the red and the blue, Democrats and Republicans. This case is about the black and the brown. This case is about the people whose voices, votes, and very vitality stand and hang in the balance. The people whose rights are going to be quashed, the people who won't have a meaningful opportunity to elect the candidate, who are told there were sideshows to democracy. This case is also not just about Louisiana. It's about nationwide, because we at the Lawyers Committee, our friends at the Legal Defense Fund and others litigate dozens of these cases every year using Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And the key question is this. The court has already found that there's been a violation of civil rights. In fact, the question is, can we correct that? Can we remedy that? Can we do anything about it through the courts? The other side is going to tell you that you have rights, but you have no remedy, that you only have rights. Your rights are words on paper. My friends, that is a short walk from what the Supreme Court told us in Dred Scott, that the Negro has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. The question that our friends are calling today in this litigation, and throughout this kind of cases, is, will our rights be respected? Will our rights be honored? I'm so proud of our friends at LDF for litigating this case, to my sister friend Janae Nelson for arguing this case in the Supreme Court. And we're not here for show because we're on the dais. We are here to win for the people. Thank you.
The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united.
Every patient considering cataract surgery has to make a choice. Should you choose a fixed or an adjustable lens implant? There are major differences between these two types of implants that will impact your vision for the rest of your life. In this video, we're going to discuss the key pros and cons between fixed and adjustable lens implants. We'll explore which patients might be better suited for one versus the other, and hopefully this will help you make a more confident decision about which implant is best for your eyes. Let's get started. To learn more about modern cataract surgery from some of the leading cataract surgeons in America, and to find a surgeon near you, visit bestcataractsurgeons.com. The basics. First, let's break down what each of these lenses actually is. A fixed lens implant is a traditional type of lens implant used in cataract surgery. Once your surgeon places it inside your eye, its prescription can't be changed. The prescription of the lens that you get on the day of surgery is what you live with for the rest of your life, unless you have some additional surgery in order to fix it. An adjustable lens, like the Light Adjustable Lens by RxSight, is a newer technology that allows your prescription to be customized after your surgery without requiring any additional surgery. Adjustments are made using a special light treatment that fine-tunes the lens implant after it's already inside your eyes. Let's compare the differences.
Because of resentment.
Vision accuracy.
And jealousy.
With a fixed lens, your surgeon uses pre-surgery measurements to choose the right lens implant. These tools have advanced over the years, but they're still far from perfect, and common eye conditions can impact the accuracy of these measurements, including things like dry eyes, astigmatism, LASIK, and high nearsightedness or farsightedness. The adjustable lens allows your vision to be optimized and customized after surgery. The same measurements can be used before surgery to get the adjustable lens implant as close to the target as possible, but after your surgery it can be fine-tuned or enhanced. This leads to more patients achieving 20/20 or better vision without glasses. Flexibility. With the fixed lens, once it's implanted, it can't be changed. While on the other hand, the adjustable lens can be adjusted multiple times after surgery, which means your surgeon can dial in your prescription to get the best outcome. Many patients want to be free from both distance and reading glasses. The flexibility of the adjustable lens allows each eye to be customized independently, which allows you to customize the amount of near or intermediate vision you have after surgery for patients who desire it. Recovery time. The adjustable lens requires more visits after surgery to do the adjustments. While this can be looked at as a feature, for some patients these additional visits may seem less convenient. For certain patients, for example, those who may be bedbound or immobile, the additional visits can be burdensome, and this must be weighed against the increased accuracy and improved vision offered by the lens. One more thing. Not every cataract surgeon offers adjustable lenses. These lenses require special technology and training. While most cataract surgeons who remain current with the state-of-the-art technology now offer it, not all surgeons do. You can find a directory of surgeons who offer it on RxSight's website, rxsight.com, and we'll put a link in the description below. If the adjustable lens is something you are considering and want to know if you're a good candidate for it, you should seek out a surgeon who can offer it. It doesn't mean you have to get it, of course, but at least you'll know if you're a candidate and can hear the surgeon's opinion based on your eyes. Which type of lens is right for you? Every patient is different, so we can never say that one lens is the best lens implant for everyone. However, the adjustable lens offers precision that fixed lenses simply can't match. Choosing between a fixed and an adjustable lens isn't just a surgical decision, it's a lifestyle decision. Your choice impacts how you'll see the world every day for the rest of your life. We recommend discussing with an experienced cataract surgeon if you're a good candidate for adjustable lenses, and the personalized pros and cons for your eyes. For more information on modern cataract surgery and finding a cataract surgeon, like and subscribe to our channel or check out our website, bestcataractsurgeons.com.
We stand here today because what is at issue is not solely an argument. It is whether we understand as a country that we fought and won a civil war. A civil war for the soul of the country. Because while there is an argument happening behind us,
will be U.S. Trade Representative James Greer.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
and I want to express my appreciation to the staff here at the Treasury Department. Obviously, we're still in shutdown because the Democrats refused to open the government, so it has created some additional logistical constraints, but we appreciate everyone's patience and willingness during the Schumer shutdown. With respect to the matter at hand, last Wednesday evening, China announced a sweeping expansion of its export controls on rare earth elements and rare earth processing equipment, as well as technologies related to batteries, vehicles, industrial diamonds, and super hard materials. To be clear, this is not just about the United States. These actions, if implemented, would apply to the entire world. China's announcement is nothing more than a global supply chain power grab. While China has taken a number of retaliatory trade actions against the United States, Europe, Canada, Australia, and others in recent years, this move is not proportional retaliation. It is an exercise in economic coercion on every country in the world. At its core, China's new measures include a rule saying that any product of which more than 0.1% of minerals consist of minerals mined or processed in China, one must seek approval from the Chinese government before trading it. Since many important semiconductors, for example, have these critical minerals, and semiconductors are in nearly everything, this rule gives China control over basically the entire global economy and the technology supply chain. This will impact artificial intelligence systems and high-tech products, but even regular consumer items like cars, smartphones, and potentially even household appliances could be affected. It would also apply to many items that are necessary for defense purposes. And again, it covers the whole world. For example, if a smartphone is made in Korea and sold to Australia, then the company would first need to get China's approval, since the phone contains semiconductors, which may contain rare earths sourced from China. Or if a car is built in America and sold in Mexico, you would need to seek approval from China before making the sale because of the chips in the car. Obviously, neither we nor our allies are going to go along with that kind of system. Many are suggesting that China's action is simply posturing for leverage in negotiations with the United States. While that may be one element of China's approach, it's obvious that these controls are part of a broader plan by China to control the world's supply chains. And these controls are wildly out of proportion to any targeted actions by the United States or its allies over the past few months. Others have suggested that the United States has violated a non-existent agreement with the Chinese regarding export controls or the implementation of measures. This is a false narrative deployed to justify these broad and unacceptable Chinese actions. There is, in fact, a published agreement between the United States and China from earlier this year that the U.S. and China would suspend tariffs of over 100% on each other. China further agreed to effectively suspend elements of its rare earths export control regime by expeditiously approving licenses for U.S. companies seeking rare earths. Both countries agreed to this pause on tariffs and rare earth measures for 90 days while we pursued further negotiations, which have gone on quite successfully for the past 6 months. And there is a published agreement about this on official U.S. government and Chinese websites. This is the Geneva Agreement. It's not a secret. It's out there. It's published. We keep our tariffs low. They keep the rare earths flowing. We have not imposed our reciprocal tariffs on the Chinese since that time, but now the Chinese have expanded their rare earth controls. We have complied. They have not. And so in this context, this is how China has announced its new and extremely expansive controls on rare earth materials just last week. It's a clear repudiation of everything we've been working toward for the last 6 months, which was a stable tariff situation and a continued flow of rare earths. The short story is that we've had compliance, and the Chinese have escalated, and they've taken this opportunity to make a pretextual claim of noncompliance or other measures to justify this. But the United States won't stand for it. We're in close communication with our allies who have expressed similar views and who are similarly affected. The President has signaled some of the actions we are taking or may take if the Chinese implement this system of controls on the world. Mr. Secretary.
Good. Thank you, Ambassador Greer. And again, thank you all for being here at Treasury today in the midst of this shutdown. We call on the moderate Democrats in the Senate to be heroes. Be heroes. Break away from the hive of radicalism and do something for the American people, because we are starting to cut into muscle here. We believe that the shutdown may start costing the U.S. economy up to $15 billion a day, and this is a decision the Democrats are making. And one of the reasons that they are not being held to task is because the mainstream media is not coming at them the way they would have if the Republicans were willing to keep the government closed. It is a very simple decision. Mike Johnson passed a clean CR. Leader Thune has the clean CR. 3 Democrats have voted for it. And right here, right now, I am calling for the moderate Democrats to be heroes and reopen the government for the American people. So with that, I want to say thank you. Good morning to all of you. It's a shame we can't have more people here. But I believe that the Democrats will come to their senses soon. Maybe it's after this no kings thing, but no kings equal no paychecks. Before we start on Q&A, I'd like to make a few points on China. As the President said, we want to help China, not hurt it. If some in the Chinese government want to slow down the global economy through disappointing actions and through economic coercion, the Chinese economy will be hurt the most. And make no mistake, this is China versus the world. They have put these unacceptable export controls on the entire world. China is a command and control economy, and we and our allies will neither be commanded nor controlled. They are a state economy, and we are not going to let a group of bureaucrats in Beijing try to manage the global supply chains. As Ambassador Greer said, we had a document and an agreement in Geneva, and magnets were flowing quite well. Some U.S. auto companies have called us in the past week and said that there had been a slowdown in magnets. So when we asked the Chinese about this, they said, oh, it probably had something to do with the holiday. So they can't be trusted with the global supply chain. Had something to do with the holiday.
Daytona is the pro's choice for floor jacks and jack stands, built with heavy-duty components and rigorously tested. Each jack is engineered to meet industry standards. Experience fast, efficient lifting with dual-piston rapid pump technology. Pair with jack stands that feature a self-locking ratchet bar and double-locking mobility pins for secure support. Daytona, uncompromising quality, exceptional value, only at Harbor Freight.
In Baton Rouge, in a neighborhood in Congressional District 6, the new district that the Robinson Institute...
Have you heard of the grabber? You're dead.
Dead is just a word. Did you think our story was over? You will pay for what you did to me. Vengeance is mine.
Rated R. Only in theaters Friday.
Moreover, we should... This should be a clear sign to our allies that we must work together, and work together we will. There will be a series of meetings this week during World Bank IMF week, and we are all aligned. Not only is China fueling Russia's war, but China's actions have once again demonstrated the risk of being dependent on them on rare earths, and for that matter, anything. If China wants to be an unreliable partner to the world, then the world will have to decouple. The world does not want to decouple. We want to de-risk. But signals like this are signs of decoupling, which we don't believe China wants. And again, we do not want to decouple. We should work together to de-risk and diversify our supply chains away from China as quickly as possible. China says that these rare earths are used in military materials and that they want to maintain peace in the world. Again, it is the purchase of Russian oil by China that fuels the Russian war machine. China buys 60% of Russian energy. They buy 90% of Iranian energy. So who is fueling the Russian war machine? We will be producing photos soon, supplied to us by the Ukrainian government, that shows Chinese parts comprise substantial amounts of Ukrainian drones. So President Trump is the leader of peace. We should work together to de-risk and diversify. China's highly provocative move comes after we've made significant efforts to de-escalate tensions. While there are substantial actions we could take, we'd rather not. I believe China is open to discussion, and I am optimistic that this can be de-escalated. Ultimately, we are confident in the strong relationship between President Trump and President Xi. We've had substantial communication with the Chinese over the past few days, and we believe that there will be more forthcoming this week. With that, we can now take your questions. Elliot?
Great, thank you. First question, Damon Jamer, CNBC.
Your CNBC interview just now, you name-checked a Chinese negotiator, Li Chenggong, I believe is how you pronounce his name, from the Ministry of Commerce, as somebody who's particularly difficult to deal with. Is it your sense that there's a split politically inside the Chinese negotiating team, or do you think you're dealing with sort of a strategic good cop, bad cop kind of relationship on the other side of the table?
It's very difficult to know. Perhaps the vice minister who showed up here with very incendiary language on August 28th has gone rogue. Perhaps he's gone rogue. So we don't know. But what we do know is, as Ambassador Greer said, any backfilling that the Chinese are trying to do in terms of narrative, this was well flagged. This individual was very disrespectful, and I'll tell you that we've had 4 rounds of talks, Geneva, London, Stockholm, and Madrid, and both sides approached them with great respect, and this individual did not. He showed up uninvited in Washington and said, quote, China will cause global chaos if the port shipping fees go through. So I don't believe that China wants to be an agent of chaos, and maybe they used to have the wolf warrior diplomats, so maybe he thinks he's a wolf warrior. We don't know. That's up to them.
Thank you. Next question will go to
I am here to say our voices must be heard.
Christine with NBC.
From our legislature in Baton Rouge to our nation's capital right here on this street where we
Thank you for this, Christine Romans, NBC News. What do you need to see specifically from the Chinese to avoid putting more tariffs on Chinese goods, as the president threatened on Friday? And are the 2 leaders still expected to meet in the next few weeks?
I will say that I believe, as of last time I saw President Trump, which was last night, he is still expecting to see Party Chair Xi in Korea, and I'll let Jameson, Ambassador Greer, answer the first part.
And the expectation is that this regulatory system is not implemented by the Chinese. They haven't implemented yet. They've put out a notice about it. Similarly, we've signaled our intent to raise tariffs if their system goes into effect. Our documents doing a tariff raise and potentially taking other export controls, these are drafted or in draft, so this is quite real. But our expectation is that they won't implement this and that we'll be able to be back to where we were a week ago, where we had the tariff levels we've agreed to and we have the flow of rare earth magnets we agreed to.
We're going to generate, we're going to make this demand. We cannot lose hope. We are here to hold the line for the Voting Rights Act. We are here to fulfill the promise.
Contact State Farm agent Sean Perrin for an auto quote today.
That will last, not just for a moment in time. I believe that we will win. I believe we must win. So say it with me, y'all. Win. Win, 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 win. Win. Win, 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 win. We stand today for the future. Those who've not yet been born. for those of us striving to thrive here in this present, and for our ancestors who lived
So much.
and suffered
Next
so
question.
much
We're going to go to Ed Lawrence, Fox.
and all the wrongs that they have dealt with.
Thanks for taking the questions. So the Chinese have been pretty good at using this rare earth mineral trump card, for lack of a better term. So we're not talking about opening the Chinese market to U.S. trade. We're not talking about protecting intellectual property. Can there be a sustainable framework, a substantial framework with China?
So there is room for a positive economic relationship with China. There certainly is. And we would much rather be talking about that than constantly be talking about rare earths. To paraphrase the Secretary in one of our recent meetings with the Chinese, this is the last time we want to be talking about rare earths with the Chinese. Fortunately, that is not the last time they want to be talking about it. The reality is there are a lot of areas where we can trade with the Chinese. Our trade is wildly imbalanced, so it needs to be more balanced. And there's a lot of, as the Secretary said, areas of risk. And so we need to be trading in areas that are low risk, that are low sensitivity. And there are a lot of areas where both the Chinese and us can frankly pick and choose sectors and goods that we should be trading, and services for that matter. And that's where these talks should be focused. Instead, we're constantly focused on the Chinese chokehold on the world of rare earths and rare earth materials.
And there's an article in the paper today. A large Chinese fashion retailer just opened on Fifth Avenue in New York. It's a competitor to Zara and H&M. We welcome that. We would also like to see more U.S. retailers on the ground in China, but Costco and Walmart have very big operations there. So again, our goal is not to decouple, it's to de-risk.
It seems that China's not phased by our tariffs. What levers then do we have left?
I can guarantee you, when we were in Geneva and the tariffs were 145%, they were phased.
John Decker, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Ambassador Greer. I really appreciate your taking the opportunity. I have a question for both of you about this upcoming case at the U.S. Supreme Court. It's an incredibly important case that could impact the constitutionality of the president's unilateral tariffs on America's trading partners. Really basic question for you, just to begin with. I have two questions for you. Why are the president's tariffs not taxes on imported goods?
That's easy, because tariffs are a surcharge, not a tax. They could be paid by the exporter. They could be paid by the country. When you go and get your driver's license, you pay a fee. Is that a tax? Is it a tax?
I'm asking you a question, sir. And I just appreciate the answer to it. Thank you.
And if we, well, I'm giving you an answer that maybe you don't like. The other thing is, this case, and Ambassador Jameson is a lawyer. I'm not.
As am I. Thank you.
I won't tell you the one thing I agreed with Lennon on. I think that we see with this Chinese provocation why it is very important for the president to have emergency powers to implement tariffs, because he needs to be able to use this to push back against this Chinese overreach against the world. So if it was not clear to anyone on the court before last week that the president needs emergency powers to protect the American people and the American economy, then it should be abundantly clear now.
Cited that 1977 law. The question is about Brazil, the 50% tariffs on Brazil. Can you explain why they are being hit with 50% tariffs and why it falls under the umbrella of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act?
Certainly, happy to do that. Now, to be really specific about Brazil, there's actually two regimes in place right here. There's the reciprocal tariff rate of 10% on Brazil, which everyone in the world has, which we're trying to do to control the global trade deficit. It's a huge problem for us. Then on top of that, there's a 40% tariff on Brazil, and that's under a separate emergency, and this is related to extreme concerns with rule of law, censorship, and human rights in Brazil, where Brazil Brazilian judge has taken it upon himself to order U.S. companies to censor themselves, given them secret orders to manage the flow of information, rule of law with respect to political opponents in Brazil. And so when
the unlawful detention of U.S. citizens who were in Brazil.
Correct. Now, the Treasury Department has often used IEPA, which is the shorthand for the law you're talking about, to impose sanctions, which will cut off countries or companies or persons entirely from the U.S. financial system and cut off trade entirely. If the president can cut off trade entirely, he can certainly impose a tariff, which is a lesser measure than a full sanction.
They would say to us that had I been alive in 1965 during the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I would have done this, I would have done that, I would have done that. So folks, today is your Edmund Pettus Bridge. And we are here fighting for voting rights.
Internet should be simple.
That's G-Fiber. All one price and no rate increase since ever.
So, no fine print hiding in the cart somewhere?
Nope, just dinner.
No tricks, no gimmicks, just great internet. Sign up today at fiber.google.com.
The original foot soldiers, they're still on the ground. They're still on the battlefield. If you don't believe me, raise your cane. Still hunting.
This question from James with Newsmax.
Right here. Right here.
Thank you. James Rosen with Newsmax. Thank you both for doing this. I have two questions for the Secretary. One of them I'll leave for a second, a slightly historical nature, and you are a historian. First, you mentioned in your opening remarks, quite apart from the expansion of the export controls, that China is singularly responsible for propping up the Russian war machine in Ukraine. We also know about the outsized Chinese role in the manufacture of the precursors for the fentanyl that is killing an estimated 100,000 Americans a year. So quite apart from the export control slice of this, should not Beijing feel the full weight of American punishment just for those two other aspects, the fentanyl and the propping up of the war machine? And then one historical question.
Great. So a couple of things. The U.S., President Trump has instructed the ambassador and myself to tell our European allies that we would be in favor of whether you want to call it a Russian oil tariff on China or a Ukrainian victory tariff on China, but our European allies have to be willing to follow. We are sitting here during a government shutdown when we can't get 7 more Democratic senators across the line, but 85 U.S. senators are willing to give President Trump the authority to put up to 500% tariffs on China for the purchase of Russian oil. We are told that the European Parliament will not pass a similar measure. So all I hear from the Europeans is that Putin is coming to Warsaw. There are very few things in life I'm sure about. I'm sure he's not coming to Boston. So we will respond if our European partners will join us. The second, we do have the instance, and then we will take off the tariff. So again, back to the IEPA, if 100,000, 200,000 Americans being killed every year by fentanyl, families ruined, is not an emergency, I'm not sure what is.
And by the way, if the Chinese can cut off rare earths and export control them, they certainly can control the precursors for fentanyl as well.
When the history of this time is written, and historians are paying attention to President Trump's decision-making surrounding the global tariff program that he has initiated, can you tell us, to your knowledge, when it was, whether it was during the campaign or the preceding 4 years or during the transition or since he took office again, that he decided that he was going not only to rely more heavily on tariffs than he did in his first term, but to go as big on tariffs as he has? When was that decision taken?
Well, I think the decision was taken in the first term, and you would have seen President Trump saying that over the past, since January 20th, that he would have a very successful tariff program on China in terms of rebalancing, in terms of purchases that they were supposed to make, which they haven't followed up on. But you heard President Trump say that in his in his final year, the trade deal was reached with China on January 20th. He was going to expand the tariffs to the world, and then COVID hit. And out of humanitarian necessity, it would not have been appropriate to start putting on tariffs during a period of such great economic disruption.
Last year with the U.S. versus Trump, but now you have the nerve.
Meeting immediately after this, so we have time for one question. I'm going to go to the print folks in the back. Dimitri from the FD.
Thank you, Dimitri, Financial Times. Ambassador Greer, I think you said that you don't expect China to implement the rare earths regime that are announced. Is that based on something that the Chinese said to you, or if not, what gives you that confidence? And then secondly, if the Chinese were to say we will delay implementation by, let's say, 6 months or 1 year, would that be enough for you to delay implementation or imposition of 100% tariffs and other countermeasures? Thank you.
So the Chinese obviously will decide what they're going to do, right? That's not up to me. I'm just outlining our expectation for this program. Obviously at a minimum they have to delay it. Our expectation is that this never goes into effect, because you can't. When you look at what happened with the rare earth magnets, they had a similar program that they implemented, and that program, the result was that they couldn't implement it. They didn't have enough people to organize it. Separate and apart from it being just wrong entirely, they actually couldn't implement it, and it took months and months to get the flow of magnets to something that was barely tolerable.
Daytona is the pro's choice for floor jacks and jack stands. Built tough and rigorously tested for fast, efficient lifting and secure support for every job. Daytona, uncompromising quality, exceptional value, only at Harbor Freight.
Right? Now, take that program, which was trying to deal with thousands of license applications, and multiply it by 1,000. That's what we're talking about, because we're not just talking about the rare earths themselves, we're talking about many downstream products that contain those rare earths. Remember, 0.1%. If 0.1% of a product has a Chinese rare earth in it, it could be controlled by this. I mean, the scope and the scale is just unimaginable, and it cannot be implemented.
And Dimitri, to follow up on that, right now we are currently in a 90-day roll on the tariffs. So is it possible that we could go to a longer roll in return for a delay? Perhaps, but all that's going to be negotiated in the coming weeks before the leaders meet in Korea.
Thank you, everybody. With apologies again, they do have to get to another appointment right now. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Who fought in the Vietnam War only to return home to neighborhoods in this very district, communities that were often overlooked and underrepresented, yet he remains one of the fiercest
The room,
champions
please feel free to hold here, and you may file from this room. We do not have Wi-Fi in the U.S. Treasury, but you may use your Wi-Fi cards if that works best for you.
Down to our food and music and how we shape the very soul of this country. I vote because my mother, freshly graduating from Louisiana State University, she decided to move to Atlanta days before Hurricane Katrina hit, seeking safety, opportunity, better education, better access, and new open doors for my future. And that move tells us the story of how many of us have had to leave home to survive, even as our hearts remain rooted in Louisiana. Now more than ever, lawmakers must prioritize upholding voting rights for all people in Louisiana. Let's be clear, this fight is about ensuring that every voter in Louisiana has an equal and fair voice in our democracy, especially those who have been historically excluded from it. This is not about partisanship. It is about fairness, equity, and justice. Louisiana versus Calais represents the latest attempt to weaken the Voting Rights Act by limiting Section 2's standing in the redistricting process. The Voting Rights Act was passed to do away with racial discrimination in our elections, yet in Louisiana, exclusion continues. Inclusive representation isn't just about politics, it's about justice. Inclusive representation is what matters. Louisiana's maps finally honor the promise of the Voting Rights Act by giving black voters a fair chance to choose leaders who reflect their lived experiences and priorities. The outcome of this case will determine whether communities of colors across America can continue to have a meaningful voice in our democracy. So today we urge the court to stand on the right side of history. We urge them to protect and not erode the progress so many of us fought to achieve. Louisiana, and more importantly, the entire nation is watching. The right to vote is the cornerstone of American democracy. And the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is essential in ensuring that every voice can be heard at the ballot box. So I want to go back to why I vote. I vote because our college chapters and our youth councils have thousands of students across the country who are excited about voting. They're eager to learn about how this democracy impacts them. They're actively working toward a better and more sustainable future. But for our youth councils, for our college chapters, our adult branches, our veterans, our hometown heroes, in order for them to be uplifted, we must uphold the legacy of those fierce champions like those I've mentioned, John Lewis, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Medgar Evers. So make no mistake, what happens here will shape what happens everywhere. This decision will signal whether our nation chooses to move forward in the spirit of equality, in the spirit of equity, or backwards into exclusion. Because when Louisiana fights for justice, we are fighting for the future of democracy itself. So I am comforted in knowing that in these times we unite. I'm comforted in knowing in these times we fight. But most importantly, I remember that when we fight, we win. I said when we fight, we win. Thank you. It was stand on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind. Stand on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind. Stand on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
My name is Bobby Scott. Excuse my voice. I've had a little cold. Bobby Scott, I'm a member of the House of Representatives representing the 3rd District in Virginia, the ranking member on education and workforce. And let me tell you, they have been attacking our civil rights since the beginning of this administration, and the voting rights are the most important right we have. We need to make the voting rights that the legislative branch.
Wow, you finally replied to a text message from 3 weeks ago. You deserve the sweet and tangy reward of a new prickly pear raspberry Whataburger from Whataburger. Thumbs up emoji.
An icicle treat for every small feat. Whataburger.
And you can count on us on fighting from start to finish. So thank you for coming out and letting people know they're not going to take away our voting rights and let us just watch. We're going to fight tooth and nail all the way. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Raul Valley, politics reporter for WABE. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Lateral Milk Young debate series from the studios of WABE. The 2025 debate series is made possible by a grant to the Atlanta Press Club from the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation. This is the debate among the candidates for Atlanta City Council President. Let's meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Rohit Malhotra. He's the founder and executive director of the Civic Center for Innovation. And Marcy Collier Overstreet. She has served on the Atlanta City Council for District 11 since 2018. Now let's meet our panelists. Riley Bunch is an Atlanta City Hall reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Patrick Quinn is a reporter for Atlanta News First. For complete rules of today's program, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, candidates will each be asked one question by both of the panelists. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer their questions. We're going to start with Riley Bunch with her question for Marcy Collier Overstreet.
Councilmember Overstreet, the city faced a nearly $30 million or more than $30 million budget deficit last year. A lot of that was attributed to police overtime spending, but it led to departmental cuts and even layoffs inside City Hall. If elected, what would you do to ensure that the city doesn't face another budget shortfall?
Thank you for that question. Serving on City Council for the past 8 years has been a complete pleasure, and I've actually participated actively in the last 8 budgets. The City of Atlanta is in excellent standing. We have a AAA bond rating, and I will continue to do the work to make sure that we remain AAA in our bond rating. We have the highest regarded police department in the city of Atlanta, and we are adjusting our overtime and looking at our vacancies. We actually have a vacancy review board now, and I will make sure that in the next budget cycle as council president, I'll continue to make sure we uphold our AAA bond rating. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. Patrick Quinn, your turn to ask a question to Rohit Malhotra.
Mr. Malhotra, question for you. You've talked about how if you were elected council president, you want it to be way more than just running meetings, that you want it to be an independent office centralized in public policy. That being said, the position, it must be very collaborative by nature. So as someone who has not worked in local government, how do you plan to build those relationships that allow you to collaborate with the mayor, with the city council, and with the community?
Thank you. This is such an important conversation at a time where local media is under attack. I'm so glad we can still have conversations like this. I have spent my entire career in public service. I don't think your experience is measured by how long you've been in politics, but instead how long you've been doing the work. Over the past 10 years, I've been running an organization called the Center for Civic Innovation that has worked with just about every single council member on tough policy issues. 2 examples include one on the budget, which was just asked about, where we actually dissected the budget, that we can catch things like a $30 million shortfall, that we can catch those things well ahead of time if we're able to look at the intricate details of the budget. The second part that we've done is we did a review of the neighborhood planning unit system, Atlanta's historic system of community engagement. This is work that I am proud of, and I see this as a policy role just as the last. All of the other city council presidents see this role as a role that is supposed to be focused on public policy independently from any other office.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We're going to stay with you. Your question for Marcy Collier Overstreet.
Councilmember Collier Overstreet, last week, I know you heard about this, Mayor Andre Dickens announced a new $5 billion initiative to invest into neighborhoods. It would require extending all 8 TADs to fund that. You've been very critical over your time on council about the More MARTA program and the project list of where it was and where it is now, and seeing that level of execution. My question to you is, first, do you support extending all 8 TADs as part of this neighborhood initiative? And secondly, how would you ensure that a list or any sort of plans that are announced on the foreground are actually followed through?
I took control, went solo, and built my own online knife empire. I loved being a chef, but working in someone else's kitchen just wasn't cutting it for me. So I ordered 200 hand-forged knives to my dorm room and built a Wix website to sell them. Just like crafting the perfect knife, creating a polished website takes real precision. When you own the details, you own the results. Wix gave me that control. And the impact? Forbes 30 under 30, $1 million in revenue, and I'm just getting started. I don't just make knives, I forge my own path.
Map creation. Hydroxycut Hardcore Shredding Stack is here. Choose between powerful capsules or convenient drink sticks. Trusted by those who push harder and engineered to shred calories fast. Hardcore energy that hits fast and lasts. Save $5 with Walmart cash.
Thank you for that question. First of all, I would like to say that there's not been enough information and presentation done to council about the TAD extension for me to actually have an opinion about what the mayor is actually socializing right now. I think there are more conversations that need to be had with those that share the TAD with us. That would be APS and Fulton County, and I'm willing to be as collaborative as I've always been while on council to have those conversations about TADs. I am one of the council members that actually agreed to close a TAD before, and I think that it is necessary for us to look at our TADs, but the main reason that the mayor is doing the roundabout, talking about TADs, is surrounding equity and building economic mobility throughout all of our neighborhoods in the city of Atlanta. So we can't just focus on the TADs. We need to focus on exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish with those TAD extensions if that happens.
And to wrap up our first round, Riley Bunch, your question for Rohit Malhotra.
Mr. Malhotra, I think it's safe to say that we're seeing an unprecedented level of federal overreach into local governments right now. Atlanta has lost a lot of funding coming from the Trump administration, coming out of the White House. What do you see as council's role in responding to these decisions and kind of backstopping where we might not have federal support that we had before?
Yeah, the role of city council president is to make sure that it is a public advocate, that it makes sure that small businesses and neighborhoods and community organizations, that they have a voice inside of City Hall. We cannot just expect City Hall to go to people. We have to make sure that City Hall is a place where people can come and feel heard. Right now, what the Trump administration is doing is targeting cities where there is a divide between people that is being carved between progressives and people who are trying to move things forward. I think it is extremely important for in a time like now to make sure that we are coming together to be able to create a shield for community-based organizations, for the services that people depend on, to be able to find alternative funding sources, because we know that those funding sources are under attack. I think this is where we have to also get very creative. Over the past decade of my work, I have raised millions of dollars for community-based organizations to make sure that we can protect their work, even in light of attacks. We cannot just address these things and respond in the moment. We have to prepare for the long run.
Thank you so much. That concludes our first round. In this second round, candidates will ask a question to each other.
That's correct.
Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask the question, and then the opponent has 60 seconds to respond, then a 30-second rebuttal from the person who asked the question. By random selection, Rohit Malhotra, you get to ask the first question to Marcy Collier Overstreet.
Okay, thank you. You're running an ad boasting about an endorsement from a council member who called black people in your district thugs and felons. You stayed silent. You've hosted and sponsored multiple Black History lunches with MAGA Republican Burt Jones, but when he tried to strip Black history out of our schools, you stayed silent. And most recently, a senior member of your campaign sent emails targeting me and threatening my family's public safety, and you stayed silent. Why do you stay silent when it is politically convenient?
Louisiana was
so actually, none of that is accurate. I am a black woman raised by the city that I love very much, and I actually have black children and a black husband. So I have not been one that would be silent about any type of racism that would happen around the city of Atlanta. So those are incorrect facts, and I would never stay silent. I will always speak up for those that need us the most. On the other hand, I would like for you to talk about why you would like to be so divisive in your campaign in making sure that you are not paying attention or talking about the actual events that are happening around the city of Atlanta. Being divisive is a smokescreen, but you and no one else will ever be able to call me racist or staying silent when we're talking about people that I know well and I love. So that is incorrect. I would hope you do a little more research.
Mr. Malhotra, 30 seconds.
Yeah, this is all demonstrable, and none of those questions were actually answered. The council member that we're referring to, both of the past two mayors have showed that when that has happened. Burt Jones, if that is your friend and you're happy to stand next to him, that's your choice. And when it comes to those attacks that were done done by email. It has been denounced by community and social justice organizations around the city. This is not about identity. This is about issues. I am not trying to be divisive. These are the things that make us divisive, is that when we split people and we tear people apart by using identity as a political tool.
Before I was preventing migraine with Qulipta, it was hard keeping plans. Now I consider volunteering more often. Guess who signed up to chaperone your field trips? Really? You'll never truly forget migraine, but Qulipta reduces attacks, making more zero migraine days possible.
Don't take if allergic. Stop taking and get help right away for allergic reactions like trouble breathing, face, lip, or tongue swelling, itching, or rash. Tell your doctor about increased blood pressure or color changes, pain, or numbness in fingers or toes.
Ask your doctor about Qulipta, but forget you get migraine medicine.
Zero helps me take my business anywhere I want.
An incumbent like core retention can continue to perpetuate
now,
discrimination.
Marcy Collier Overstreet, you may ask your question to Rohit Malhotra.
Thank you. Given that your company, CCI, reported nearly a $400,000 loss in 2024 to the IRS, has lost money in the last 3 or 4 years, yet you've given yourself a 200% raise over the years, and you've funded companies and organizations such as Community Movement Builders that brought over 30,000 ping pongs to throw at city council members. How can you and your positions and your record not be considered public safety hazards?
Okay, so please go to guidestar.org. You can check our tax, you can look at all of our tax records. Our tax records go. I am so proud of the work that I've done at the Center for Civic Innovation. And I think it's ironic that we try to denounce Trump nationally, but we use his political tactics locally, which is to just cherry pick the data that's convenient for you to be able to say. We have given out millions of dollars to Black-led organizations in this city who are working on issues of food insecurity, who are working on issues that really matter for people today. And this initiative that you're referencing, we actually gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to Black-led organizations during the height of the election year in 2021, where we elected 2 Democratic senators to this city. And these efforts and initiatives were meant to help fund people being educated about the elections. And almost every elected official has participated in those processes, which is what you're supposed to do during election years. It is very important that we get our facts straight. I'm proud of the endorsements that I have. I'm proud to earn the support of community every single step of the way. I'm proud of the work of the Center for Civic Innovation.
Marcy Collier Overstreet, 30 seconds to
Thank you. Sounds like you probably actually gave away a little bit too much of that $1 million. You probably should have left a little more so that you would not have left $400,000 deficit in your company. And I would also like to add that just because you say it's true doesn't make it so. Doesn't make it so. So you should probably keep your day job and figure out how not to have a crumbling business.
Whether they vote in a way that is polarized.
That concludes our second round. This is the Atlanta Press Club debate between the candidates for Atlanta City Council President. We'll now go to our third and final round, and in this round, our panelists will return and ask a question to the candidate or candidates of their choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may ask a question of the candidates, and will also determine if a rebuttal is appropriate or a follow-up from our reporters. We'll start with Patrick Quinn from Atlanta News First.
And I will say,
first question in this round.
Thank you. This is a question for both of you. This is the portion of our program where we talk about the Public Safety Training Center. I know that you have talked about it before. It's certainly one of the most controversial, contentious issues that this city has seen in the last recent years. Marcy Collier Overstreet, I know you were on council at the time when this project was approved and carried out. And Mr. Malhotra, I know that you were a fierce critic of it at the time. I guess my question's for both of y'all. Councilmember Overstreet, I'll let you start with it since you were on council at the time. Outside of the project, just focusing on the process of how it was carried out, for a lot of people in the public, they lost some trust and belief in the council and how it was orchestrated. Looking back at how it happened, what would you have changed? And for the next contentious issue, what would you do differently?
And for each of you, 1 minute. We'll begin with Marcy Collier Overstreet.
Thank you. I'm not proud of the process. I am one that will actually own up when something didn't go correct. And I'm not proud of the process at all. I do believe that the City of Atlanta stands strongly behind the Public Safety Training Center. That is why I voted yes. I was a strong advocate for the Public Safety Training Center. I also advocated in real time during full council for those signatures to be counted, as well as for them to be on a public website. I also advocated for a referendum that would ask the City of Atlanta residents, would they actually support the Public Safety Training Center being built? And what I do know for sure is that the polling show that crime is top of mind for all Atlanta residents. When people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. And I do believe that the Public Safety Training Center is the reason why many are asking to, and I mean many jurisdictions are asking for MOUs, and our recruitment is up. We're having well-trained officers on our streets.
Mr. Malhotra, you get a minute to the same question.
Suggestion would swallow Section 2
This is
whole.
what people are
As
tired
I
of
said,
in politics.
party
Revisionist
cannot
history.
trump the
process
responsibility
of how the
states to
training
ensure
facility
that
was
all
built
voters
has
have
everyone
an
agrees on
equally
this.
open electoral
That
process.
it was not only
The fact that
not done well,
black
but
voters
that there were
may
plenty of
correlate with
opportunities for
voting
council to step
Democrat
in
or
to
white
make it
voters
better.
may correlate with
It's funny when
voting
council members say that they would
does
have
not deny
made
the
sure that
fact
people had the
that
right to decide, but
there
never
is
once introduced
racially
legislation
polarized voting,
to make sure that could
and the
happen.
totality of the circumstances,
Dr. Bernice
including
King,
the
LaTosha Brown, Ms. Helen
inability to
Butler,
elect
and I
black
wrote a letter
candidates in
to
Louisiana on a
council
statewide
asking them to
basis
let the people
for
decide.
a
And
number of
there
offices.
was
There's
no
never
response
been a black
from just
person in
only a couple
Louisiana
folks who were able to say,
elected
we're going to try our
statewide. Is
best.
additional
And when we talk
indicia
about making
that
sure that
race is
the
playing an
petitions were
outsized role
counted,
in the
that
electoral
was,
process
we
in Louisiana.
doxed 116,000
And so the
people
idea
by
that
putting their
you
names and addresses
have to
online. We've
show
never
that
had an
a
honest
party,
conversation, and we
that
put
party
police
is the
officers
reason
in the middle
for
of a
the
debate
racially
that they did not
polarized
sign
voting
up for.
would
This is
eclipse
not
the
a
entire
conversation
Section 2
about policing.
analysis,
It's
which
one
is
that is
focused on
about
ferreting
land and
out
power.
and
And we
ending
need to be more
race
honest about
discrimination
what
in the political
happened during that process, because this is why the public has lost their
It's
trust.
playing an outsized role.
It's okay. I'll just grab the backup stakes.
What's the
Backup
proper
stakes.
size?
How do you afford that money bag?
Is it wiggle room we're talking about? Or
The lowest prices of any national grocery
percentage?
store.
Fair enough.
What is meant
It's
by
an all
outsized?
So this
I'm right about a lot of things people have zero clue that they even know is going on.
Okay. These are my work clothes. In the districting process, what becomes potentially unlawful.
Yes. Council member, would you like another 30 seconds on this?
Yes, please.
Versus Johnson taught us.
Mr. Rohit really needs to own up. Rohit. Mr. Rohit should really own up to the fact that he actually funded groups that wants to defund or abolish the police department. He absolutely should own up to that. And those are the facts. This is what he would like. He actually sponsored for them to come to City Hall and throw ping pong balls at City Council. That's not leadership. That is not leadership.
I want to give you one more rebuttal, 30 seconds on this, sir.
Yes, we have a revisionist history once again. Remember, the words defund the police, which I have never said, actually came after George Floyd was murdered. And people were asking for changes in policing. And everyone agreed there was public outcry around this issue. And yes, there are a number of organizations, a lot of them black-led organizations, who have been talking about this forever. What does a world look like? What does safety look like without always only talking about policing only? Policing is a part of a comprehensive strategy. It doesn't have to be the only one. And to create a false binary is not only wrong, it's dangerous.
Thank you so much. Raleigh Bunch, your question to the candidate or candidates of your choice.
This question is also for both candidates and transitioning to transit a little bit. So Mayor Dickens recently announced that he would like to start construction of Beltline Rail along the South Side Trail. This comes after years of expectations that it might start on the east side. I'm wondering what both your stances are on this decision and whether or not you support Beltline Rail across the entire 22-mile loop.
this round, we'll start with Rohit Malhotra.
Yes, I think when we make a promise to the public, we are supposed to keep it. I think when we campaign on things, we are supposed to do those things that we say we are going to do. And if we're not able to do it, we have to offer a transparent and data-driven explanation to the public on why it didn't happen. And when we delay on things like transit over time, of course it becomes more expensive. Of course it becomes more inconvenient. We cannot now volley this project and say, okay, well now we're going to get it right on another side of town. The whole point of the Beltline was for it to be an equity project and a transit project, to make sure that people on the south side of the city could get to the economic zones that were being created, the ones that we developed out that now we're saying we're not even going to put transit there. I think this is often what happens, is that people self-tax themselves. People said, I am willing to even pay more to be able to get transit within my lifetime. And every single time we are closer to that goal, we switch it up and say we're going to do another study. It's not like the Southside Trail is going to be built overnight, and what I worry is it's just another delayed promise.
Marcy Collier Overstreet, 1 minute of your time on Riley's question.
Thank you. Being a retiree of Delta Airlines, our very own Delta Airlines, and being the vice chair for the Transportation Committee for the past 8 years, I've had quite a few Beltline Rail conversations, and I'm a Beltline fan. Yes, I do believe that Beltline Rail will happen on all 22 miles of our City of Atlanta's Beltline, and I think that'll be a good thing. What I am advocating for is innovative ways for that to actually prosper, and I do believe that that is going to happen. That's the latest conversation. Now, I would love for everyone to continue to have these conversations and advocate for rail on the Beltline. It can look different in different spots, but I do believe that in that transportation corridor, we should absolutely explore all areas, north, south, east, and west Beltline. All 22 miles deserve for it to be a full transit corridor as it's meant to be.
Thank you so much. We're continuing our third round of questions coming from both of our panelists. Patrick Quinn, the question to the candidate or candidates of your choice.
We'll go for both of y'all again. One of the main priorities for Council President is to determine who leads each committee. How will you, Marcy, we'll start with Councilmember Overstreet, we'll start with you. How would you pick who's going to lead each committee to ensure there's not a consolidation of power, or there's a balance, that different viewpoints are really represented across the committee structure?
Great question. And that is not something that's easy to do. What you would have to do is make sure that you had really good relationships in all of the council districts with all of the council members. And that is what I've done for the past 8 years. It is important for you to know that I've been a collaborator, a consensus builder, and a communicator on City Council for the entire 8 years. When Doug Shipman announced that he was not running for council president, I didn't readily think that I would be interested in being the council president, but the relationships that I've developed while on council and going to those council members, asking them, why do you vote the way you vote? What is happening in your district? What type of legislation is important to you? Those are the things that makes a president understand better who is well suited for what. You can change the trajectory of a city with the wrong appointments for council president. Would I, for example, decide who should be...
Sorry, didn't see you there. I was checking my Acorns account. Decided to start investing $500 a month, and now my future potential is looking pretty wild.
In and of itself.
My bad.
It is the mechanism by which the law determines...
Hydroxycut Hardcore Shredding Stack is here. Save $5 today with Walmart Cash. Drive explosive energy, lock and focus, and power every rep toward a lean, defined physique.
A check-in. It's like a
Boost
tool.
your intensity and feel stronger and more confident than ever. Choose your hardcore, powerful capsules, or convenient drink sticks. Trusted by those who push harder and engineered to shred calories fast. Hardcore energy that hits fast and lasts. Save $5 today with Walmart Walmart cash.
Well, I'm out of time, but yes, I think that's an important question. Thank you.
Mr. Malhotra, your 1 minute of your time on this question around committee heads, something that the council president does.
Yes, I think this question highlights the very importance of the independence of the city council president. The city council president doesn't report to the mayor, does not report to the council, it reports to the people. And I think that we have to make sure that committee assignments are not exchanged for favor or are done in a way that just rubber stamps what the executive branch of government wants to do. It has to be independent. And so when I think about committees, I think about three things. The first thing I think about is expertise. So if you are on the finance committee, but you have never actually done a budget before, it is important that you have the expertise to be able to deliver on the very committee that you are on. The second thing that is very important is perspective and geography. We want to make sure that there is equitable representation across everything. You don't want to have one committee that has only one part of town represented and the other part of town feels like they cannot be heard because legislation can't move through that committee. And the last thing that I think we need to look at is conflict of interest. If you are taking money, for example, from people who get security contracts and you are on the public safety committee, it is unusual and unethical for you to be able to serve on those committees. So I think you should check people's disclosures if they publish them.
I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question here in the final round. Riley Bunch, your question to the candidate or candidates of your choice.
And this is for both candidates. Again, Raul, please speed up if we need to. This is on a very specific issue that's going to come up with the next council cohort is the city detention center. So the city has an agreement with Fulton County to lease beds in that detention center, which is up soon within the next year. Advocates are calling for a withdrawal of Fulton County inmates from that center. Would you both support the withdrawal of the inmates and ending the lease agreement at the time that it was supposed to?
So to keep this on time, Mr. Malhotra, 45 seconds on this, please.
Got it. Yes. We promised the public that this detention center would be shut down. And continuously, council, for the past 8 years, has continued to make decisions and break its promise to the public. You can't just call it the John Lewis Center for Rehabilitation and then not do and practice the words of John Lewis. This is where we could have had a center by now that is actually providing direct services to people, mental health services, healthcare services to people, alternative services. Instead, we're talking about whether people want to defund the police or not, but we're defunding diversion. We have continued to not make this diversion center what it was supposed to be. Community organizations, civil rights organizations have had to beg for their voices to be heard on this. The city of Atlanta needs to get out of the jailing business as it promised to do.
Councilmember Overstreet, 45 seconds on that.
Thank you. So I strongly believe that our city is smart enough to be a both-and city. And I do believe that, again, collaboration is important and extremism should not be the way of the future for our city. We should make sure that we're constantly collaborating with Fulton County because you can't be in Atlanta and not be a Fulton County resident or a DeKalb County resident. We have to collaborate with everyone. So no, we don't dictate exactly what happens and it's this or else, and we don't defund it's this or else. We make sure that we stay in a collaborative state. We can do both. The city of Atlanta deserves a leader that knows how to collaborate and knows how to have both services and make sure that we collaborate with Fulton County.
That is all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much to our panelists. 60 seconds for each candidate to make a closing statement by random selection. Marcy Collier Overstreet, 60 seconds.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I want to thank the Atlanta Press Club and WABE for allowing us to do this here today. Atlanta deserves a leader that is both principled and proven. I've delivered over 2,500 affordable units in just my district. That is over 10% of our city's mandate of 20,000 affordable units before the year 2030. I brought fresh food access to the city of Atlanta with a partnership with the City of Atlanta and municipalities. And I've also championed public safety, which is going to make a difference in the lives of everyone. My work reflects a deep commitment to the city that raised me. It shows equity and access. Meanwhile, my opponent saw nearly a $400,000 loss in his nonprofit, yet he wants to run our city. And it is important that everyone knows that leadership doesn't look looks like 30,000 ping pong balls being thrown at City Council. I am Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet, and I'm asking for your vote for leadership.
Rohit Malhotra, 1 minute for your closing statement.
Yeah, it seems like these ping pong balls really hurt your feelings. I'm very, very excited to be running for this role because I think it is time for a new generation of leadership that is willing to be bold and transformative. If two people are in a relationship and they just agree on everything, one of those people is unnecessary. We need to make sure that the legislative branch remains independent from the executive branch of government. I love this city, and the way that I show my love for this city is through public policy. This is what I have dedicated my entire life to, is public service. I've worked with nonprofit organizations, which is why I understand things like balance sheets and why they may have losses in one year and gains in other years, especially when you are distributing capital to community-based organizations. I've been proud to have started an organization that has been recognized around the country. But what I'm fighting for as the next city council president is around affordability, making sure we're addressing things like you cannot say everything is working or the status quo is working for people when we have the highest income inequality gap in the United States. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and it is my excitement to serve.
Thank you so much. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters Election Day is Tuesday, November the 4th. Early voting begins October the 14th. We'd like to please ask you to check your polling location for dates and hours for early voting. Our thanks to the candidates and panelists of journalists today. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and WABE for organizing today's debate, and a special thanks to the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation for their support of our debates. For more information about the debates, go to atlantapressclub.org to see other debates we're hosting this season. I'm Raul Bally with WABE. Thanks for joining the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.
Is appropriate. One, Louisiana has said that the use of race in any way violates the Equal Protection Clause. Would you give us a couple of lines on why those, assuming, as the chief did, that Mulligan and all of our cases and precedents support you? The others are now saying, your adversaries are saying, even if it does, we should still declare this unconstitutional. I don't know that you can address that.
Happy to. So SFFA is an entirely different case from the one
I'm Claire
before
Sims,
the
a
court
reporter
at the
for
moment.
Fox 5 here in Atlanta.
SFFA
Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.
It is still constitutional.
This is a debate among
to
Democratic
use
candidates for
to
Secretary of
remedy
State. Let's
specified
meet the candidates for the debate.
discrimination, which is what we have in the state of Louisiana, what we showed before the Robinson Court. So SFFA is in fact working more in our favor, we believe, than supporting our opponents. And there are many distinctions between this case and the SFFA case. For example, Section 2 is a decidedly remedial statute. SFFA involved the diversity rationale involving an admissions process with a university, not a statute that is derived from Congress's enforcement powers under the Reconstruction Amendment that deals with remedying discrimination. That is a very clear distinction. This court has been clear in Shaw, in SFFA, in Croson, and Fulop that you can use race in a limited way to remedy racial discrimination. The other factor that makes SFFA reconcilable with Milligan, which is controlling here, is that we know both decisions were issued within 3 weeks of one another. It is illogical to think that this court issued the SFFA decision and Milligan in the same term, in the same month even, and somehow those cases work at cross purposes with one another. So in our view, it is very clear that the case law before this court supports the use of race as needed once there has been a showing of specified discrimination. And the Section 2 test gives the court an inference of intentional discrimination to draw upon. Congress was very intentional in crafting the results test to balance the concerns of getting at all discrimination in our electoral processes, but also being mindful of a potential allegation of racism against states and other
what's
state
the
actors.
concerns
And so
of the
Section 2
citizens
requires neither a
about
confession nor an
elections.
accusation of racism.
And
It looks
then we
strictly
will
at results, which this
implement
court
that
has
plan
upheld
because
on
I think
numerous
it's very
occasions,
important
including
for the
most recently
citizens
in
to
Milligan,
determine
but before that in
what is
Lopez,
wrong
in
with
Bernie,
the present law
in City of
that,
Rome, written by
that
Justice
was,
Marshall
that's in
for
place.
this court, made very clear that results is
Mark, it's your turn to
constitutional
ask
and
a
that the use
question
of
to
race
Johnny.
is permissible in
Mr.
remedying
Reeves, you've talked
discrimination.
about your experience as chairman of the Fulton
Justice
County
Kagan?
Commission. I'd like to hear
Ms.
of a
Dawson,
specific policy,
were,
something that
Section
you
2
would
to
do
cease
if you
to
were elected
operate in the
Secretary of
way
State
that you
that's within
just
your power
described
if you
to
were elected to that
prevent,
position.
vote dilution.
So thank you so
in
much,
districting.
Mark, for the question. So as you indicated, yes, I was
What could
chairman of
happen?
Fulton
What
County
would the
for 11
results on the
years
ground
and
be?
did a lot of great things,
I think
especially
the
in the
results would be
area of
pretty
voting.
catastrophic. If we
Very
take
proud of the fact
Louisiana
that
as one
we
example,
actually increased voter
every
participation,
congressional member who is
during my
black was
watch as
elected
chairman of
from
Fulton
a
County.
VRA
350
opportunity
precincts,
district. We
$69
only
million
have the diversity
budget.
that we see
And so
across
we did a
the
good
South,
job.
for
So
example,
as Secretary of
because
State,
of
I
litigation
will
that forced the
specifically
creation
come up with
of
standard
opportunity
operating
districts
procedures.
under the Voting Rights
Fulton
Act.
County is very progressive in terms of the
justice
number of
in
precincts that we
Louisiana
had. That was
has
great.
been
But that's
elected
unacceptable in
through
terms
a
of some of the
VRA
smaller
opportunity district, and
counties that
nearly
have a
all
lot fewer
legislative
precincts. So I will
representatives
come up with
have been
more
elected on those
standardization,
same
more
districts. So
consistency
Louisiana
across the
alone
board,
is an
standard
example
operating
of how
procedures
important it
in
is
terms
to
of
have
how each
Section
county
2
on the
continue to
local
be
level
enforced
can
to create
execute its
these
elections
opportunities.
in the most
We also
efficient
know that
and the
after
most,
majority-minority
outreachive
districts
and
have been
inclusive
created,
way,
they often
throughout the state
no
of Georgia.
longer need the
Thank you.
same
Stanley, your
population to
question for
continue to
D.
provide an
Taylor.
equally open electoral
seen that a
process
lot of people,
for
whether
minority
you
voters.
believe the
So it is an
election,
intervention that has been crucial
results
to
are valid or not,
diversifying
a lot of people
leadership
question,
and providing an ability of minority
confidence in the
voters
election
to have an
system.
equal opportunity
How,
to participate
Secretary
in
of
the
State, would
process.
you
But
try
it
to,
also isn't a
kind of
permanent
bridge that
remedy.
gap
It
and
it corrects
make people
itself
believe
over
that the
time,
results are
and it's
valid and
only
fair?
triggered when those
And thank you
extreme
for that
conditions
question.
exist.
And so
Thank you.
the Secretary of
Justice
State has the job of making sure that they work with
when
all
it gets to the remedy
159
side,
county boards of election
do you
to
think
make
a
sure
plaintiff in Section
that they can
2
run the most
case has to
efficient
come
elections
up
that
with
they
a-
are.
a map
But let's
where
be
race
very
doesn't-
clear.
isn't
The
the
big lie
predominant
that's out there
factor
now that the
in the
election
map,
was
or
not
is it okay
fair
for
or
a
that it
federal
was not
court
true
to
is just that,
use
a
a
big
map
lie.
on
We
the
have had
remedial
numerous
side,
recounts. We have dealt with
that
millions of
intentionally
dollars being
discriminates on the
spent
basis of race.
on a fallacious tale that led to the January 6th
You do not
insurrection.
have to use
So as
race to
Secretary
create
of
the remedy
State, I will
in
make
a
sure
map,
that I
and
increase
think
the
that
budget
I'm asking
as it
whether
relates
one
to
can.
education, so that
Sometimes you don't
people
have
who
to.
are
Yes,
voters will
I understand
understand that your vote
I'm
is
asking,
sacred and
is
that
it
your vote is
acceptable under
protected,
Section 2
and that I will
as
do
you
a good job
understand it,
working with all
given our
of the
precedents,
boards of election,
for
as
a
well
court
as
to
the constituents
intentionally
across the state of
discriminate
Georgia,
in a remedial map
especially
on the
those
basis of
who are
race.
in the African American
Not
community
not
whose
in
votes are
those words,
continuously
not for a
being
court to intentionally
suppressed
discriminate,
to
but
make
I think
sure
it
that their
depends.
votes are
There may
counted.
be a circumstance
Mark, you get the next question
where
to be
the
with.
only possible
Yes.
remedy is
Are
the
you
limited
concerned
use
about,
of race.
or
I
how
will say that
concerned
I
are
think
you
those
about
circumstances
cybersecurity threats to
are
Georgia's
rare.
voting
And
system? There has
the
been
permissibility of race
outside
is
experts who have
constrained
said
by
that
strict
there is
scrutiny.
the potential
This court
possibility
has a
that they
very
could,
clear
under the right circumstances, be hacked.
precedent
And
around
if you are concerned,
ensuring that race does not
would that
motivate
what is the solution?
line
Should
drawer
we
in a
switch
way
as a
that
state to hand-marked paper
requires
ballots?
a map to be drawn that isn't
Thank you for the
narrowly
question,
tailored,
Mark.
that
In
uses
2019,
race
when
for
we
race's
debated
sake,
House Bill
there are already constraints
316,
between jingles
every
and
election
Shaw
expert and
that keep the
cybersecurity
use of
expert
race
told us
within
that
constitutional
hand-marked paper
bounds.
ballots
Understand
with an
that,
audible
but,
trail is the
one
most secure
argument is
form of
often,
voting.
well, once you've
And
found a
I support
Section 2
that, which is why
violation,
I fought so hard for that
you've got a
system in
compelling interest
2019.
to go ahead
That being
and
said,
discriminate on the
the
basis
results of the
race
2020
in
election
your
are
remedial
still
map.
the same.
And I'm just
We've done
wondering, do you
3
endorse that
recounts.
view, or
We've done
won an audit, and Georgians delivered a win for the presidency.
I don't endorse the concept
As Secretary
of
of State, I
discriminating
would
on the basis
advocate
of race
to
if
moving
discrimination has been
towards a
established under
hand-marked paper
Section
ballot
2
system with
and
an
a
auditable
state
trail
determines
where
that it
voters are
needs
able to
a
discern
very
who they are
precise
voting for.
incision of
Although I
race in
understand
order
that would
to
require
remedy that
passage
Section
through the
2
General
violation,
Assembly,
then Section
and
2
I would
and this
fight
court's
to ensure
precedent
that we have
supports
secure
that.
and safe
So a federal
elections in the
district
state of
court
Georgia.
can sometimes.
All right,
to
Stanley, you
remedy
get the
a
final
Section 2
question.
Well, not a federal district. I'm sorry. I'm glad you emphasized that.
If I might just finish the question.
Yes.
You know, sometimes federal district courts order maps.
Campaign is to
And you're saying
resolve and
sometimes
fix what you
acceptable for
consider
a
as a
federal
great
district
risk
court to
or
order a map
threats
that
to our
intentionally
system. What's the
discriminates
greatest
on the basis
risk,
of race.
and what steps would you take
I
to
disagree with that formulation.
The greatest risk
first and
to, as it relates
foremost,
to cybersecurity to our election
states
systems, that we
and
have people
plaintiffs, as they put
in
forth
office that
illustrative
don't
maps,
understand the
cannot
threats and
put forth
challenges we have
maps
when it comes to
that
cybersecurity.
discriminate
We have seen
and
threats from
that
foreign
use
actors
race
such as
in
China and
an
Russia,
excessive
and we now
fashion.
unfortunately
The
have
only
domestic
actor
terrorists
that
that are
has
at
broader
our backs
leeway
trying to
are
manipulate the
states.
election system.
system.
because we give
have to
states
ensure that we're doing everything
breathing
we can
room.
to make
We
sure
give states
our
wide
elections are free,
latitude in
fair,
order to
safe,
balance their
and secure.
political interests
As Secretary
and
of State, that's what I
concerns.
look
So
forward to
federal
doing.
district
I
courts
understand
can't
the
discriminate on the
background. I was
basis of
named one of
race
the top
and remedies,
100
but states
cybersecurity
can.
professionals in the world.
Federal
I am one of
district
those
courts
experts.
can
I want
only
to throw my
order
life's work
maps
into
that
being the
are
next Secretary of State
constitutional.
because I do understand
And
that everyone's
again,
vote
the
has to matter.
constitutional
And more
boundaries are
importantly,
between
everyone
Jingles
has
and
to have
Shaw,
trust
which
and faith in our
sometimes
election
frustrates.
States have more
system. That is the
breathing room,
cornerstone
so
of our
they have
democracy.
breathing room
Right now,
to
not only from a
intentionally
Democratic
discriminate on the
perspective, but
basis of
Republicans
race.
everywhere on
They don't
every
have
side of the
breathing room
aisle
to
have
intentionally
concerns about
discriminate
what's
on the
going
basis
on.
of race.
I'm
They
going to
have
make sure I
breathing
do
room
everything
to
I can
use
end
race
to end
to
our
remedy their
entire
own
election
discrimination.
system to ensure that all voters' information is safe and
Hang
secure.
out there is
Thank
the word
you.
discriminate.
That concludes the first
but
round of our
your
debate.
answer
The
is that they
candidates will
can
now ask a
intentionally
question
use
to an
race
opponent of their
in those
choice.
circumstances,
Each candidate will have
correct?
30
That's
seconds
this
to ask the
part.
question,
If needed.
60
If
seconds
needed.
to
And
respond,
there
and then the candidate who asked the question
often a
will have
wide
30
range of
seconds for a
possibilities and
rebuttal.
alternatives
By random
that don't
selection,
require
we
that.
win. You may
And
ask the
then
first
I think you
question.
said so long as it's not
Thank you so much.
excessive,
My
and you
question
mentioned
is
strict
for
scrutiny
Senator Floyd, my
as
friend.
well,
You
correct?
served in the
Correct.
Georgia Senate,
Part
and
of
I've served in the Georgia
scrutiny,
House,
again, is
and
the
I
temporal
recognize
limit
and
that's been
value the
part of
importance
strict
of how our
scrutiny
legislative
for a
experience
long time. I
matters
think
to
your
this
answers
race with
earlier
the
to
Secretary
that,
of State,
to me,
and
when
understanding
you were
how to
talking with
navigate
Justice
236
Jackson, where, well,
different personalities
Congress
that are very
defer to
strong.
Congress,
Can you
but
share with us
when we're
why you
applying
think
the
your
Equal
experience
Protection
as a
Clause, or
lawmaker
as
has
Justice
been
Barrett
important
said,
for
the
you in this
15th
role?
Amendment,
Wow, that's a great question.
Proportionality or 14th
And
Amendment.
I ask you all to visit my
deferring to
website,
Congress is, I think, not what we're supposed to
floydforgeorgia.com,
do. So
and
what,
it will
if we're not just deferring to
give
Congress,
you the background of
is there anything
me
you can point
being
us to
not only
that would
in the Georgia
not
legislature,
allow
but my
it to
entire
extend forever?
career as a
The
retired Army
intentional use
colonel,
of race, which you
serving in
acknowledge in
Vietnam,
response to Justice
and
Gorsuch.
as the
Sure.
mayor
Well, we maintain that there
of
does not need to be a
Millersville.
durational limit,
So
but there
that,
is some guidance that this court
those
could
years
consider.
I
So, for
served
example,
in the
in
legislature
Grutter, the court,
was
Justice O'Connor,
absolutely
suggested that
what's
affirmative action
needed
did not need to endure
as a Secretary
beyond
of
another
State
25 years.
to
She
make
forecast that
changes
another
as I
generation
move along
might need
on,
affirmative action, and
on my,
ultimately this court
vision
thought otherwise
to
in
improve and
SFFA.
make
So
the
that sort of
Secretary of
runway,
State
that advance
the best
notice,
Secretary of State
that
operations in the
expression of
Representative
an
Wynn, you get
ability
30
for
seconds.
Congress to
Thank
intervene
you,
if it
Senator, and thank you for your
disagrees with the
service in
court or
Vietnam. I
decides
have
it wants
thanked
to
you many
remedy on
times,
its
and I will
own.
continue to
That
let
is
you know
the
that I
type of
respect your
guidance I think
service
this court should
because you
consider
enabled
if
my
it
family to come
feels
here and
that it
help
must
us restart so
pursue a
that I
durational
could
limit on-
start a
on
nonprofit so
Section
that I
2. And
could
again,
run
we
for
don't
state
believe that's
legislature
necessary.
and have the opportunity to run
Justice
for this
Kennedy
office as
in,
Secretary of State.
1994 in Johnson versus
Michael Owens, you
DeGrande
get the next
said
question.
a couple things I just
Thank
want
you.
to get
My
your
question is to Dr.
reaction
Hughes.
to. He said the sorting of persons
Dr.
with
Hughes,
an intent to
myself
divide
being the
by
former
reason
chair of the
race
Democratic Party in Cobb
raises
County,
the most serious
was successful and able to expanding
questions.
access to the ballot
He
for
added that
486,000
explicit
people.
race-based districting
As the former
embarks us on a
chairman
most
of the Cobb,
dangerous
or sorry, the Fulton
course. It
County
is necessary to
Commission,
bear in mind that
you have worked
redistricting
directly
must
with the
comply
Board of Commissioners
with the
to ensure
overriding
that
demands of
our
the Equal
election systems are
Protection
able to be
Clause.
funded. Can you explain to the voters
issue
how
with
important
what
it is to
he said
have a board of commissioners
No,
that
what I
are willing
think
to fund
is,
the board of elections?
missing
I'm sorry, yeah, the
from
board of
the
elections
understanding
to
of Section
ensure
2 is the
that
work that it
they are
has
funded
done to
necessary to be able
advance
to carry out
the
their mission
goal of
to
ridding
engage voters.
our electoral process
Thank you, my
of
friend.
race. It
So as
brings
chairman of Fulton
racial
County, my
groups
responsibility was to
together,
work with 6
and
other commissioners
as I
and to
mentioned
build
earlier,
consensus
many
and
of
to
the VRA opportunity districts
hold the
ultimately
local
convert
election
to
board
non-majority
accountable
minority
in
districts.
terms of
Not all
policy
VRA opportunity
recommendations as
districts
well as
are
budget,
majority minority districts. And in
proposals
fact,
to fund
we see
the
greater
the elections, as I
racial
pointed out many times on the
harmony
campaign
and
trail. We
less racially
funded between
polarized
$6 and $9
voting
million
as a
year.
result of Section 2
And so,
districts. So Section 2
very
is
proud of the
addressing
fact that we
a
were able to get
pre-existing
consensus
problem. It is
and
not producing it. And in fact,
unanimous
it
votes,
reduces uses it
bipartisan,
more broadly
North
across
and South
society.
Fulton, get 350 precincts across the state of Georgia, across Fulton County, as well as funding all the poll workers that are needed to watch each of these elections. So very, very proud of that record, and I plan to carry that mindset as our next Secretary of State in terms of doing all that I can to fund elections, support local election boards, work collaboratively with local board of commissions that are Democrats and Republicans, and I have a great track record of working in a bipartisan way. So I'll bring that to the Secretary of State.
How do we judge the compelling
Thank you, Dr. Eves. I do think it's vitally important that we spend our tax dollars effectively and efficiently to ensure that we are enabling all of our Board of Elections across the state, all 159 of them, to be able to hold fair, free, and secure elections. Thank you for your work in the past for that. I look forward to your next Secretary of State to being able to engage more and have end-to-end solidarity with our Board of Elections, ensure that we are empowering them and we have fair and free elections. Thank you.
Prophylactically.
Doc and Taylor,
Here
it's your
we
turn to
have
question
a
one of your
finding
opponents.
from a district court
Thank
based
you.
on a
So this
robust
question
evidentiary
goes to
record that we were likely to succeed
Representative B. Wynn.
on
So
our
thank you
Section
for your
2
time in the
claim.
General Assembly.
This is
And I
not
know
the
it was a
first
hard
case. There are
fought
many
session.
cases
So could you
that have
please tell me in
provided the basis
2021 and
for an
2022,
opportunity
what could the
map
General
to be
Assembly have
drawn
done different
just
that
on a
would have kept the
preliminary
Republicans
injunction
from passing
motion?
such archaic
And
bills?
again, that was
Thank
that
you,
finding by the
Representative
lower
Doc and
court
Taylor,
was
for that
affirmed by
question.
two
Serving in
federal
a
panels of the
polarizing
Fifth Circuit, and
climate
this
in the
court
General
had an
Assembly for the past
opportunity
5
to
years, I've been
revisit
at the
the Robinson
forefront of
litigation
battling
and did not.
against
But
voter
what if,
suppression bills, including Senate Bill 202. And
errors
in
of
those
law, right?
times,
So
we have
what
stood
if
up
the
against a
district court- I guess I'm trying
Republican-controlled
to
House, a
figure out
Republican-controlled
how much
Senate,
weight
and
then
every
the
single
district
statewide
court's
office
finding
being held by
has
Republicans.
in
One of the things that I am
comprising
proud
that-
of is the efforts that
that
we have
compelling
made
interest
to
in
stop
avoiding
some
the
of
Section
these
2
bad
violation.
bills,
Do you see what I mean?
including
Like, what if
gutting
the-
a
what if the district
provision
court
that
was just
would
wrong,
have
and what if the
enabled
state
any
thinks that the
person,
district court was
whether
wrong?
or not they lived in the
Well,
state of
the
Georgia,
state
to
has
come
already
in and
conceded
publicly
that
inspect
it-
our ballot pre-certification of
The
elections.
state already conceded
So this
that
is
it
about
should comply with the
understanding
Robinson
how to
decision.
maneuver the legislature
Right.
under a
it
polarizing
got
and toxic
complicated here
environment,
because
and I
of all
will
of the other
continue
litigation.
as
But
Secretary
just why
of
don't you
State
just strip
to
out what
work
happened and
within that
answer the
legislative
question,
body
like,
to
at the
ensure
time
that we are
Robinson was
fighting for
decided.
free and fair elections in all
if Louisiana
159
thought that the
counties.
Robinson
Representative Doc
court
and
was
Taylor,
wrong,
it's
that
your
the district
response.
court was wrong.
And I thank you for that.
But
I
it
just wish that
didn't-
the
it wanted to
legislature had
avoid
went a
the
step
court-imposed
forward
map,
as far as maybe
wanted
doing
the
what they did in
opportunity
Texas
to
and just
draw
skipping
its
state
own map.
altogether, or maybe
Justice
doing what they did in
Kavanaugh's been
other
asking
states.
you what
I
role
do give you an
race can
applause
play
for
without running
standing up to
afoul of the
Rudy
Equal
Giuliani, but I
Protection
do
Clause.
think that
And the state would
overall
have to say at
more
that
things should
point,
have been
well,
done
we're
aggressively
weighting
to stop the
race heavily
Republicans,
because
even
we
if
have a
it means
compelling
not giving
interest
the Republicans the
in
majority that
avoiding
they
a Section
needed
2
to continue to do
violation.
business
And
on
the
a
state's
day-to-day
position might be, we don't
in
actually really
session.
think that we
Okay, thank you both.
violated
John
Section
Eves,
2,
time
but
for
we
your
have
question.
litigation risk.
So this
We know that
question
if
is
we
from my
don't
friend,
draw this
B.
other
Wynn.
map, the court may
So
impose one.
the Secretary of
On
State's
that
position is an
understanding, on
executive
those facts,
position that requires
not
managerial
concessions and whatever is made.
skills,
Is that
managerial
then a
oversight,
legitimate,
supervising
compelling
3
state
offices,
interest
hundreds of
when there
employees,
is a possibility and the state, in fact,
multi-million-dollar
thinks that the
budgets,
district
and
court
each
was
of us as candidates
still
have
a
talked
compelling
about our
governmental
past
interest.
professional
The
as well
state
as
can do
political
what it did
experiences
here,
in
which is
terms
to
of
appeal to the Fifth Circuit,
qualifications.
and
Can you
the Fifth
share
Circuit
with the
considered
listening
the same
audience your
evidence
background
and
in
unanimously
terms
found
of being able
that
to
the
assume the
Robinson court was
management and
correct.
professional
Yet another
aspect of
Fifth
the
Circuit
Secretary of State's
panel
office?
also
Thank you
affirmed
for
that
your
decision.
question, Dr. Eves, and I'm glad that you
Justice
asked that
Jackson?
because it does give me an opportunity
So in
to
essence,
talk about
are
my
you
body of
saying
work.
in response
As
to
executive
Justice
director for an
Barrett
education
that it's a
nonprofit for
compelling
10 years,
interest
I worked inside of
nonetheless
Georgia Public Schools. And I
because
think
the
most
state
educators
has
will
an
agree with me
obligation
that there is
under
nothing
our
more
Constitution
challenging
and
to
under
ensuring
Section 2
that our students
to
are
provide
well
an
equipped
equally
with the
open
resources to
electoral
graduate from
process.
high school and to build a
That's
successful
correct.
economic
I mean,
future for
I guess
themselves,
what I'm
and especially
trying
when the
to
Georgia
really
General
wrap
Assembly
my
has
mind around is
continued
the
to
different
defund our
stages
public
of this
education
case and,
system.
like, the different
My 5
questions at
years
issue,
as a
'cause
state
it's
lawmaker
complicated.
is even more
But
critically
I think
important
the
as we're
beginning
navigating an
of the whole
increasingly
thing
polarizing political
is the
environment.
requirement
And
of
even
equal
through that,
protection
I was
in the
able to
Constitution
extend protections
and
for victims of
Congress's
dating violence. I was
determination
able
under
to
Section
expand the
2
footprint of affordable and
to
secure
make
housing in
sure
the city
that
of
that is
Atlanta.
being provided
And I was able to
minority
repeal the
groups
exact
in the
name voter
electoral
registration
process
policy, which impacted
by having
50,000
a
Georgians
statute
in
that
2018.
requires states to provide equally
Well,
open
Representative Wynn,
electoral processes.
thank you for your
And that's
service,
what we said
especially in the
Milligan.
education area. I
We're
teach at
very
Spelman
clear
College,
that
so I value
individuals lack
education.
an
But
equal
the fact of
opportunity
the
to
matter is,
participate
my
when a state's
managerial
electoral
experience is
structure
what's going to
operates
make
in a manner that
set me apart
minimizes or
from my
cancels out their voting
opponents in
strength.
terms of my ability to be an
Everybody, I don't
effective
think there's a
Secretary of State.
disagreement
million-dollar budgets,
initial goal,
hundreds of
which
employees,
is providing equal opportunity.
multiple
and so then the
sites,
Robinson
that
Court
requires
is asked
skills.
under Section
and
2,
and that requires
is this a
professional
situation
experiences.
in which
and this
that's
is a
not
big
happening?
job, and I'm prepared
And
to
they
do
go
it
to
as the
trial,
next
and they bring in a
Secretary
lot
of
of evidence, and they do
Floyd
the thing,
Griffin, you
and
get
the
the final
Robinson
question
Court
in
says,
this round.
yes, this is that situation.
very much. My
Fine.
question is also to.
I guess I don't understand why the Robinson Court's decision is before
in the
us
Guardian,
right now.
December 11th,
because what I understood
2021,
is that as a result of the
there
Robinson
was a
Court's
headline,
decision, Louisiana
"It's an
then
American
enacts
issue.
a map
Can
that it
Georgia's
believes will remedy
candidate
the
for Secretary
violation
of
that
State
the Robinson
save
Court has
democracy?"
identified. And
I
we're
was,
here on a challenge about that
I
now.
was
That I think we call as a Shaw problem. We're here
to see
deciding
that,
whether
and I'm
they
still
can use race
surprised after
as a
reading it.
remedy,
So
as
my question
people
to
say
you
they did in the construction of
is
this
that,
map. So I guess I'm not even clear
do
why
you
the
think
Robinson
that
Court's
you
initial identification of the problem is
save
being questioned
democracy
as a
in
compelling
America by
interest.
yourself?
Because there's an interest
Thank
in
you
not
for your question, Senator.
having,
And I want to be
an
clear, I did not
unequal
write that
electoral
headline.
system,
And I
right?
agree with you that
That's correct. The Robinson
protecting
decision
the
is
future of
absolutely not before
democracy
this court.
requires
There's no
all
record
hands on
in
deck.
the Calais case
And in the
to
state of
support
Georgia,
that.
we have
Thank
been
you.
very lucky
Thank
and
you, Counsel.
fortunate to have a strong organizing infrastructure in all parts
Mr.
of the
Aguinaga?
state. Through the last
Thank you,
5
Mr. Chief
years,
Justice,
I've
and
been
may it
working
please the court.
alongside voting rights
Race-based redistricting is
advocates to ensure
fundamentally
that we
contrary
are
to our
fighting back
Constitution.
against the
It
voter
requires
suppression that we're
striking
seeing here
enough
in
members
Georgia.
of the
I
majority
also
race
understand
to
that
sufficiently
while the
diminish
Secretary of
their voting
State's seat
strength.
here in
And it
Georgia is
requires
not
drawing
going to
in
save
enough
our
members
democracy,
of a
it is
minority
a
race to
critical
sufficiently
safeguard.
augment their
Right now,
voting strength.
Republicans are running a
Embedded
national
within
and
these
coordinated
express
campaign
targets
to
are
attack
racial
Secretary of State
stereotypes
seats,
that this
and
court
including
has
in
long
Georgia.
criticized.
We
They
know
assume, for
that this is
example,
about the
that a black
2024
voter,
election,
simply
that
because
when it
he is
comes
black,
down
must
at
think
the end
like
of the
other
day,
black
we've
voters,
got to have
share
somebody
the
who's
same
going to fight for
interests,
free and fair
prefer the
elections
same
and
political
certify the
candidates.
results, because
And this
Georgia
stereotyping
could be
system
very well the
has
state
no
that decides
logical
the
endpoint.
presidency in
We are 40
2024.
years removed from
Mr. Griffin?
jingles, and yet,
Yes,
according
but,
to my
Dee,
friends
what I
on
like
the
to
other
know,
side,
I know
nothing has
you probably
changed
didn't
in the
write that
voting and housing
headline or the
patterns in
article,
Louisiana
but when you saw
that
it, did you
require
make an effort to
race-based
correct
redistricting.
that you were going to be the
These
person
problems are part
who
of why we
saved
never wanted
democracy?
to be
Look,
here
my
in the
father
first place.
served in
They have placed
World
states
War
in
I
impossible
to
situations
protect and
where
defend.
the only sure
I
demand
served
is
in
more racial
Vietnam
discrimination
to
for
protect
more
and
decades.
defend, and my
But I
son
think if
has
anything
served
is
to
clear
protect
in this court's
and defend.
dedication to
And I don't
eliminating
think
all
any
racial
one particular
discrimination,
person
it is that the
can,
Constitution does not
save
tolerate
democracy.
this system of
Thank you.
government-mandated
That concludes
racial
our
balancing.
second round. For
I
those of you
welcome the
just
court's
joining us, this is a debate between
Why
Democratic
did the
candidates
state
for
of
Secretary of
Louisiana
State.
switch
We will now go back
sides,
to the
since
panel
our
to ask
last
questions
started?
to the candidate of their
Your Honor,
choice
we told the
until we
court
run
at
out of
pages
time.
1 and 2 of
Now,
our
as a point
original
of moderator
opening brief in
privilege,
this
I may
case,
also
that
ask
our
questions of the
predicament in this
candidate,
case
and
presents
I will
as good a
determine
reason
when a
as any
rebuttal
for
is
the court to
appropriate.
reevaluate
Mark Macy, you get
its
the first
voting
question in
precedents.
this round.
We told the court at
This is a
page
question
18
for
of our original
everyone
reply brief
on the
that we
panel.
thought
Let's
this
start
would be
with
a different case
D. Dawkins
if the
Hagler
court thought
and
it
move
was
across from
worth
there. This
revisiting
question is
the
a hypothetical.
longstanding
Pretend we're in
assumption that compliance with
2024
Section
and
2
it's
is a
Trump versus
compelling
Biden
interest.
all over
Your Honor, we
again.
thought
And
all
let's
along
say
in my
this time
colloquy
Trump
with Justice
narrowly
Kavanaugh
wins
back in March, we
Georgia just as
discussed
Biden
our
did
longstanding
in
position in our state
2020.
legislative
Would you
map
certify
litigation,
that
where
election
we've
even
taken
if
the
there
position
are
that
questions
Section 2,
about
insofar
potential
as it
fraud
requires
or
race-based
absentee ballots not
redistricting, is
being counted or a
unconstitutional?
large number
This
of
court's
absentee ballot
re-argument QP
rejections?
squarely tees
Even
up
if
that
you had
question,
doubts, would you
and
still
so our
follow
duty of
state
candor
law and
requires
certify
us
the
to
victory
give
of
the
Donald
court
Trump?
our honest answer to that question.
And thank you for that question. Absolutely. I cannot imagine President Biden or President Trump calling a D. Dawkins Hagler, because D. Dawkins Hagler is about integrity in the office. And even though my heart's desire would be for the Democrats to win, because we're the only ones with a solid plan, period, who are not trying to suppress the votes of millions of Georgia, in particular black people who are now at 2 million registered voters, I will still follow the law, because this is not an opportunity to use the position for your favor or to sway an election one way or the other. This is about our very democracy. And sometimes elections do not come out the way that we want them to. So in the event that, you know, God forbid, Trump was to win the election, I would just have to go ahead and bite the bullet and certify, because that's the right thing to do. That's what we should always do. Do the right thing by all citizens in this country, especially in the state of Georgia. And so I would hope that citizens of Georgia have good enough sense not to vote for Donald Trump or any Republican. But therefore, I'm still Secretary of State, and I would certify the election.
This
is not
Of course,
kind of Shelby County thing.
I believe that the Secretary of State's
where
office, the
one could
position,
say that
is the
Congress
most
had acted and
non-political
50
of
years
all the
later,
statewide
the
constitutional
conditions on the
offices.
ground might
As
have
your
changed,
Secretary of State,
and
I'm going
there
to
would
make
be
sure
no way
that
to
all people have the right
respond
to
to
vote.
that
I will
change.
defend
Because what Jingles
feverishly
does and
the elections process, I believe that black people, white people, brown people, gay, straight, north, south, Democrat, Republicans, everyone should be able to vote. I'm going to protect the elections process. In fact, I believe that Georgia, despite our challenges, can be a model for democracy. I want to make sure that we, as an aspirational goal, I want us to be 100% voter registered as a state. I want to make sure that we have as many voting precincts as possible for anybody to be able to vote and to push also absentee balloting. I want to work with college students to get them registered to vote
what
and finally,
our
I'm going to work
precedents
with
say,
ex-offenders
and what
to
you're
make sure that
asking
they
us
are
now to change,
reintegrated into our
what our
society and
precedents
vote
say
and also
is that when
participate
those
in our
things
democratic
operate
process.
currently,
Mr.
right
Griffin.
as of now,
Thank you,
and
John,
are
for answering
proved
that
in a
question and
courtroom,
going beyond.
that
The answer to the
that
question is
still
I
there
definitely will
can't
follow
be a
the
race-based
law.
remedy.
I spent 23
That's
years
correct, Justice
in the
Kagan, and I
military,
think
in
the
the
two
Army,
trends that my friends on the
rising
other
to
side
the
point
rank
to,
of colonel,
the rates of
serving at the
residential
Pentagon
segregation and the rates
and
of racially
leading
polarized voting are what
soldiers
allowed
and
them to get
civilians.
past the Jingles
I would
preconditions.
never
They told you at
ask
page 33
one of
of their
my,
yellow brief that those things are worse
soldiers
today
or
in
civilians I
Louisiana
led
than they were in the 1980s. And this court said at page 228 in
violate the
Northwest
law.
Austin that those sorts
Okay?
of factors are not
And
evidence of
would
intentional
not ask
discrimination.
them
That's not intentional
to, and
discrimination.
especially my
It's not
soldiers,
intentional
to
discrimination
carry
because Section
out
2 is
a
not about
unlawful
intentional discrimination.
order.
Section
So
2
the
is
answer
about
is
effects discrimination.
absolutely
It's
no.
about
Floyd Griffin
Congress
is
saying,
not
and
bought
specifically in
or
response
bossed
to a
by
decision of this
anyone.
court, that intentional discrimination and the values behind that
Thank you for the
prohibition
question.
can only be
There's
vindicated
nothing more important
if Section
than
2,
electing a Secretary
under,
of State
if under Section
who
2,
will certify the
state
results of
shows
the
that,
election, whether or not
the
she likes
effects are
them.
not
And as Secretary of
discriminatory.
State, I would
And,
do exactly that and
Congress
uphold
put
the
us,
will of the
this
people.
court, in its place
We
when it
already
said
have
that.
laws in
And
place
so what
that allow
Section 2
candidates
does
to
is to
contest
say
an
where the
election,
effects
to
are
allow
discriminatory,
audits, and to allow
such
recounts.
that people
We
are
also
not
have the court
having
system.
the same,
And so as Secretary of State, I would
African-Americans
absolutely
here
certify the
are
results of
not
the
being
election,
given
whether
the
or
same
not I
voting
like those
opportunities
results.
as white people are.
Mr. Owens.
Then
Thank
a
you. I
remedy is
absolutely would
appropriate. That
certify
remedy
the
doesn't have
results,
to be
regardless of
race-based,
how they turned out, whether
but
for Donald Trump
sometimes
or
it
whether
is
it was for
race-based
someone
in
else.
order
I believe that
to
the heart and soul
correct
of our democracy
the
is based
racially
on
discriminate-
trust. That is what I will
racially
work towards.
discriminatory
What I will do is I will
situation that
spend
exists in
from the
the
time
state
I'm elected into
right
office
now.
until that election
Justice Kagan,
in
if Congress
building
had
a
attempted in
transparent,
1982 to make a
introducing more
record
monitoring,
of intentional
and ensuring that at the end of the
discrimination
day, people
in
have
districting,
trust and
and
faith
today, if there
in
were
our
a record of
elections is
intentional-
something that is
intentional
dearly missing right now.
discrimination in
As someone who
districting, then there
spent
might be
my
congruence and
career
proportionality
ensuring that
argument
people
to
have trust and
sustain
faith in
race-based
systems, I will
redistricting
bring
as a
all of my
remedy.
knowledge,
But I think
expertise, and
something that you don't
experience
see in the
to
congressional
ensuring
record in the
that we don't
1980s
have
and
to have
something
that
that doesn't
call
exist
because
today
people have
is
trust
that
and faith in our
justification.
elections.
And that's why I think
Stanley Dunlap, it's your turn to ask a
That's
question.
because
And my question is for
they
all
weren't
of the
dealing
candidates
with
as
the
well.
history
And
of
we'll
it.
start
They're
this
dealing
time
with
with
the current situation.
Mr. Owens and
And
move down.
Gingles is, as
But
Justice
if you're
Kagan
elected,
pointed out,
you may be a
what's
Democrat
happening
that's
today,
serving
and are
with
there
a state election
lingering
board that's
effects of the past?
majority
The
Republican
one
and
thing
a
I look at is
majority
Alabama's
Republican
maps
state
for the
legislature.
last
How would you
30 years.
kind of deal with that dynamic and
The
those
map
challenges
that-
in trying to
that
accomplish
the Robinson Court
what you would like to
found, cracked,
get done as
and
Secretary of
packed.
State?
Thank you for that
voters
question. You
was
know,
a map
I'm
that's
asked this
been in
often,
effect
and the
almost the
thing I want to
entire
focus
history
on
of
is that
Alabama.
the role of Secretary of
That
State, as
map was
mentioned
put in
earlier,
effect
is a
because
constitutional office, an executive role. It is not a legislative position, which means
discrimination.
I do not have the
So
power to
it's gonna
vote
have
yes
a
or no
lingering
on any
effect.
bill that may come up in the legislature. What we
they
should
wanted
focus
to
on is for the
pack
next
white
Secretary
voters.
of
They've
State
been doing
is ensuring that they have
And
the
they wanted
skills,
to
the
crack
executive
black
experience
voters
able
as
to
much as they could,
formulate
and
a
they've done
strategy,
that.
be able to
It's
be
only
laser
Section
focused on
2
what
and
needs to be done,
Section
which is
5
getting
that
results
kept
for the
them
voters
from
of Georgia. I
getting,
want to make sure
creating
that
one
we
majority
focus on
district.
things that do not
But
require legislation or litigation. Because
using
what we have to
race.
do is be ready day one.
Race
I
is
have
a
a
part
solid
of
plan in place so we can
redistricting
stop
always.
specific things that are stopping
We've said
people
that
from
the
showing up at
only
the polls and make sure we're
actionable
more
part
efficient
that's
and make sure we go through
if it
at the end of the day.
predominates.
Not get
But race is
caught
always
up
a part
in all
of
the
these
arguing and
decisions.
bickering.
And my
I'm an
colleagues
engineer.
are trying
I want
to
to focus
tease
on
it out
solutions
in
like
this
shortening lines,
intellectual
ensuring that we
way
have handicap
that
and
doesn't
elderly people
deal
getting to the
with
front of the
fact
lines, and ensuring that we
race
don't
is
have
used to help
machines
people.
that are down on election day.
Thank you.
Legislators
Representative
might
Wynn.
try to keep an ethnic
Thank you for the
community
question,
in one
Stanley.
district. They might
I've
consider
been
it
a
to get
Democratic
sense of
lawmaker
which
for the past 5 years in a Republican-controlled House. And even through that, I have been able to make changes and to make progress, including repealing the exact name match voter registration policy that impacted 50,000 Georgians in 2018. That being said, it is critical that the Secretary of State is able to work with the legislature to ensure that a legislative agenda is moved forward. We have to work with the legislative body, we have to use litigation, and we have to come up with solutions that don't involve either. That means investing in all local election boards, all 159, to ensure free, fair, and efficient elections. That means investing in voter education and outreach, investing in language access, and building a division that solely focuses on mitigating election disinformation, threats to our election system, and foreign interference with our election.
The 6 plaintiffs in this
Can you repeat the
case
question,
are white
please?
plaintiffs
The question was, how would
who
you
live
deal as a
in
Democrat,
district
elected Democrat with a potentially
black
majority
voters.
Republican
So no one's keeping
legislature
them
and
out of
state
that
election
district.
board that
No
would
one's
be
stopping them
majority
from
Republican
participating in the
and trying to
voting
accomplish the goals of
process.
Secretary of
No
State?
one is stopping
I
them
thought there
from
was a
trying
question
to
I'm
run
going to try to
candidates
answer.
or support
First of all,
candidates
what I'm going to do
that
is
reflect their
communicate
views.
with the governor,
But
the Speaker of the House,
But the state is
and,
stopping black voters from doing that in
the
many
Lieutenant Governor, the
districts
President
because
of the
it's
Senate,
packing them into
to attempt to
areas
get the Secretary
that
of State
might overwhelm them.
back
I
on the
don't
board
understand
as
this.
a voting
So
member.
Justice
The
Sotomayor, let's
Secretary
look at
of
the facts in
State
this
If you can
case.
use
is the
race in
elected
some
official.
way
It should
that
be
are
on the
positive,
board. I served on 3 college
why can't
boards
you use it
and a
to
national
remedy
board, the
something
National
in some
Center for
ways?
Missing and
Your Honor, my
Exploited
friends on the
Children.
other
I
side
know
walked
how
into the
boards
Middle District of
operate. The second
Louisiana.
thing I would do
Very
is that
briefly.
one of my
Walked into the
deputies,
Middle District
one of
of
the
Louisiana and demanded a
responsibility
majority
is going to
black
be my
district.
liaison
What's the purpose of that kind of district? The avowed purpose of drawing a
the
majority black
legislature
district
and
is
the
to diminish the
congressional
voting strength
delegation
of some
to
racial
we
groups
can build
and
that
augment the
type of
voting
trust
strength of
and
others.
responsibilities to get
Counsel.
legislation
Justice
passed that we may submit
What
to
role did
the
Robinson
legislature
play in
to
development
act
of
on.
SB 8?
Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Justice
Mr. Eads.
Thomas Robinson is
So
the
I got
only
3
reason
problems with that
SBA
board.
exists.
The former
We
chairman of
fought
Fulton
tooth and
County
nail
board
in the Robinson
convened
litigation
hundreds
itself
of meetings.
in
First
telling the
problem
courts
is that
we
board
did
is
not
too
think the
partisan.
Constitution permitted
Last
us
time I checked,
to draw
3
a second majority
Republican
black district.
appointees,
As you
1
know, under
Democrat.
protest we drew
So it's
SB 8
not
because
near
the
any
threat
parity.
was that the federal courts
Number
were going to do
2,
it if we
there's
didn't.
limited diversity.
And that's, I mean,
There's no black
I
person
think
on
that's
that
the
board.
best
We are in a
way to
state that's
conceive of why
32%
SB 8
black.
exists. We would
It's
never
completely
pass
unacceptable
SB 8 in
for
the
a
first instance
state board to be
without
that
Robinson,
powerful
Justice Thomas.
and
What
making
were the
decisions about
findings in,
a diverse
Robinson?
electorate and
The
not having
finding
any
by
representation
the Middle
on that
District
board.
in
That's wrong.
Robinson.
Then
was
number
that
3,
plaintiffs in this case were
it
likely
can
to show
almost
a violation
unilaterally
of
or in
Section
a
2.
subjective
And
way
the
go
likely
after
violation,
county
and
governments
I'm
or
using
county
very
local
broad
election
terminology
boards
because I do not know what the underlying violation is. I
put
can't
them
articulate that
put
for
them
you,
under
Justice Thomas,
performance
because I don't
review
think
and
anybody
take
can.
over
But I
by
think the
appointing a
finding in the
temporary
district court's
administrator.
mind in that
So
case
I don't have a big
was
problem
that
with
the
that
likely-
because they are
the
attacking
likelihood
Fulton
of a Section
County.
2
It's
violation
completely subjective.
meant that a
It's
majority
completely
black
political.
district was
and it's-
required.
and it's
Second,
targeting
and I think
a county that
that
has
was the
a
bottom line, and
lot of
our
black
legislature saw
Democrats.
that. We understood the marching order,
Thank you.
and that's why you
Representative
see
Duncan
SB 8 as it exists
Thank you.
today.
And so, as
Just
the
briefly,
chief
what were
election
the,
officer for this
findings
state,
that led to
it is
that,
imperative that the
conclusion?
Secretary of State
Well,
continues
Your
to
Honor,
work with
running
all
through the preconditions and
159
the
boards
totality
of
of the
election.
circumstances. I mean, I
And what
think the
we see
totality of
is
the
a
circumstances did
situation
most of
where
the
the
work for the
victor
Middle
has the
District
spoils.
in
Because
Robinson.
we have seen the
Senate
demographics
Factor
change in
1,
this state.
the official
And the
history of
board is
past
appointed by the
discrimination,
General
Justice Thomas,
Assembly,
we
the
can never
governor, the
outrun
speaker,
the
the
bad
lieutenant
era
governor. They
of
all
poll
get
taxes,
appointments
of
on this
grandfather
board.
clauses,
So
of
you have
literacy
to have
tests.
some
I
type
think
of
we're always
relationship
gonna
with the
lose
General
across the board on
Assembly
that
in
kind
and
of
of
analysis,
itself.
and
But then
that's
you
what
have
the
to
Middle
have the
District in
wherewithal
Robinson
to be able to
focused
go
on, is how
in
bad was
and work
Louisiana
around many of
in
these
the
things that are
1930s,
happening to
40s,
these
50s,
election
60s.
boards. We have
And,
seen
you
it
know,
not
add all that
just
together, and
in
at the
one
end you
kind,
have
but
a
all
vote
across
dilution
the state
finding
where
that
the
I don't
majority
think is clearly
population
articulable
is
in the way that
African American or
SFFA
black and brown
requires
people.
a finding
And
of
this was done by
discrimination to be
design.
specified.
And so then, as a result,
Justice Alito?
they have redrawn
Can I clear
lines
up
to
a
make
couple
it
of
harder for
factual
people
points
to
that have been
vote.
brought out
They
by
have suppressed
the
votes
questioning?
by making it harder to vote, adding extra
your
identification,
HB
and they're just making it
enacted in
overall a bad place to
2022
be when it comes to voting. So why would get in there and get the job done?
Thank you. Okay, I have a question for all of you.
That's
We're going to
exactly
continue
right.
on that
It
theme
suggested
here.
that
Now, the
prior
Secretary of
map
State's office
was
is charged with more than just
discriminatory.
overseeing the
origin
state's
of that
elections, of
prior?
course, although we've
Do I
spent a lot of time
remember
talking about
correctly
that. It is
that it was
important.
pre-cleared by the Justice
But the
Department?
Secretary of State also keeps
Twice.
track of corporate filings
correct,
as well as
Justice Alito.
charities that
So it
operate
wasn't-
in the
there's
state
no
and approves professional professional licenses for everyone, really, from architects to used car dealers. There's quite a variety there. So why do you think your experience is the best fit for such a wide range of responsibilities?
We'll start on this. Any suggestion?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because many people don't know that the Secretary of State has 5 divisions, which run from elections, corporations, nonprofits, taxing as far as the stock market. And so one of the things that is very key is that we have an operation that works for itself. People should not need their professional licenses and cannot get it because people are not answering the telephone or because there's so much paperwork. And could anyone please tell me why a Secretary of State would change a state website in the middle of an election season when people are still trying to get their corporations reinstated or their license reinstated, their corporations renewed? This is a process because I have been a human resource manager most of my life. I have operated in corporate America. I have operated in nonprofit sector. I have even done work with security and exchanges. So I have a full gamut and understanding of the entire office, which is what is needed for this particular job in this particular season. This This job does not come with training wheels. It needs someone who's going to be ready on day one, who's actually operating in every single function of the Secretary of State's office, and I am that person.
Thank you. Mr. Eves.
Well, thank you for that question. The area that I'm most excited about is the corporations division. Georgia is blessed. We have 1.1 million small businesses in our state. Unfortunately, and many of them are black and brown and female owned. Unfortunately, 20% of them fail within the first year and 30% fail within 2 years. The Secretary of State's office can be very proactive in terms of working with that community, because the more successful these small business owners are, the stronger our economy is. The second thing that I'll do in terms of the corporations division is diversity, equity, and inclusion. As chairman of Fulton County, I'm very proud of our record in terms of awarding contracts to women and minorities. I'm going to bring that same mindset to the Secretary of State's office to make sure that black and brown people and women have access to procurement opportunities among the 1,660 procurement agencies in our state on both the state level and the local level.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin.
And it
Well,
said,
I have a degree in construction.
It did
and building construction from Tuskegee University. And that's what I did for 23 years in the Army, dealing with construction when I was not flying helicopters like in Vietnam. So I understand the trades side of the house. I'm a local business person also. My family owned a funeral home that I and my sister became the owner of, which comes under the Secretary of State. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to set up in Macon, Georgia, a satellite office for me. So I'll spend several days a month there for two things. One, anyone want to come and make an appointment to see me and won't have to drive all the way up here to Atlanta. And number two, to be right there with the licensing division where I can keep an eye on what they are doing to make improvements that I know needs to be done based on my research.
That's your time.
That's
Ms. Wen.
Thank you. We know the scope of the Secretary of State's office is wide, and I remember in 2009 when I started a nonprofit business, I was a small business owner and a woman who had to overcome the challenges of what it's like to sustain a business with little capital. And so I understand also as a lawmaker, because we have passed legislation to address licensure, which is a bipartisan issue, and there's consensus we should do more, such as license reciprocity and expanding the ability for people to enter into the workforce without barriers. But I do want to be very clear here. The reason why we talk about elections so much, the reason why this has been the center of this race, is because Republicans are trying to overtake this office for elections, not for the corporations division, not for the licensure division, and certainly not for the charities division. So as Secretary of State, I would ensure that we're running all of these divisions, but there's nothing more urgent than ensuring the elections division is functioning.
Thank you. Mr. Owens.
What they said was that
I do think it's vitally important that we have a Secretary of State who understands all the facets of the Secretary of State's office. I started my own business when I was still in my 20s, grew it to a large computer consulting firm. I'm the only person in this race who's actually served as a Fortune 500 executive, making the hard decisions, ensuring that we are employing people across the state. In 2018, I was lucky enough to participate in Leadership Georgia. It gave me a fantastic opportunity to experience the true need of employment across the state, from the coastal Georgia all the way to the mountains, understanding the importance of how we use aspects of large businesses and small businesses to ensure that we're there for the people of Georgia. I also want to take this time to talk about how important the economic side of the Secretary of State's office is and can be to our veterans and military families across the state. I'm a third-generation military veteran, and I can't tell you how important it is to make sure that we're going to be there for our veterans. We're going to ensure that they can get licensed, they can continue to do their military career jobs day one when they come out without undue burden or risk.
Thank you. Mark, we're going to go back to you for our next question.
After the 2020 election, the Georgia General Assembly passed a very broad new elections law that limited absentee ballot drop boxes, put in photo ID requirements for voting
years ago, 2
absentee.
years ago.
It also allowed the
by a
state to
majority
take
of this
over
court.
troubled
Justice
county
Kagan, the court
election
has
boards
never
and
addressed
many
and
other
rejected
things.
the
And
two
Georgia
key parts of our
immediately
argument
got
here.
sued
The first
in
is
numerous
the court
federal
has
lawsuits
always,
trying to
has long
overturn
assumed without
various
deciding in
parts
cases
of
like Cooper
this
versus Harris
law.
that compliance with Section
Those
2 is a
cases are
compelling
pending.
interest.
If you're
We're
Secretary of
asking the
State,
court
you'll
to
suddenly
finally
be the
decide that
defendant
question
in
and
those
answer
cases.
no.
Would you
The
continue to
second
defend
question,
a
the
law
Allen
that you
Well,
don't
You're
agree with?
asking us
Let's
based
start with
on
Mr. Griffin and
arguments
move
that
to his
have
left.
been specifically
No.
rejected by this court over
No,
many decades
no.
and 3 years ago.
I'm not going to
Your
do
Honor, this is
anything
an
that I
antecedent
do
question
not
that the court has
believe
routinely left
in
open in its voting
and
precedents, and that's
the
why we're
law
asking the
that
court
is in
to address
place.
it here. If I could just answer the
The
second
legislation
question that
that
the
was
court has left
passed
open. In
in
Allen, the court left
202.
open the question of whether the
All of it
logical
should be
endpoint
appealed.
is identifiable in the race-based redistricting context.
That
and our submission to
deal,
the court is
now
it's time
the
to
law,
answer that question and answer no, because there is no
disenfranchise
logical endpoint
and
to race-based
suppress the
redistricting under
votes
Section 2
of
as the
African
court has construed it.
Americans in this state.
Justice Gorsuch?
And everything
Justice
that's
Kavanaugh?
going on with that deals
Let's
with
get your
black
views
people,
on pages
African
25
Americans
and
in
26
this state,
of the
because
Solicitor
the
General of the United
Republicans
States' brief,
can see on the wall
where they
what
say,
happened in the extent
this
of
court should
getting
hold that
the
the
president,
plaintiff's
the vice
illustrative
president,
district cannot
and our
disregard
two
the
senators
state's political
elected, and they want to
objectives,
turn that around.
and further say that Section 2
Senator
plaintiffs
Representative Wynn.
cannot claim a lack
Thank
of
you.
equal
Mark, you bring up
openness
an
for
important
politics
question
rather than
because
race
litigation
as the likely
is
reason
a
for
part
the state's
of a
refusal
key
to create a
component
majority-minority
of Secretary of
district.
State's race and why it's important to
Your
elect
thoughts
a Democrat.
about the
As a state
Solicitor
lawmaker,
General's
I spoke
approach,
against
and
Senate
then
Bill
in the course of
202
answering that,
well as
do you
many
see
other voter
differences
suppression bills.
between
And the premise has
your
always
basic
been
submissions
these bills violate
and
Section
the
2 of the Voting
federal
Rights
government
Act.
submissions?
I
I'm gonna
support
ask them that,
litigation
too.
to
I
overturn
do,
Senate
Justice
Bill
Kavanaugh.
202.
I do think
And
the top line response
yesterday,
is we like
during the
the
governor's
proposal and we
debate,
don't.
he
I think we like it
admitted
insofar as
that
you
Senate
know
Bill
from our
202
original
was
briefing
passed
and our
because he
supplemental
did not
briefing
like
that
the
thing we
results
want
of the
most
federal
as a state
election.
is clarity in this
I
area
also
of the
want to
law.
draw
And so
upon
any
the current
remodeling
Secretary of
tools
State.
that brings about
In
that clarity,
2020,
of
there
course
was
we're going to
litigation
like.
that
I think the
enabled
reason
us
we
to
don't like
count
it, there's a
absentee ballots
practical reason
that
and
were
a
postmarked
doctrinal
by
reason.
Election Day
I think the
and received
practical
within
reason
3
with the
days.
proposal is
The
that
Secretary
you're
of State
probably gonna see
appealed
a
that
new front of Section
ruling,
2
which led to
litigation
throwing
over
out
what any
thousands
new
of
test
ballots.
means and how
So
it plays
certainly
out
the
on
role of
ground.
litigation is
And so
going
I
to be
think
important,
the
and as
upshot
Secretary
is
of
the
State, I
courts
would
are going
continue
to
to
be
defend
inundated
our
with
federal
Section 2
Voting Rights
cases
Act.
under this new test
Mr.
if it
Owens.
exists. So as a practical
Thank
matter,
you.
I don't know that we can.
I cannot, in clear
practical lack of
conscience,
clarity that you see? I
work to
guess
support a bill that I know
would
has
have
been
thought
specifically
that,
targeted to
solves a lot
suppress
of
and limit the vote of black
concerns that
and
you've
brown
identified and
voters
that the
throughout the
amicus
state. I
briefs
absolutely could not. What
that
I want to do
support
is
your
focus
side
on
have identified,
ensuring that we're
so
doing
far.
things that's going
Yes,
to
if I can
expand
answer
access
that
to the
and then get to
ballot
the
and ensure that
quick
more
doctrinal
people
point.
are
On
able
the
to vote.
practical point,
We
I
look
do
at what's
think
going on
that
right
you
now.
start to see
Early
hints of
voting
this
has
in the
started,
Robinson Appellant's
and the
yellow
Secretary
brief,
of
the
State's
supplemental yellow
website
brief,
is down
which is
when it
there's gonna
comes to
be a lot
absentee
of
request ballots.
disagreement
That's
in
absurd,
lower
it's
courts about
inexcusable,
racial
and
predominance.
another
That is a
opportunity to
critical
find
trigger in a
ways
lot of
to
this court's
limit
cases.
people's access to
And
the
unless
ballot.
there's
I,
absolute
as
clarity
Secretary of State,
about
I
how
want to
that
make sure that we're
analytical
doing
framework
everything we
shakes
can,
out,
and I
then
will
you're
start
still
with
gonna
that.
see
One of the
this
things that I
onslaught of
can
litigation
do
that we see
as
today in the
Secretary of
Section 2
State
context.
to ensure,
The doctrinal
without a
reason,
doubt,
Justice
that
Kavanaugh,
we are
we're
ensuring
not
that every single voter has
totally
access to the
thrilled
ballot.
with the
And
proposals.
that's
I
what I'm
think
going to
it's
do as
just a half
Secretary of
solution
State.
to the
Thank you.
constitutional problem.
Representative Dawkins
Because
Taylor.
at the end of the
Thank
day,
you.
what the
And
government's
so
asking
my
you to do
work
is keep
spans over
jingles in some
25
form.
years of voting
And as
rights.
we've laid out in
And
our
so it would be
supplemental
contrary
briefs,
to my
jingles
very
1, 2, and 3
beliefs to
are expressly
oppose
built on the sorts
those
of racial
lawsuits. As a
stereotypes
matter of
that the
fact, like the organizations that I'm a part of, including the African Methodist Episcopal Church and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, we are all part of those lawsuits. And do you know why? Because we don't just stand up when it's convenient or have talking points that we read off of, but this is the very experience that we live. And so one of the things that I would also work to do is not just throw out any of those law cases. I would make sure that we elect an attorney general who would not try to prosecute, who would try to uphold it, as well as flipping the General Assembly seats for people who have a good conscience and a good mind for all of the voters of Georgia. Because the Secretary of State should make it easy and accessible for everyone to cast their vote. Yet what they've done here in Georgia is unconscionable. So no, I would absolutely not continue with the lawsuit in which I'm probably privy to have the lawsuits in the first place because we're litigants against the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Chairman Eves.
Yeah, this is an easy one. One of the litigants is the U.S. Justice Department, and they specifically cited that they oppose this law because it was disenfranchising black
Just on
voters.
common ground here.
I'm a
'cause I
product
think
of
it's
the
always
American South, and
important
we have
in a
made great
case like this
progress
where there's
in the
disputes
South,
to
but there's still a
identify
ways
what's
to go.
common
ago.
ground, Justice
Georgia
Jackson
can be a
said the
model
goal
of
is equal
diversity.
opportunity for
But
all
this law
Americans.
is specifically
We all agree on
designed
that
to
completely.
minimize black
And the
political
goal,
involvement,
of course,
engagement,
is racial
representation across the
non-discrimination.
state of Georgia.
But
And
at
so
the
I
same
could not
time,
in
given
any
history
conscience
and
support
given
that.
Congress's action,
I do
the
believe that
goal
we
is
can still
making
be a
sure
model for the
that
nation.
there
Our
have
diversity
been
is our
sufficient
strength, and we
remedies
should
for
be
the history
doing
of
all that we
discrimination in the
can
United
to
States,
increase
and we've
voter
seen that in the school
registration,
desegregation
voter
context, in the
participation,
college admissions
and electing
context,
office
and a variety of
representation, all the
contexts.
tapestry of our state.
And then Ms.
so
Nelson,
I would
think,
not
suggested
defend a
if
law
there is
that
going to
is
be a temporal
inherently
limit,
against
she doesn't want one at all.
my
but then I think she
ancestors and
said,
myself and
there's
my
going to be
family
one,
and
there
many
should
others.
be identified
I
in
will be pushing
advance.
for
Just
more
want to get your
inclusion
response
as
to that.
Secretary of State of Georgia.
Our response
Thank
to
you
that
all.
is simple, Your
Stanley.
Honor. Over 3 decades,
And
dating back to Shaw
question
1
for
and
everyone,
Miller,
and
the
we'll
court
start
has
with,
always qualified its
Dawkins
voting
Hagler,
cases
and
with
then
the
move down
caveat
on the
that
sand.
racial stereotyping is bad.
Seeing the
14th Amendment
state
forbids it, and in
now
all events,
undergoing a
it
review
can't
of Fulton
persist.
County's
I
elections,
think anybody remotely
what the
involved
result of
in
that report
redistricting
could end up
knows those caveats and has
potentially the
been on
state
notice
taking over
since the
the
1990s.
elections process
and so,
there.
you know, as recently
Know that y'all have
as
spoken out
this court's
against that,
plurality opinion
but
in
what if there
Schuette,
is
and then
just
SFFA,
another
where the
county where
court,
there are some maybe
again,
troubling or
reproduced
history of
that
issues
black-letter
there?
law
What
that
role
racial
does Secretary of
stereotyping is not
State or
permitted
should
under
the
the
state
14th
have, state
Amendment.
election board
The
have
warning belts have
in
been
trying to
sounding
resolve
for
those
decades,
problems? Is
and I
there
think
any
that's
type of
a long enough
intervention
notice
that the
for
state should
anybody
take, or
involved.
what?
In
How would you
response to
handle
Justice
that?
Kagan,
And that's
Ms.
a very good
Nelson
question,
said
because
that,
this did not start with Fulton
black
County.
representatives
The
and
Secretary of State
justices in
started doing
Louisiana
all of these egregious
have
acts
primarily,
actually
if
under
not
Karen Handel when
exclusively,
she
been
was the
elected in
Secretary of State. And I can name
minority or
several
majority,
counties in which I
minority
had to go
opportunity
in when I was the
districts,
chair of the Legislative Black
and that
Caucus
the results
to try
would
to
be,
understand why they were trying to suppress
terrible.
the votes in many different
you wanna
places
respond
or
to that?
calling to
Sure,
question
Your Honor. I
those
mean, I
populations
think
that had a
there's been a
majority
lot of sky
black
is falling
population who were
rhetoric
turning
from the
over
other
votes.
side in this
And this
case.
new
I
law
just wanna
with the
give you, like, one
GBI, it is
political
just
reality why I think that's a
carry
little
on of what
overstated,
happened in
which
Quitman,
is,
Georgia in
remember that in a case
2010.
like
2010, you had 10
Louisiana,
black women
Republican
who were
legislature,
tried
if a Republican legislature wants to
with
maximize
felonies
its
because all they
political
tried to do
seats,
was register
draw a
people to
6-0
vote,
map.
use the
Remember what has
advanced
to
voting
happen with
system,
the
and then
hundreds
this
of
went on
thousands
for
of Democrat
years of
voters
protracted
that
litigation,
currently
all
exist in the
because
majority Democrat
the Board of
districts,
Elections
District
there,
2 and
along the
District 6.
Republicans, took
They
that
have to
thing
go
up to
somewhere,
Brian Kemp, who
and
was
that
the
means that
Secretary
if
of State
the
at that
legislature
time.
wants to take
He
the
had the
risk
GBI to
of maximizing
investigate,
what they're
try to
doing
throw
is
out
turning
the
safe
Board of
districts
Elections
for
decisions
high-profile
because most of those
political
boards are
incumbents
stacked
purple. And
with
that, I think, is a
Republicans
very
based on
dangerous
where you
political
live,
risk.
even if it's an African American
I don't know what our
population.
legislature
Mr.
would
Eves.
do if the court rules in our favor. But
Fulton
I'm just
County
saying that's
is a
one
big
political
target.
reality that
There are
makes me
smaller counties
pause
that
and
I
say,
think is
I
part
don't
of a
think
head
the sky's
fake.
going to fall.
I understand Floyd County, just north of here, where Romez is under investigation. But the larger issue is also what's happening in the local election boards. I've traveled throughout this state, and I've been disappointed, shocked, but also encouraged by local citizens fighting back.
Is itself an exercise
Reverend
of the
Denise
enforcement
Freeman
power.
in Lincoln County,
Judge, I'm
that
gonna
local
assume
election
here
board wanted to
that
reduce
Congress's
precincts from
enforcement power is
7 to 1, but
necessary
she
even
led
once
and
the
mobilized
proportionality
local
test
citizens to
applies
fight
to
back, and they
Section 2.
changed their mind.
Do you
They rescinded the
agree with
decision,
that
and now they have
conception? And I
7
guess
precincts.
just to
I was in
tell
Camden
you
County
where I'm coming
and the
from.
southeastern portion
I mean, it's one thing to say that the map
Georgia.
itself is the
Same thing
remedy,
happened.
but it might also be
lady,
that
his
the
name who
statute itself,
escapes
insofar
me,
it goes
a white
beyond
woman
intentional
fighting on behalf
discrimination
of
as
black
the remedy.
residents in that
Is that a way to
state, where
think about
precincts
it,
were
or
going
is
to be
that how
closed
the
by the local
arguments
election
are
board
going?
and black
I
communities.
think
So
that's
I'm
right,
very much
Justice Barrett. I mean, I think the court's
emboldened and
precedents
encouraged by what
assume
locals are doing.
that if a
Mr.
plaintiff in a
Griffin.
Section 2 case
Yes,
can prove up the
speaking of Lincoln
preconditions and the
County,
totality of the
I know Reverend
circumstances,
Freeman,
the automatic
and
remedy,
I wrote an
at least in this
op-ed
case, is going to be a
supporting
majority
the
minority
efforts
district. And I
that
think
they
the
were
court's
doing
precedents
over
assume
there.
that that is statutorily
all of this
mandated.
goes back
That's just the
to the
natural
state
follow,
election board.
consequence of a
And the
violation
Secretary
finding.
of
So I
State
do think it's built
presently
into the
does
statute.
not really
Now, there was
have
a lot of discussion
voice
earlier
in
about whether we're attacking Section 2
that board, being an
itself,
ex
like
officio.
facially, and
You know,
that's
ex
just not
officio
true.
is just
The
what it says.
re-argument QP in
They're
our
there,
briefing
the
has
chairman
been
of the
focused
board does
solely
not
on this
have to
use
recognize
of
that
race-based
person
redistricting as a remedy.
if
I think all
he
the
or
other
she does
applications
not
of
want
Section
to.
2 that
The
this court
Secretary of
considers
State is
remain fair
still
game if a plaintiff
the
especially can
chief
show intentional
elected
discrimination.
official
Of course,
in
that all
this
remains
state.
fair game.
And
but
that's
I think
why I
we're
will
narrowly focused
work to
here
try to
on the
get
use of race to
me,
draw
the
district lines
Secretary of State,
insofar as the
back in
court
the
has understood
position
that to be
as a
mandated
board
by
member
Section 2
to
to remedy
help
unalleged
So you
violation.
don't understand yourself to
slow
be arguing
down
that
or
any
stop
part of
some of the
Section 2 is
things that
itself unconstitutional, but
that are
simply
going
is the
on
way
now
that courts
from
have been
local
applying it
election
goes
boards
beyond.
That's correct, Justice
being
Barrett.
chastised
I mean, this
for
court's
doing
precedents culminating
their
in SFFA have said
job
if the
every day.
racial classification that the government's employing
I absolutely
to allegedly
do
remedy
not
a
support
violation
a
is
partisan
what's at issue,
takeover
like,
of
that's
any
the
of our local
constitutional
state
problem,
election
and that's
boards.
where we focused our
Not
briefing.
by the state legislature. legislature, not by the State Board of Elections. Over the past few years, local election officials on both sides of the aisle, from Democratic counties and Republican counties, have shown up at the Georgia General Assembly, and they have said the same thing over and over and over again. They are facing new mandates. They are losing election workers because of threats and harassment, and the Secretary of State has abdicated his duty in supporting our local election boards. As Secretary of State, I would invest in all 159 local election boards to ensure that they are running free, fair, and efficient elections. I would come to the table in support of our local election boards so that when they are facing challenges, we together can find solutions to that. That is not what the current Secretary of State is doing, and our local election boards need our support in order to run free and fair elections.
Can you help me
Mr. Owens.
That
That's a very good question.
Jackson, I think
and what we
there's a
absolutely
reason why
must
this
do
court's
is
voting
empower our
precedents
local
going all the way
election
back to
boards.
Shaw 1
You know,
are
in
so
my
tied up
mother's
with
own
race.
precinct,
It's because
voting
the
precinct in
remedy,
Mableton, Georgia,
as parties
the
and the
line
courts
on
have
election day
understood
was
Section 2
8
to operate
hours
is
long.
almost always
That's
going to
totally
be racist.
unacceptable.
That's why
I
they
know down in Union
they're so
City, there were
tied up with race
voters
because
who
that's
did
the
not
initial
get to vote
problem.
until technically the day after election day, because it was after midnight by the time they got an opportunity to actually vote. We cannot stand by idly. The next Secretary of State has to be someone that can take charge of this, that can put together a plan for 159 counties and truly lead, not kick the leadership, not to kick the can of leadership down to the local level, but instead provide a framework that all local election boards will be able to work within, to be able to ensure they're adequately funded, and to ensure that we are using data analytics and being smart about where we have machines, what we do, to ensure that we are not becoming that we are not becoming our own worst enemies when it comes to elections. We can do better. We must do so. I have the skills and expertise to be able to do this. I'm ready to make sure that every single elected, every single eligible voter has the right to vote.
Thank you.
Recognized in SFFA,
Representative Nguyen, this question is for you. The
states
current
can
Secretary of
remedy
State,
No, I'm
Brad
not talking about the
Raffensperger, he's been
remedy.
very
I'm not
vocal
talking
about his
about
belief
identify.
that Georgia needs to amend its
All right, so
constitution
if
to
I'm
ban
right,
non-citizens
that
from voting,
Section 2
despite
is
the
about
fact that that is already
identifying the
against state law.
problem and
But he
then
cites
requiring
states like
some
Vermont where
remedy.
non-citizens are being allowed to
I don't
vote in
understand why
municipal
your answer to
elections.
Justice
Do you think
Kagan's
that Georgia
question
needs to amend
about
its constitution
is this a
to ban
compelling state
non-citizen
interest
voting?
is no. The answer is obviously
The Secretary
yes,
of State
that you
is
have an
running a
interest
campaign
in
that
remedying,
is based on something
the
that's
effects
not
of
only
racial
already in
discrimination
state
that we
law, it's in our
identify
state
using this
constitution,
tool.
and it is
Whether you
spelled
go
out
too
very
far in
clearly.
your remedy is another
Eligible
issue, right?
voters
Your Honor,
have
I
to
think
be
step
citizens,
0 in all
and
these
they have
cases,
to
it was
be
certainly
18
step
years
0
old.
in the Robinson litigation.
What's
is the
even
plaintiffs
more
came in and said,
disappointing
"We want
about his
another
lack of
majority
vision
black
is
district."
he was
I thought they
unable
came
to
in and
pass
said
a
we are not
constitutional
receiving
amendment
equal
in a
electoral opportunity
Republican-controlled
because our votes are
legislature.
being diluted.
Which is the same way of saying we
Instead of using a
deserve
dog
a
whistle,
No, it's not,
and we know,
because
by the way, that non-citizens are not
again, just
voting
trust me
because we
on
have the
this.
processes
The
in place, and his
second
own
electoral or
office
second
showed us
district is a
that
remedy
non-citizens
that one
are
could,
not actually voting.
offer
It works.
for a
The
problem
Secretary
that
of State
we've
should be
identified. And the
focused
whole
on
Robinson
ensuring
litigation
that our
was
local
about
election
identifying
boards
the
are
problem.
supported,
Is this
ensuring
really
that every
happening?
eligible
In
citizen
many
is able to
Section 2
cast
cases, the
their
court
ballot
says
at the
you're
ballot
wrong.
box, and that when
You're
they cast their
fine.
ballot,
There
those
is
results
not
should
an
be upheld.
electoral opportunity being
Thank
denied to you.
That
Go
is all
away.
the time we have for
In
questions.
this case,
Each candidate
the
will
court
now
said,
have 60 seconds for a
I'm
closing
looking at the
statement.
factors. I
D. Duncan
appreciate
Hagler,
what
you
you're
got the
saying.
first
You've
closing
proven
statement.
that we
Thank
have
you.
this problem.
I believe in
And so
Georgia,
the next question
and I
is,
believe
how
in
do we go
Georgia
about remedying
values.
it?
And I believe
And
that
the
the next
problem,
Secretary of
Justice
State,
Jackson,
I
that the
believe we
Middle
have to
District
create an
identified
environment
was
of
unintentional
opportunities.
discrimination.
I
And
am
in
very
fact,
disheartened by the
why
things that have
intentional
happened in Georgia.
discrimination to
And
remedy
so
a
as the
problem
wife
like the
of a
one that I've
current
identified?
Because
active
if you're
duty
going to use
military
race the way
colonel
that the
in
Robinson appellants
Fort
want the court
Gordon,
to use
the
race
mother of 4
in drawing a
children,
second majority minority
I am
district,
disheartened
you gotta
when you
have a
look at
compelling
the
interest.
attack on
And
black
that's-
voters across the state,
Thank you,
on
Mr.
black
Chief Justice.
churches,
Counsel.
then on nonprofits, then on the fact that even
Mr. Ryan?
13-year-olds could be tried or charged with a felony if they go in and witness someone voting, something I have done with my children and grandchildren since they were little. And so we have to revision Georgia and what it looks like so that every single citizen in the state of Georgia has access to the ballot box.
Mr.
So
Chief
that they can go
Justice,
in
and may it
and
please
vote
the
for the
court.
things that are important to
The
them, like
appellees
health care
should
and
prevail here
education.
regardless of
We
the
cannot
grounds
keep it up like
on which
this.
the court
So
chooses
I ask
to
for your
rely.
support. D.
In
Duncan
today's
Hagler
America,
for Georgia Secretary
voters
of
like
State.
the appellees are
Lee
still
Nguyen,
being
it's time for your
racially
closing statement.
stereotyped to place them
This race is
into
about the
single-member
future of
districts.
our
If it
democracy.
If it was ever acceptable
My name is Bee
under our
Nguyen, and I am
colorblind
running to
Constitution
ensure
do
that we
this,
have free,
it
fair,
was
and
never
efficient
intended to
elections in
continue
all 159
indefinitely.
counties. As a
Section
state lawmaker for the
2
past 5
effects
years, I've
findings
watched Georgia
alone
Republicans attack our
can no
fundamental
longer
right to vote,
justify
and to erode our democracy. And right now, there is a nationalized campaign that is targeting Secretary of State seats, including in Georgia, for one reason and for one reason only: to hijack our election system. As Secretary of State, I will fight to ensure that every eligible Georgian is able to cast their ballot, and when they go to the ballot box, that vote is counted and the results of the election are upheld. I ask you to join me in this fight to protect the future of our democracy, and I hope to earn your support, because when we vote, we all win.
Thank you. Michael Owens, time for your closing statement.
In the debates around
I'm running for Secretary of State because I want to be the chief diplomacy officer.
District have to be
the chief democracy officer. It's vitally important that we have an understanding that we are facing challenges that we've never seen in foreign adversaries, domestic challenges that we're facing. We have election systems that people continue to have concerns in, and most importantly, we have threats that directly relate to people being able to vote. We have chaos running amok right now, and it's important that we have a Secretary of State that will have the full aspect of the understanding of what it's going to take for this election to turn around. If you truly want to transform the Secretary of State's office and ensure that you have someone that's going to be there for you, that's going to fight to protect your right to vote, that's going to defend democracy, and is going to do everything possible to make sure that we turn the tide when it comes to having trust in our elections, ensure that we end long lines, ensure that we have democracy not just for ourselves, but for our children, for our children's children. I ask you, join me, Michael Owens, for Secretary of State. This is the most important election that we've seen. Thank you.
Floyd Griffin, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. This election is about executive level leadership, executive level management, and executive level experience. And I am the best person who have proven fight to do these kinds of things. And how do I know that? The last lieutenant governor, Democratic lieutenant governor, has endorsed my candidacy, and he said that Floyd Griffin is the best person to be the next Secretary of State. I have served my country, I have served my state, and I have served my community. I am the only person on day one who hit the ground running and will not have to have on-the-job training. Because I've been there and I've done that in the military, in elected positions, and in business. And don't forget to vote for Floyd Griffin on the 24th of May, which is my birthday.
Thank you. John Eves, you get the final closing statement.
Well, I'm running because we need new leadership in the Secretary of State's office. I'm a father, I'm a small business owner, the former regional director of Peace Corps for the Southeastern region. I also teach at Spelman College Dynamic Black Women. I'm encouraging them to go into politics. But I'm also the former chairman of Fulton County, served for 11 years. Big government, 1 million residents, 15 cities. And along with that, we operated the largest local voting operation in the entire state. Something that none of my opponents has is experience overseeing elections. We increased voter participation under my watch, the first to do full souls to the poll, as well as 3 weeks in advance voter registration and voting. And then along with that, we increased jobs. And lastly, let's seize the historical moment. Let's make history. Make me the first black person elected as Secretary of State in Georgia's history and the first since Reconstruction in the Southeast. John Eves, I ask you to vote.
Thank you. Thank you all. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is on Tuesday, May 24th, and early voting is already underway. Our thanks to all of our candidates and to our panel of journalists, Mark and Stanley, thank you both. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the debates they will host this election season, you can visit atlantapressclub.org. I'm Claire Sims. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.
You have to show that the current conditions, not some old conditions that happened in 1962 or in 1982, that the current conditions are such that there's no equal opportunity for African American voters or some other group because there's racially blocked voting. And I guess I don't see where stereotyping comes into that. It's just there's a there there,
that African Americans can't elect candidates of their choice?
Well, the problem, though, is in the remedy. The problem is that when you are drawing the remedial district, which is the very first part of Jingles, that may not be the final district you end up with, but just to covering your question and
Georgia
question
Public
Justice
Broadcasting
Jackson
is proud to
asked,
partner with the Atlanta Press Club to present its annual political debate series. Visit gpb.org for a complete broadcast and live
you
stream
have
schedule.
to look at the race of the voters all around that area, and you've got to make assumptions about them based on statistics, but you've got to make assumptions about what they think and how they vote based on their race. You've got to draw new districts based on it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that we decided in Milligan. Because what the state said in Milligan was that the plaintiffs could not use a map that was at all race-based themselves in order to show that there was a way out of this kind of
I'm
vote
Neil
dilution,
Moffat, reporter
these
and
kind
host
of
of
vote dilution
WABE
practices.
TechCast in
And
Atlanta.
the court
Welcome
says,
to the Atlanta
said,
Press
of
Club
course you
Loudermilk
can
Young debate series.
do something
This
that
is
is
the debate among
race-based, even
Democratic
though
candidates for
not
state
race
school
predominant.
superintendent.
That we're not
Let's meet the
going to
candidates for this
insist
debate.
that
They
you
are
come in
alphabetical
and
order.
ignore
Curry
the
Hitchens
factor
is an
of
attorney.
race, when the
Jaha
only
Howard
reason
is a
we're
member of the
here
Cobb County
is
Board of
because race
Education
has
and a
played
dentist.
such an integral
James Morrow
part
is an
in the
educator.
voting process
Alicia
that
Thomas
people
Searcy
are being
is a
deprived
former
of
Georgia
their
State
voting rights
representative.
because of race.
Now let's meet
Well,
our
Justice
panelists.
Kagan, the
Crystal Dixon
plurality
is a
in that
reporter at
section
Axios
of-
Atlanta.
of,
and Ty Tagami covers
Milligan
education, the Atlanta
drew the line
Journal-Constitution.
between race conscious and race
For complete
predominant
rules on today's
districting.
debate, please visit the
Race-based
Atlanta Press Club
appears, and
website,
we maybe need to define all of our terms.
atlantapressclub.org.
It appears in the decision.
To start the
but-
debate, each
but
candidate will be
the-
asked
I think
one
what
question
is
by
clear
one of the
from that
panelists,
case is
and
that
candidates have 60
the
seconds to
remedial
answer each
maps
question.
can't allow race
Crystal
to
Dixon, you
predominate.
get the first
I
question
mean,
for
the
Alicia
court,
Thomas Searcy.
said that the
Yes.
remedial
Governor
map,
Kemp
the
last week
illustrative
signed
map,
legislation
can't
banning divisive
violate the
concept from
court's
being taught in
redistricting,
public schools.
decisions.
What is your
And
take
of
on this
course,
legislation, and
there's the
how do you
entire
think
shot
it will
line.
I
affect
don't think that
students
there's any
as well as
dispute
teachers?
as to that point, but there's...
Thank you for the
but,
question.
You know, we're a long way from
I'm
racial
concerned
predominance
that
to have the
politics
plaintiffs
is
come in with a
dividing us
map
when it comes to
that
education.
in order to
And I
remedy
think
the
the
race-based
divisive
problem
legislation
that
that's now
exists, the
signed into law
violation
that
of voting
quote
rights
unquote
based
bans
on race,
books or
itself
bans
takes
divisive
race into
topics
account.
is a distraction for what we need to be focused on in
Milligan
our state.
said 3 years ago.
We have
The
1.8
problem,
million
I mean,
students
and that wasn't a
who are in school
stereotype
right
issue,
now
and it
who
wasn't
don't
kind of
have
like
the
we're
high
based on
quality public
past
education that they
conditions
deserve.
issue. We're
And
based
so
on
I'm looking
current
forward to being a
conditions, which
state
is that
school
we just
superintendent
proved
who
a
will remove the
violation of
politics
people's voting
away
rights
from education,
based on
focus
current
on children.
conditions.
Our kids are not Democrat or
Stereotyping is
Republican. They're
always
kids
the
who
main
deserve to have
injury
access
in a
to a
Shaw
high quality
case. It's
education.
always the
And they
injury
deserve to
when
have one
race
that is
predominates.
relevant
But you're asking for
culturally
changes to Section 2,
and
which is
otherwise. And I'm
not
looking forward
a
to
Shaw case.
ensuring
That's the
that all of their
confusion. I
educational
understood
opportunities
that the
are a
illustrative
reflection of who
maps
they
that
are
the
as
plaintiffs
students.
bring in the beginning of a Shaw
Tagami,
case
it's your turn to
is
ask the
part of their
question of James
showing
Morrow.
that we have a problem.
Mr. Morrow,
They're illustrative.
Flo, you
They're not what
have been a social
Louisiana
studies teacher
picked in this
for
case. They're
years,
not what
an
the
important
court
subject.
requires.
You recently
The court
switched
gives
PE, and now you're running for
state,
state
once
school
the
superintendent.
violation
I'm wondering if
is
you can tell us why
established,
you're
the
making
opportunity
changes.
to draw its own map. So they're just showing, like that's just a step that you have to do as a part of your showing that we do have this
my principal, she felt like that I would have more discipline in the gym because a lot of times when teachers are absent and we can't find any subs to cover their positions, they end up dropping them in the gym. Just this past Friday, there were 5 teachers that were out, and there were no subs to replace them, so I ended up having to cover like 5 classes by myself. So my administrator feels like I'm a disciplinarian, so that was one of the reasons why she moved me from social studies to physical education.
If the remedy is stereotyping and race-based.
Set aside what the remedy is. I just need an answer to the initial
Yes, a recent
question.
Rand Corporation poll found that nearly half of former educators who were surveyed said that they left the profession after March 2020 because of the COVID-19. How would you, as school superintendent, how will you help districts, recruit and retain teachers amid the pandemic?
If you demonstrate
Thank you, Crystal. That's a great question. It's definitely an important one for our time.
is causing this to happen to you.
Well,
teachers who are teaching now also are considering
current
leaving the
doctrine under
profession.
Jingles,
So
but the
half teachers
problem
have
is-
the teachers left because of the pandemic, and many teachers who are teaching now are considering leaving for many reasons. One, because they could get paid more elsewhere, and another because the pandemic has made their job much harder than it used to be. I would definitely look to pay teachers more, pay them in line with what other professionals who are similarly educated make, which would be a good start towards getting educators to stay in the profession. And I also would respect them more, let them actually teach the truth in their classes, fight against this law that is a divisive concepts law, and trust our teachers to be able to teach appropriate education, appropriate history, appropriate public events, or
current events to students.
Justice Sotomayor?
I would also work hard to recruit teachers across the state that live in the state, make it a desirable job for young people to want to go into. Thank you, Crystal.
Eliminated by the 26th
And Ty, you get the
Amendment.
final question of this round
But
for
the
Jaha
literacy
Dr.
ban
Howard,
that we
you
have will
have
sunset
been on
too.
the Cobb County School
Those
Board
are not
for
stereo.
several
Those
years,
remedies
and,
don't
you're a
require racial
Democrat in the
stereotyping.
school
Well, they
board
do,
that's dominated
because
by
to
Republicans, so
prove
you haven't been
them,
able
you have to prove that it
to
affects the
accomplish
races.
much. And
I
I'm
mean,
wondering
I
if you were to
just
win
don't
as state
understand
school
the
superintendent, you'd be
stereotyping
entering a similar
concept
environment where the legislature is
jingles
dominated by Republicans. How
factors.
could you be
The
effective? What have you
jingles
learned?
factors is
in your role
looking
in Cobb?
at whether these people
Ty, I really
have,
appreciate that
their
question.
vote is being
I do
diluted
reject
or
the
their
premise
vote is being taken
that we
away
haven't
from
accomplished
them
much. If
merely
you
because
ask
they're
the
black. And so
numerous
if that's
families
the case,
in Cobb
we have
County
always said
what we accomplished,
that
they'll probably tell you
remedying
that they actually know how the board works.
You can use
They actually
race.
are
Now,
paying
you wanna
attention
add the
to school board
qualifier, it
meetings.
has to be intentional.
They are more
But I
engaged
don't
now
see the
than
15th
ever
Amendment
before.
being limited
We
that
did
way.
that
The
on a
words
very
of the
local level in the
15th
city of
Amendment
Smyrna.
are that
We did it at a
Congress can
county
stop
level
any
as Board of
practice
Education and as state school
that dilutes
superintendent.
voting.
We're going to engage this entire
That
state
hasn't-
to make sure folks know that
practice
this
is
is
an
not a
act
private
that has
enterprise.
an effect.
This is public education,
It didn't say
and public education
intentional,
belongs to you, the public. Thank you.
intentional.
And that concludes the
dilution
first
of
round of the
voting.
debate. The candidates will now ask a
the
question to an
amendment
opponent
itself
of their
talks about
choice.
practice.
Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the
Your
question,
Honor, this
60
court has
seconds to
never held
respond,
that the 15th
and the candidate who
Amendment
asked the question will then
addresses
have 30
anything
seconds
other
for a rebuttal.
than
By random
intentional,
selection, James
No, it
Morrow,
does.
you may ask the
That's
first
just not
question.
true. We, Justin Mulligan,
My first
and we've
question
said
goes to
in a
Dr. Howard.
slew of cases. Congress itself
Are you being a
said,
pediatric
we're not
dentist?
using
I just
intent,
was wondering what
we're
makes you
using
feel like you'd be
effects.
qualified
And we
for this
said
position
that's
since you've never
okay,
been a
that's
teacher
within their
in the
power
classroom and
as
you really don't
specified
understand
in
the
the
pains and
15th
ills that teachers have to
But
deal with
Your
on a
Honor,
regular
you
basis.
can only
That's my
catch the
question to you.
effects
How do you
as
feel that you
part
could
of
be
an
the state
enforcement. That's just the
superintendent when you've never been a
enforcement
classroom
power at
teacher?
that point.
Sure.
So you're
I
using
really
the
appreciate
enforcement
that
power
question.
based on a showing.
I think what happens is
The
our
case law going
community
back
engagement
to,
has
Katzenbach
expanded
and
people's imagination.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
are we?
Folks are concerned. They're like,
sorry.
wow, how you're a dentist, but
Well,
you're so
I'll
active
stop
in the
you.
community. And what that does is it helps us to lead from a variety of
You're not
perspectives. We need somebody who's been on the
No
ground
hurry.
listening to families every single
What
day
we've said, and this goes
about how
back
they're really
umpteen
doing.
years, and
Somebody
it was
that
said again
can
in-
work
in
independently.
Milligan, is that
We have too many
even
people that
if
are part of a
the
system and they feel like they can't say the right
constitutional
thing because they're
prohibition
afraid of who they're going to
is one on
bother.
purposeful
We have
discrimination,
autonomy.
Congress
We're
can
listening.
enforce that
And I've
prohibition
talked to
under
superintendents
section
across the
section
state,
5 of
big districts
the,
and small.
amendment,
And what they say by and
by
large is that we
way
need
of
somebody with
prohibiting
leadership. We
various
need somebody
kinds of
with a
effects.
backbone,
And
someone that's going to
so
put our
in
children
Milligan, we
first
said
and be
a
their
ban
only
on
special
discriminatory
interest.
effects
And
is
that's
an
what we bring,
appropriate
that's what
method
we've
of
been
promoting
doing.
the purposes of the 15th
Morrow, you have 30
Amendment.
seconds if you'd like to
And
respond.
as I said, that goes
Well,
back
one
to
thing I want to
Katzenbach,
respond
it
to
goes
is when
back
we
to
said
City
like
of
children
Rome.
first. Of
And I
course, we're going to put
understand
children
that,
first in education, but as a
common
teacher,
ground here,
sometimes you have to put the
including
teacher
among
first.
the SG,
Right now, there's a
is
shortage of 90,000 teachers in the United States.
a desire
And nobody's
to
kicking
take
down
us
any
back
doors to become a
to
teacher.
an
So in
entirely
order for you
intent-based
to
world.
speak up
But
for
that
students,
is,
you have to have quality teachers in
you know,
position in order to
that-
teach
that
these
is the
kids.
thing
If you don't
that
have
we
any
tried to
teachers,
do, that
then there's no way the
Congress
kids can
prevented us
learn.
from doing.
Thank you.
And that since
Curry
the
Hitchens, you get the next
amendments of
question.
1982 has been very
Dr. Howard,
clear
I'm sorry to also
that,
focus on you, but my
No,
question is
it's
also prepared for
perfectly fine.
you.
I appreciate
do
the
an
question.
effects
I
test for
am a
Section
member
2
of the
in order to
LGBTQ
vindicate the
community,
purposes
and my question
of
to
the
you
15th and
is
14th
about some
Amendments.
statements you made in the past.
It's clear what
for them, but
Congress
I'm also
did.
a woman,
I mean, but
so
it was using
some of your
its
statements were also
enforcement power
misogynistic.
only. It
So
doesn't have
you
the
made
power to change.
many
I'll
statements
take
saying
that.
that
I'll
there's a
take that
homosexual
label.
agenda in
That's
education.
fine.
But it was not
that's
the-
Congress has
that you think
enforcement
that
power
homosexuality
under the 15th
is
Amendment.
sinful.
But it was not an
I'm sinful.
appropriate use of the enforcement
And also
power.
you said
even
that
if it
women
was then,
should not only be
it's
allowed to teach other women, among other misogynistic things. How can we, the LGBTQ community and women, trust that you would have our interests at heart?
Was it congruent and proportional in 1982?
Sure.
Or
I
is
really
it just
appreciate
like
that question,
suddenly
Curry.
not congruent and proportional because it's 40 years
it's
later?
Important
like I never
to step back
understood
for a
our
second
congruence and
remember,
proportionality test, which, by the way,
and remember
we have never applied to voting.
A goal in
but
mind.
even if you
and
were
that's to make
apply
sure
it
that
to
our
voting,
children are safe.
I've never understood it to have a
make
kind
sure our
of,
children are respected,
oh, you know, Congress
and our
has
families are
to
respected.
re-up.
As a pediatric dentist for over the last 11 years, I have families that come to my office from all types of backgrounds, all kinds of sexual orientations, beliefs, and they bring that to the table. And we all agree on one thing. We want to do what's right and treat our children with love and respect. That's what we've done as a business owner and someone who takes care of families. That's what we've done on the Cobb County Board of Education. As you look at my public record, which I noticed that you don't have, you have, let's see, Facebook messages from 10, 15 years ago. We have work to do, y'all. We are in a state with a lot of different belief systems. People are coming to the table. And what we need to do is make sure we work through that nuance, listen to one another, and move forward and focus on academic excellence with compassion. I appreciate that.
Congress recognized that in 1982.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. I noticed that, again, you kind of dodged the answer to the question, which I've also seen you do in previous forums. But I want to say that I have actually looked at your record, and just because what you see on the top page that I have on my podium is about your post. I actually looked at your record and saw that even about a year ago when the Cobb County Board was looking at banning CRT, critical race theory, in schools, you didn't vote against it. You abstained. I look at your record and I don't approve of that either.
Going back to this discriminatory intent point,
Howard, it is your turn to ask a question of one of your opponents.
The fact that remedial
I appreciate the attention from all of my opponents, and
is really not
I really do.
a new idea.
We've had conversations on the side, and it's a good day. I'm glad we can continue this conversation. I do have a question for one of my opponents, Alicia.
Congress passed
it's good to
the
see
Americans
you again.
with Disabilities Act against the backdrop of a world that was generally not accessible to people with disabilities.
As you were leading a network of charter schools
so it was
for a
discriminatory
few years,
in effect because these folks were not
walked
able
into
to
some major
access
challenges.
these buildings.
Financial challenges.
And it didn't matter
you have multiple
whether
school buildings in
person
different
who built the building
counties.
or the person who
Many of them
owned the
have
building
closed since.
intended
I think there's a
for
network of
them
maybe
to be
400 or 500
exclusionary.
students, about the
That's
size of
irrelevant. Congress
half
said
of my kids'
the
elementary
facilities
school.
have
Your question,
to be
please,
made
Dr. Howard.
equally open
So the question
to
is,
people with disabilities
what
if
lessons have you
readily
learned
possible.
in that
I guess I don't
experience
understand why
as a
that's
charter
not
school
what's
leader?
happening here.
And do you
The
believe that
idea
school vouchers
in Section
are
2
part of the
is
solution to
that
move
we are
forward as a state?
responding to current day manifestations.
Thank you for that question. Allow me to clear the record. First and foremost, there's a big difference between vouchers and public charter schools. I have a clear record of voting against vouchers. I've never supported vouchers in this state.
In fact, we use
Secondly,
the word
public
disabled
charter schools in Georgia
we say that's a way
are a
in
part of
which
our public
you
school
see
system,
that
and I'm a
these
proud
processes are
proponent
not
of public
equally
education.
open.
I'm also very proud of my record as superintendent of IB Prep schools. Our elementary school had a 43 when I arrived.
Congress is saying
3 years later, when we left, we had an 85. And so I have a track record of closing gaps for students. Our teacher retention rate was 25% when I got there and 75% when I left. I'll tell you the thing that I learned. I'm glad that I didn't win state superintendent 8 years ago, because being in the job of a superintendent helped me to understand that 8 years ago I wasn't ready. And that's why I'm ready today, because I have the qualifications, the background, the experience, the track record of closing gaps, making sure that teachers feel supported and respected. And I will be the state school superintendent who will do exactly what I did at IB Prep, which is change the game for kids and make sure that every kid in Georgia has access to a high-quality public education.
And their views and their thoughts based on their race, and that's the problem.
Sure.
It doesn't exist in
I
this.
do appreciate your track record of closing gaps.
Okay, so
I just think
fine,
it's
you say
important
if
that
it's
the
a
public has a
remedy
more
problem,
full
why aren't we just
understanding
focused
that
on
in some
whether
instances, it closed
remedy
gaps, and
here, the
others,
particular
schools
map in
closed, and they had to go
Louisiana
back to their
is predominant,
neighborhood public
using
school.
race,
In
and if
other
so,
instances, there
strict
were
scrutiny
major financial
applies, and did they
challenges
narrowly
that you had to
tailor it?
wrestle with.
I mean, that
And
seems
I'm
to
just
me to be
appreciative
the
of the work
problem
that
you're
you've done,
identifying.
but let's
The
tell the
remedy
full
here, you
truth
say,
that there's some major problems.
overbroad,
And
it's not
you
using
can
the
look at
right
IB Prep
factors,
right
it's
now, and
using race
you're doing
in a
okay, but there's some
stereotypical
major,
way.
major
What does that
challenges
have to
under
do
your
with Section
leadership.
2
Thank you.
and changing its criteria
And
and
Alicia
adding
Thomas,
intent
seriously, you
there?
get the final question in this round.
Your Honor, you have to break the link.
I'd love to spend more time with Dr. Howard, and if he could talk to us about, you have a reputation in Cobb County. I live in Cobb County. I served in the legislature for 12 years. And as I talk to leaders, they're concerned about your reputation of being combative, being an activist, and never getting anything done. And so could you talk specifically about a policy that you've passed that directly improves student achievement in Cobb County schools?
Predominant standard will help clarify a lot of the
I
issues
appreciate that
we discussed
question.
this morning.
Your question is also showing that you may not have a good idea of what a school board member does. A school board member's job is to oversee a budget, in this case in Cobb County, $1.3 billion budget. That's almost 10% of the state budget, by the way. Hold the superintendent accountable, and that's exactly what we did. A superintendent is in charge of operations. And so I understand you may be confusing being a legislator and being a school board member, but it's a difference. And I would love to meet all these people who have these concerns, because talk to a leader in Cobb County. You live in Cobb County. You have not once voiced your concerns about my leadership, and your kids are in school in our own backyards. We live in the same county. Not once have you voiced any concerns. And now, when we're 3 days out, or 3 weeks out from election time, now all of a sudden we have concerns.
I welcome these questions.
I can't take that seriously.
In one of your suggestions,
being a school board member who
protest
a lot is good, and you're welcome to stay in that position. I'm voicing my concern because as state school superintendent, we have to get things done. As a state legislator for 12 years, my reputation is working across the aisle. I'm one of the few Democrats who's passed a constitutional amendment, who's passed laws in a Republican-controlled legislature. And I'm very familiar with school board members. And your job's actually part of my professional job is to work with and mentor school board members across the country, and I mentor them. So I'm very familiar with your job, and I'm most familiar with that of the state school superintendent as a policy job and a job that ensures that 1.8 million students have access to a high-quality education.
Your time is up. Thank you very much. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is a debate between Democratic candidates for state school superintendent. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions of the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask a question to the candidates. I'll determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Tagami, you get the first question in this round.
Ms. Searcy, you said earlier that you'd never voted for vouchers. In 2008, you voted for House Bill 1133, which established the tax credit scholarship program at $50 million. It has been growing over the years. Matter of fact, just this year it was expanded to $120 million. I'm wondering if you consider that program, why you don't consider that program a voucher, and if you support further expansion of it.
On redoing jingles.
So a voucher is
we granted cert on a totally different question.
Taking public school funds and taking them to put into another private school. I've never voted for a voucher. The only voucher that we have in the state of Georgia is SB 10, which is a special needs voucher, and that's a different conversation. The tax credit scholarship is exactly what you said. It's a tax credit. And so none of the funds that are used to fund this tax credit come from the K-12 public education budget. So it's absolutely important that people understand the difference between public charters, between tax credit scholarships, between vouchers. Again, I go on record as saying that I have never voted in favor of a voucher. I've never sponsored a voucher bill. My work that I'm very proud of in the state of Georgia has always been to stand up on behalf of parents in support of public education and ensuring that all of us have options that meet the best needs of our children.
How do we enter redoing jingles?
Crystal Dixon, it's your turn to ask a question.
So
this question is for decisions. You mentioned on your website that you want to incorporate restorative justice measures for students. Can you expand upon this and explain what exactly would you mean by this, and how do you think this would improve discipline rates in school?
Sure, thank you, Crystal. So one thing I do as an attorney is represent students in school discipline cases, and I have noticed that the punitive system we use in Georgia, which is basically we kick people out. Sometimes even when they haven't actually done anything wrong. We kick children out of school. We deny them education as a punishment. I've noticed that not only doesn't work, but hasn't worked for the decades we've been doing it. And in fact, only increases violence in our communities, increases the school-to-prison pipeline, enhances that pipeline instead of trying to get rid of it, which is what we should all be aiming for. So restorative justice is basically a new framework, a way to, not new exactly, but another framework that we haven't used in Georgia. So it would be new to Georgia, that we look at every child as a valuable child. Every child is a child that's deserving of love and forgiveness, and we incorporate that into the entirety of the day. And part of that is not just looking at a punitive punishment, but considering what needs to be done to actually make a situation better and to make everybody better in that situation, the victim and the person who has committed something against that person. So it's about a whole movement, basically. It wouldn't be just a practice.
That if you have an incorrect reading of Section 2, that or Section 5
Mr. Morrell, you mentioned discipline too when you in your
The court has applied the good faith
question,
standard
and I'm
on
wondering
distribution
if
to errors of fact,
if
not
there
errors
really
of law.
is
In
a growing
Miller and Shaw,
problem in
the
your
DOJ
schools, are you
browbeat
seeing
states into
more
creating
student
multiple
violence and
majority-minority
misbehavior?
districts, and they
I
all
asked
thought
this
they were doing it
because
under Section
superintendents
5.
from around
They were acting in good
Metro
faith.
Atlanta
The DOJ
recently
was
convened at
browbeating
the
them.
governor's mansion
But this
to talk
court
about
said
this
that is
problem.
not
So
a
I'm wondering
compelling
if you're
interest. The
seeing it,
DOJ was
A, and
wrong
B,
about
if
what
so,
Section 5 meant.
That hasn't been the allegation.
Yes, I
That
am
is the
seeing it.
allegation
Like
here. The
you have
allegation here is
students
that
that
the
walk the
Robinson
hall
court
and
was
skip
wrong
every
about
class
what
on a daily
Section 2
basis.
meant.
You
They
have students that have
completely
over
misapplied
150
Section 2,
absences
even
and
actually under
75
Jingles
charges, and they're
under
still allowed to
Milligan,
graduate.
let alone under
So
the
yes,
proper
there's a major
weighting code, Section 2.
discipline
Again,
problem.
Justice
Students sell
Alito,
drugs,
3 points.
pop pills.
First,
Basically, school is
ignored
not a learning
incumbency
environment
protection.
anymore.
If you look at what the
It's
district court
basically
said,
turned into
they
a
said they
party
protected
place, a social
incumbency
place.
because Julia
A lot
Ledlow
of
could
times,
still live in
students
her district.
continue to keep
She
their
would
phones in
lose,
their
but she could
hands,
still live
or they
there.
keep
That's not
earbuds in their
incumbency
ear.
protection.
And one of the things that
Two,
irritate
they
me the
did the
most
exact thing
is
that
when a
this court
parent
held in
calls their
Gulak
child in
is not
class
a
and the
compact
kid will say,
district.
Coach
As you
Morrow, it's my
said,
mama.
they
Can I
took
answer the
blacks
phone?
from
I'm like,
Baton
no, you
Rouge
can't answer the phone.
and blacks
Takes it
from
back and tell her
north
you're
of
in
the
class.
state
So
and jammed it
parents
together. Yeah, it's
need
a
to be
nice
held
rectangular
accountable, more
district,
so
very
accountable
pretty,
for their
but
children's
it's not
actions. And one of the
compact.
things I would try to
And then
do
third, they
is if a
didn't
child is
control
suspended,
for racially
they would not be
polarized
allowed to
voting.
come back
So
to
they
school
just said that blacks
until their
vote differently
parents
from whites, which just
shadow them
basically means
around for a
Democrats
day or
in
two in
Louisiana
each
vote
class,
differently
eat
from
lunch with them,
Republicans in
walk the
Louisiana.
halls with them.
That's
Because
not
I feel if
racially
parents are held
polarized
more
voting.
accountable,
That is not
or if
the
they have to
proper
miss work
interpretation
or
of
use their
Section 2.
off day to
And this
sit
is
with their
exactly why
child,
Section
then they would turn up
is
the
leading to
discipline
racially
on their
predominant
children.
results,
Thank you for the
where you're
question.
essentially using Section 2
Crystal, your next
to
question.
undo
Mr. Morrow, I want to
political
follow up on that.
outcomes.
So
And
what
that is
if
an
parents are not
unconstitutional reading
able
of the
to
statute.
take time off
And so
work
the reason
and
to get to your
shadow their
first part
child,
of
as
your
you say,
question,
for that one day?
why
They
should
may
you read this at Jingles?
be under a
Because we
situation
don't think
where
it's consistent
they
with stare
can't
decisis to say,
take a day
well,
off
we
work like
misinterpreted
that.
the
So
statute
what
40
other
years ago,
proposals would
so
you
now the
suggest
statute's
that could,
unconstitutional.
I guess,
Stare decisis
wouldn't put a
is about
parent in a
respect for
in a
Congress
precarious
and
position?
respect for
Because, like I
stability.
said, some parents
If
may
this
not be able
court
to
has
take
created a
work off.
constitutional problem
Just
with
a
But
statute,
if they can't
this
take
court
off,
should
then we
fix
could
it.
possibly
Can you
have
say
like
more about
a
why
Zoom
there's a
conference, or they can
constitutional
join the
problem with
class through Zoom.
Yeah,
And
so
because
for- as I
I
was
teach
saying, the
virtual. When I was
problem
teaching
here
AP
is
United
Jingles,
States
as
history,
it's been
I was
interpreted,
responsible for like
essentially
38
imposes
students in the
liability
class, and then I had
based
like
on
12 that was
making
virtual. And
state
sometimes I would forget
race
about the
and
virtual
predominate
students once I
over
started
race-neutral
teaching the United States
criteria.
history. So
Again,
if a
using
parent
Robinson's
can't
example.
come up
I
to the
don't
school,
understand. I'm
then we would
sorry.
arrange something
So,
virtually.
incumbency protection is a
Thank you for the
traditional
question.
neutral principle.
Ty, your next question.
Robinson found liability
Dr.
by
Howard, the
requiring the state
governor
to
just
discard
recently
their
signed
But I thought you
the
said
divisive
Robinson
concepts
was wrong, so
legislation
then we
that
just
Crystal
changed that
mentioned that prevents
understanding. Why does that
prohibits
create a
teachers from
constitutional problem?
talking about nine different quote-unquote
the way it was
divisive
wrong is it
concepts. It's going to be up
required
to
the
the
state to
state to sort of
subordinate race
define
neutral
that
principles to
and
race.
enforce it.
And
I'm
let me
wondering
use
how
Milligan.
you would do that
Jingles
as
requires that?
So the way
So it was consistent with
superintendent,
Jingles,
we
and
do have to
Jingles is
follow
wrong,
the
or it was inconsistent
rule of
with
law.
Jingles, and we should say
But
that.
each law is up to interpretation. We have seen laws on the books where some leaders have a very casual approach. And I'm not going to be very eager to put our teachers in a bad spot to be lawbreakers. So yes, we have to have some very difficult conversations, and I'm no stranger to that, working in Cobb County. So we have work to do. We're going to make sure that we talk about history, we talk about a full context, without making sure that our educators are nervous about being lawbreakers because of the law of the land. And use a lot of that energy to focus back on what's important, literacy.
You must pick the black student.
Learning how to read so that our kids can read to learn. Those are the things that we're going to do. And I look forward to using our leadership, our relationships, and our advocacy, engaging the public to do this in a very real way.
Section 2 is just about identifying the problem.
Crystal, your next question.
I agree with that.
If that's
Mr.
the
C, this
case,
question
then
goes
it
to
doesn't
you.
matter
The video
that
made
the
by
Section
students at
2
Druid
analysis
Hills
is
High School
showing
in
you that
DeKalb
there could
County
be
showcased showcased several serious infrastructure problems and even prompted a visit from the State Department of Education's facilities teams. What do you think you could do as school superintendent that would help districts rebuild or upgrade, aging facilities?
That would help blacks, even though there's
First of
no
all,
reason to think
relationships
that
matter. And as state school superintendent, I currently have relationships with school board members across the state, and I would leverage these relationships to ensure that they have the resources that they need. One of the things I'd like to do as state school superintendent as well is start an office of equity. Well, we're looking at DeKalb County schools, Cobb County schools, Warren County, all of our schools across the state to ensure that all of our students have access to a high-quality education, but also buildings that work and that function. The video that we saw from students is unacceptable, and any child in this state who is attending a school in those conditions is unacceptable. The question that I have, though, is that, like DeKalb County and other districts who've received hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government through CARES Act and other funds, why those dollars aren't going to address those kinds of issues. And so we've got to ask the hard questions, and it would be my job as state school superintendent to work with districts and ensure that they're using those resources to benefit all of our students.
It's essentially being used as a reverse
Very much. Ty, your next question.
Yeah, Dr. Howard, you mentioned literacy, and that's actually a big issue for the state. Only about a third of kids are reading proficiently by third grade, at which point they need to be able to read to do well in school. And I'm wondering what, as a Cobb County School Board member, you were able to do for the literacy rates in Cobb County and what you would do about that problem at the state level.
Sure. On the Cobb County School Board, I was able to work with my fellow school board members to make sure that literacy is a priority and engage our superintendent, who's in charge of operations, to do his job well. We have done some things very well, but there's also a lot of room for growth. And that's the experience that I bring statewide. There are some strategies. We have kids that learn very differently. We currently don't have an approach that we can go statewide and make sure we amplify that message of a birth to third grade approach, recognizing things like dyslexia and engaging communities using the science of reading methodology to really transform reading. We've seen improvements in other neighboring states, but Georgia has been behind. So when I am in a debate with Richard Woods, he doesn't have much of a record to stand on. Right now, we tout that Georgia is the #1 place to do business. Unfortunately, we cannot say that Georgia is the #1 place to educate our children. And we have to start that with early literacy and do it collaboratively with nonprofits, other municipalities, and do it as a team together.
Your next question.
Yes, I want to follow up, Mr. Murray here. You mentioned that there were, I think your number was 90,000 vacant teacher slots around Georgia. You mentioned that you would recruit quality teachers. Can you give me a little bit more example as to what you would do as a school superintendent that you would to increase the number of quality teachers there are in Georgia?
First of all, you have to make it more appealing and more enticing for young college students to want to major in the field of education. Right now, I'm going to be honest with you, if I was a first and second year teacher, I'd probably be looking for another profession because I don't feel like teachers are supported by administrators, and I feel like they're constantly disrespected. But one of the things I would try to do is maybe a teacher next door program where teachers could possibly get a discount on a house because housing is very expensive right now. Many teachers, first year teachers, their salary is around $2,400 a month. So their rent is $2,000 a month, which leaves them with $400 left. So most young teachers are still living at home with their parents. So we got to find a way to make it more appealing where teachers can make enough money where they can sustain and maintain their lifestyle without having to take on a second job, because many of my friends have second and third jobs in order to make ends meet. Thank you for the question.
Ty, your next question.
This is a question from Circe. There's much about the pandemic we'd like to forget. I'm wondering if you think we learned anything about education from the pandemic that we should keep and incorporate going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. One of the reasons why I ran for state school superintendent is because I was frustrated as a parent and as an educator to notice that our teachers were ill-equipped to handle virtual teaching. It's not their fault. It's the fault of the districts and the state. We did not adequately prepare them. And so what does that mean for our students? And so I'm concerned about the fact that we're trying to go back to pre-pandemic education, and that is the biggest mistake that we can make. I think it's time for us to reimagine what public education looks like in our state. We are in a time where we are trying to still provide a telegram education to a TikTok generation. And so now it's time to reimagine. We learned that testing doesn't really matter as much as we thought it did. We learned the importance of technology and how we could connect students to the world. We learned that we could do a lot more using technology and leveraging those platforms. And so now is the time for real leadership in our state, to have a state school superintendent that has a vision, who understands how to grapple with challenges and turn those into opportunities. And that's why I'm running for state school superintendent.
would apply in exactly the situation where racially polarized
Dr. Howard, this question is for you. Some students may not want to attend a traditional four-year college. As school superintendent, what will you do to expand career and technical opportunities in districts that may not have those opportunities available?
Absolutely. We learned a lot over the last several years, and the public is crying out saying we need more options. We need career options. And we have areas where folks are doing it right. I'm proud to be able to represent Osborne High School, and attached to Osborne High School is our Career Academy in Cobb. And I got a chance to tour several times, and I fell in love. As my father does construction before his stroke, this is how I spent my summers and my school breaks. And knowing that there's a construction pathway and kids can come out with certification and choose to go to college if they choose, that's amazing. The IT pathways, these are things that are existing, and now we just have to have somebody that can work collaboratively, talk about best practices, share ideas. And in education, we love our silos. We love putting our head down and working in our specific space. It's time to share ideas, and that takes a leader who can work across the aisle, a leader who can work cross communities and make things happen.
The 1982 amendment to the Voting Rights question for Circe again. Following up, you said that we learned during the pandemic that maybe we didn't need testing as much as we thought we did. Without testing, how would we hold schools accountable, or do you believe we need to hold public schools accountable and private schools that are receiving tax credit money, or charter schools, which are public schools? Should we be testing them to hold them accountable, or is there some other way we should be doing that?
Thank you for allowing me to clarify, because testing is important. We have to assess where students are, especially given this 2-year gap that we've had in high-quality instruction. And so assessments are important. The problem that I have is the high-stakes testing and what it does to educators, what it does to students. My 9th grader this week has been stressed out every single day, worried about the end-of-course tests. That is not what education is supposed to be about. That's not what testing is supposed to be about. I want to assess students so that we know where they are. We can find out their strengths and weaknesses and focus on those weaknesses to get them where they need to be. I want to be able to understand what teachers need so that we can provide support. The purpose of testing is not supposed to be to stress teachers out, to stress students out. The problem that I have with high-stakes testing is that we don't use it to benefit students or educators. It's just stressing us out, and that's not the goal of public education. And so I want to use assessments in a way that is meaningful, that provides support for students, provides supports for educators, and again, strengthens our public education system.
All right, thank you very much. We will head back to our panelists in just a second, but wanted to throw out a question for all 4 candidates, and we'll go left to right here. When we see technology companies, big tech companies, move to Atlanta and move to Georgia and set up offices here, they often talk about the skilled workforce. What can be done from your perspective as a school superintendent for the state to best prepare students in Georgia to take those high-tech jobs? And we'll start with you, Mrs. Schutz.
Thank you. So definitely, you're right. We definitely have a lot of that kind of business coming to our state, and we do want to make sure that our students are prepared for the world or college, whichever one they want to go into first, and those tech jobs are great jobs for them to take. We want to make sure that students across the state of Georgia are getting an education that is high quality all along, and that they also then get to choose what kind of things they might be interested in. If they're interested in working in a technology company, they need to be able to have an apprenticeship, hopefully through a union would make it amazing. Apprenticeships in different skilled areas, and be able to learn about those fields so they can learn if they are interested in computer programming or making electric vehicles or whatever it might be, because those are all programs that should be within schools. I know some schools do have those programs. They're not available enough in all areas across the state, so I would want to make those programs more available to all students if you get a regular high school diploma, but additionally can get these kind of skills so they're ready to work in these high-paid jobs that are coming to Georgia.
Harry, you have 60 seconds.
I appreciate that question. We're really talking about pipelines, right? We have, again, Georgia is the #1 place to do business in a lot of different ways. Tech companies are coming our way. But notice that Richard Woods is missing from those conversations. When it comes to developing a pipeline from our grade school children all the way into the workforce, we can do that. But the issue is we have a leader who does not listen.
And what we're essentially saying in
I've
this
talked to
case is you
superintendents
should
from
do
small
the
districts and
Section
large
2 as
districts.
opposed to vote dilution,
And
what the board has
overwhelmingly,
already
they say,
done
I
as applied
have
to vote
maybe
down.
have had 2 or 3 conversations with Richard Woods. And I was
The bottom line is just get
floored.
rid of Section 2.
What you're going to get from someone
Because
like
the
me,
test
I'm
you're
smart enough
providing
to
doesn't
listen
do
and
anything
realize that
for
I
the
don't
effects
know
tests
everything.
Congress
Democrats
identified.
don't have all the
We did
answers.
say in Castleback,
Republicans don't
we've
have
said
all
it
the answers.
repeatedly,
But together,
that
we
legislation
do.
need only
And that's
be
what happens when you have a
plainly
different type
adapted
of
to
leadership
addressing
that works
discrimination
collaboratively. We can make sure that we
practices in
develop
voting.
the future
Right?
workforce for
All
technology,
right?
but every
The
other
standard
sector.
that you're setting is
So
a
thank you
much
for that
different
question.
one.
All right,
It has
Mr.
to
Morrow?
substantially
Everything that all of us are going to say is going to sound good,
addressing
but
this
we
issue.
got to face reality.
Number two,
We have
what
students
you're
that can't read.
suggesting
Like when I was
is
teaching an AP
that
United States History
people
course
of one
and an
race
AP Human
are
Geography
blacks
course,
in
I had students in my
Louisiana
class that had like a 500 or 600 Lexile score, which means they're reading like a 5th and 6th grade reading level. So it's hard to teach computer programming and technological skills when students can't read. So that's one of the things we're going to have to focus on, as Dr. Howard said, was literacy rate, because when kids know how to read, they're able to fill out applications and acquire jobs. And they also have an opportunity to acquire the skills they need to be successful. But the literacy rate is the most important thing. And then I go back to discipline, because again, without discipline, there's not going to be any success in anything that we do for the students. I would like to see some type of certification or certificate once a kid graduate, then they're certified to do computer programming, where they don't have to go to a vocational school or to a traditional 4-year college or university. So, but we got to be realistic. First, we got to focus on teaching the kids how to read in order for them to be able to do the things that we want them to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Cersei.
Love that question. I want to highlight a couple of great things that are happening in our state. Number one, some of our labor unions have done an exceptional job partnering with school districts, creating apprenticeship programs. So their students are earning while they learn. When they graduate from high school, they have the certificate to go into a job and get gainful employment, making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. We've also seen this happen with rural districts across the state who have been smart about partnering with technical colleges, other corporations in their area to, again, prepare students. So this goes back to what I said earlier. We're providing currently a telegram into education to a TikTok generation. And so we have to reimagine what public education looks like. We've got to model some of the things that we already know are working, that our labor unions are doing, that our rural school districts are doing to prepare our students. This is the time to have a state school superintendent who has partnerships, who has a vision, who can leverage these kinds of partnerships and best practices that are already happening across the state.
As Justice
Thank you
Alito
very
pointed
much.
out,
I'll
I'm
send it
not
back over
disputing
to
the
Crystal
compactness
Dixon
of
for
the
your next
district.
question.
I agree they drew a
Mr.
very
Morrow, this
pretty
question is for you.
rectangle.
You mentioned
The
boosting
problem is that
literacy
in the
rates.
very
What
pretty
specific
rectangle,
plans
the
would you
blacks
put in
lived
place
in the
as school
south and the
superintendent
north.
to
And they
achieve
took
that
two
goal?
very different
Well,
groups of
currently
black
there's
people
already
and put them
plans in
together.
place where we have like tutoring after school, Saturday school for students, but many of the times the students don't show up, and that's mainly because the parents don't have transportation to bring their child to the school or pick them up. So in order for us to increase and boost the literacy rate, we got to have students that's going to be present and show up for the extra tutoring that they receive from the teachers. When I was teaching economics, we had tutoring for students that were having a hard time, because economics is a 12th grade class. Many of the students were in danger of failing. And my principal asked me to do tutoring for that class. And at that time, I probably had about 7 students show up out of about 130 that was taking the class. So you have to find a way to get the kids to come, or maybe even provide transportation where the buses go around and pick them up and drop them off at home. So, but then we would have to pay bus drivers extra money for that.
Is that, I'm sorry for the follow-up. Is that something that you think the state school superintendent should help district with?
Yes, I do. I believe that the state superintendent should be able to find funds that would help all school districts that need it, especially in the rural areas, to be able to provide transportation for the students to and from school on Saturday school and after school.
That was sort of in Jingles. In Jingles, there was showing
yes, Dr. Howard, you mentioned
partisan effect. There was racially polarized voting even within the Democratic Party. That's where Section 2 matters, where you have a reason to think that a racial group is being treated.
This session in the governor's sign.
No, you don't. What you have here is that Republicans and Democrats.
They said we're designed to encourage engagement, including clarifying rights to attend school board meetings, transparency with curriculum, the divisive concepts that we talked about, streamlining the process for banning books. I'm wondering
And so
what
what
you
is
think
happening
of
here
their
is their
approach
argument is
to
because these Democrats happen to be black, they get a
Sure,
second
thank you for the
district.
question,
If they
Ty.
were all white, we all
I'm
agree
glad
they
you
wouldn't
brought
get a
that up
second district.
because
that is literally the
that's
definition
exactly
of race
the challenge.
subordinating traditional principles.
It's the difference between someone who puts children first and our children's education is my only special interest, and a well-funded, orchestrated machine that puts politics,
and predominantly
special interest for particular parties to be the special interest. That's the difference. So we have an angry mob of parents coming shouting folks down. That's not listening. That's not making your voice heard. That's not democracy. That's not promoting freedom. What we've done in Cobb County, we have parents that are engaged, that are listening, that are advocating for their schools, not only in their own backyard, but for schools all over the county. We have a tremendous engagement from our educators. I can walk into almost any school and you get that look where they say, you know, we appreciate that, because they know that they have someone who's advocating for them. That's how we're going to do it across the state. It takes people power, not just one hero, not just a demanding one way to do it, but doing it together. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. You have a follow-up question?
Yeah, a follow-up. Can you tell us specifically what you did in Cobb to encourage this engagement?
Sure. I'll start before I became a school board member. When I'm working in my office as a pediatric dentist, we did something a little different than most pediatric dentists do. Almost every week, I spent an hour of my day volunteering at a neighborhood school. Not just to read a book, which is great, we need to do that once in a while, but I was there almost every week to let those kids know that somebody in the community cares about them. And then that spread. They started telling their families and telling their parents and grandparents, wow, this is how engagement looks. Then we organized parents in the Smyrna area in a group called Wave of Excellence. They were talking about thousands of parents ensuring that we have excellence in our school and not just looking at greatschools.com, but literally engaging and being a part of the solution.
Thanks, Dr. Harris. That's appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Crystal, your next question.
Yes, this question is for Ms. Hitchens. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this. Governor Kemp did sign legislation allowing parents to opt out of school mask mandates. Should parents or districts, with the advice of public health agencies, determine if students should wear masks during any sort of public health crisis?
I think the local district should be deciding that, and even individual schools. But I want the schools and the parents and the families to care enough about people in their communities who can't be vaccinated and who are vulnerable that they willingly wear masks. That would be what would be the dream for me, I guess, because there are people in our community who suffered. People died in Georgia. I don't have the number in front of me, but way more than needed to die. And it's proven that people wearing masks in schools saved so many lives.
So the courts never made clear
if that will
what level
save
of
someone's life, then why not wear a mask?
We
need to be more careful, make sure people do get vaccinated, make sure that people in schools wear a mask. If we can do anything to make sure we control public health, this is one thing we need to be able to do. I do think it is a struggle, and some folks want to say it's their right not to wear a mask.
You have to look to see
and I understand that, I guess, in a way. But it's not your right to possibly kill someone else. So think about it that way. Like, do you really think that you have a right to give someone a disease that could kill them?
Those are nice qualifying words. I mean, does it have to be just 50 plus 1? Does it have to be 60?
So I think,
how does a judge make that decision?
I think courts, what they've usually done is looked at how the map
There's been talk for years about redoing the state's funding formula, and
you can run
being essential
thousands
to
of
large
these things.
operation
I mean,
like
we've got
education.
computers now.
We haven't,
I mean, goodness,
we're using the same formula since the 1980s. So I'm wondering if that were to happen, what your priorities would be.
And I'm wondering how the
that
judge
question.
draws that line.
So again, as a former state legislator who served on the House Appropriations Committee and also served on the House Education Committee, funding education is critical for my agenda. And being a former superintendent who had to look at allotment sheets and determine which of the 19 segments we had in our schools and ensure that we have the right funding. And so I do believe that we need to revamp our funding system for education. QBE was done in the 80s, and it's time to reimagine funding as well. I would like to see us focus more on student characteristics. I'd like to see us fund more opportunities for students who live in poverty. That could be in Atlanta, that could be somewhere in South Georgia. And so we've got to have a funding system that focuses on students and their characteristics and their needs versus
I don't think
formula
it's
versus districts and adults. We often have in education, whether it's policy or funding, we do things that are in the best interest of adults. I'm interested in funding schools and funding children based on the needs of our students.
I don't think that's the right way of thinking.
It's not a proximate cost. The question to you, Mr. Morrow.
So what is it?
Right, as he stated, QBE has been in place since, I want to say, 1983, 84. I was in the 4th grade, 9 years old. I'm 47 years old right now, so as time changed, the needs for students change, especially when it comes to funding. Without funding, there's nothing you can really do for the schools. They take, anytime the wind blows in a different direction, they always cut funding from education, which it makes me feel like they're really not concerned with education. But even at my school, currently we have over 400 students that receive special permission to attend the school that I teach at right now because their parents feel like that it's a better school. And when students come from different school districts, that money comes to the school. So a lot of times when schools allow students to attend schools that don't live in their district, it's mainly because they're trying to bring in more income and more funds to the school. Thank you.
All right.
Does not alone show predominance, and we agree with that.
Agreed. We have a 1980s funding formula. We've had some half attempts from leadership in the past to get something done. We can build on some of those ideas that have come from previous panels. But literacy, we have to make sure that our children are reading. And we don't need to wait until our children are showing up in kindergarten. We're talking about a birth to third grade approach with collaboration, working across the board, working with our pediatricians, working with our not-for-profit organizations, using the science of reading as a methodology. There's some great things happening in Fulton County that I love. And through that training, they're also training other people to be trainers. So it's a model that can expand. And too often we talk about a problem, but we don't give its due on the scope of the problem. We have too many leaders that are box-checking, saying, I did this, I did this, I did that, but they're not being honest about the scope of their solutions. The scope of our solutions have to match the scope of our problem, and we need laser focus on early literacy.
I think it means exactly what I'm saying, that it's not enough for it to be intent.
I would redo our school funding formula to focus on equity, because the school funding formula, as folks probably know, comes mostly from taxing property in different communities. So that means that richer communities have better schools, have more money. And lower income communities have worse schools in general, and that is not okay. We need to make it more equitable because often kids who are in low income communities actually need more funding for their schools to bring them up to equal for other kids. And that's just what the science says. So we need to look at the data, look at research, and make sure we're doing the best for all of our students. Make all Georgia public schools great schools. We can do that. We do have the funding. We had a budget surplus. We've had a lot of money for education. We haven't always put it there. We can do that. We will have to spend our money on it. And I also want to say that I think our school funding formula also needs to be changed very quickly, because one reason we have the funding formula we have is because it is to try to maintain white supremacy, and we need to fight as much as we can against that and make our state anti-racist.
Dead set on drawing a 55% black
Crystal, your next question.
But you managed to do
the COVID-19 and the pivot to this is for questions for everyone. That's okay. The COVID-19 and the pivot to virtual learning exposed many inequities that families face when it comes to access to technology. What will you do as school superintendent to help lessen that gap?
Start with Ms. Sitchins, go the other direction this time.
Hey, thank you.
I understand
So
that.
clearly we need to expand broadband. We already know that. And make sure that students have access to technology when they need it. But I also think there's another more low-tech way to go. We can make sure we do things outdoors sometimes when we can't do things in person during a pandemic. Because it turns out, and we all know this from the data, that the technology didn't really solve anything. We still had a big learning gap, and especially the kids who are low income and had disabilities fell even more behind, and they were already behind. So we need to address that gap as much as we can, and a lot of that's going to need to be in person. And if we're having another pandemic, I know it hasn't quite ended. If we're in the middle of a new pandemic, we need to do things in person. We need to make sure those children especially are still able to do things in person. We have smaller classes for them. We have classes outside. We're wearing masks to protect everybody in those classes. But yes, of course, we need to expand broadband to make sure schools have access, teachers, students all have access to the internet, because that is going to be a necessity for some time.
Is if they just set out to say, I'm going to draw a 55%
Thank you.
black district,
COVID-19 exposed
backfill from there. Because
our problems. Exactly. This is what we look like without makeup. This is what we look like without Photoshop.
When we say that race
sometimes when you acknowledge a hard truth and you're ready to do the hard work, that's when things can really change. As state superintendent, I look forward to building a virtual resource statewide, where we're going to actually have videotape classroom education happen from high-quality teachers, possibly teachers of the year. So no matter where you are, if you love your neighborhood, but there's some challenges at your specific school or your specific neighborhood or your specific district, you can always go online and learn some of those standards from a high-quality educator. It's going to help our teachers have a backup. It's going to help our individual students. And then we also have to do what our colleague here said, is work across industry and make sure we have broadband in those rural areas where we don't have access to the internet.
In part because it was unclear whether partisan gerrymandering.
We just got to make sure we have funding for basically the rural areas. I have a 7-year-old that attends elementary school in Cobb County, and I have a 14-year-old that attends middle school in Cobb County. And both of them receive laptops, and if we didn't have internet access, then the school district would provide a Wi-Fi block. Also, while I'm teaching in Clayton County, every student receives a laptop and access to Wi-Fi. So if it's good enough for the kids in the metro Atlanta area, we need to find a way to get funding down to the kids in the rural area to make sure they have the same opportunity to learn the way the kids in the metro Atlanta area do. We're 2.5 years behind because of COVID. And I can tell you, my son, he'll be a freshman at Pebblebrook High School next year. His grades were like mid B, low C, because when I would be downstairs teaching, I would come up to his room and he got his camera off, he's listening to the teacher, he's playing video games and watching YouTube. So, you know, kids have a lot of opportunities to do things, to have better grades, but they lack the motivation to get it done. I would have loved to have been able to do virtual when I was in high school. Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't think that it is unconstitutional.
When we talk about the impact of COVID over the last couple of years, I get really upset, frankly, about particularly students who live in rural areas who don't have access to broadband. I get really frustrated when I think about students even in the metro Atlanta area who didn't have Wi-Fi at home or had to share a laptop with 5 or 6 siblings. It's frustrating to me that in 2022, we're having these conversations. And so as state school superintendent, again, and through my Office of Equity, these are the kinds of issues that we have to look at. We have to partner with our corporate partners. We've got to thank our U.S. senators who brought us some federal funds to address the broadband issue, but we need more funding so that we can continue to grow that infrastructure. I think one great lesson that we learned, though, is that we can do things called course choice. We can have students access Algebra 2 or trigonometry or physics or some of the courses that may not be offered in their particular district, access them in districts that there are, where they can have access to that information in real time, be a part of that classroom experience, and again, have access to a high-quality education regardless of their zip code.
All right, and that is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Curry Hitchens, you get the first of these closing statements.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us today. And I also want to say to all the educators across Georgia and the country, I guess, happy Educators Day. We're doing well, and you have a great day today. I know you'll get lots of appreciation. So just quickly, I grew up in Georgia, went to public schools in Whitfield County, Georgia, and then became a teacher after going to college. Taught for a couple years in Decatur, and then decided to go to law school to do more for students and worked at Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid, currently representing students' education cases.
There are roughly 60 black representatives.
I have a lot of opinions about the issues, and I want to let teachers teach the truth, pay them more, make their jobs a better job. I want to make sure our schools are in good repair and not unsafe. I want to look at the violence issue that is happening and increasing across the country, not just in schools, but everywhere, and make sure those kids get services they need, and teachers too if they need them, to help with that issue, because a lot of kids have gone through a lot during the pandemic, just like the rest of us, and they have needs. We need to address those needs so they can then learn, and we need to give them high-quality, frequent tutoring, not just add on more to the day to catch up for learning loss. Thank you, Curry Hitchens.
To move in, I have one hopefully
James
very
Morrow, your closing
straightforward question. It's really just to clarify.
I've been in the education field for the past 25 years. I started teaching when I was 22 years old, so education is all that I know. I played basketball and ran track at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, where I majored in history with a minor in physics education. I completed my degree in 1997.
Jingles, I mean, Jingles is a 40-year-old.
I moved on to the University of Arkansas Little Rock, where I completed my master's in secondary education with an emphasis in social science. At the same time, while I was the assistant men's basketball coach at Philander Smith College, downtown Little Rock, Arkansas.
One is about how you
I've taught in Little Rock School District. I've taught in Clark County School District in Las Vegas. I've taught in APS. And currently, I've spent the past 14 years in Clayton County schools. We have a serious problem in education, and it's not going to be fixed until we start bringing more respect to teachers. Too many times administrators spend more time policing the teachers than they do the students. And that's why I feel that we're going to continue to have a major disciplinary issue in schools until that is fixed. My name is James Morrow. Vote Morrow for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
It's not enough.
All right, Alicia Thomas-Searcy, your closing statement.
That the plaintiff's map has to be superior.
I'm Alicia Thomas-Searcy. I'm a graduate of Spelman College. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I served as the first African-American state representative elected to Cobb County. I'm also a graduate of the Rhodes Superintendent's Academy, and I hold a superintendent certificate from the state of Georgia. I am a former superintendent who has led schools before. I've hired principals. I've turned around our teacher retention rate, and I've turned around schools. This race is important.
Yes.
What's not just on the ballot are our names, but what's on the ballot is the future of education in our state. We need a state school superintendent who is qualified, who is passionate, who has a sense of urgency to get this done for kids. I'm a mom of 3, and I am navigating schools just like many of you. And I don't have 5 or 10 years for us to get this right. I only have right now. And so I ask for you to think hard about this race. Think about the fact that the state superintendent role is a policy role. I'm the only one on this stage who has experience as a policymaker, a superintendent, and a mom. Vote for me for state school superintendent so that we can reimagine public education together. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jaha Howard, you have the final word.
What Alabama did was something about computers that
it is a pleasure to be here.
What we are arguing
I did not intend years ago to be on this stage.
That I do understand.
A member of the community who saw a need, and I wanted to be a part of the solution.
The degree to
That's
which
why we
your analysis
organized
relies
thousands of
on the
parents to make sure that we have excellence in our schools when folks were leaving for greener pastures, that they like where they live.
When they do that.
That's why as a pediatric dentist, we love our children with excellence and compassion. Folks who come from old money, new money, and no money all come in. Different faiths, different sexual ethics, different gender identification. That's who shows up in our office, and they all want the same thing, to be respected and to be loved, and that's what we did. As a Cobb County School Board member, we didn't just talk about equity, but we brought home those multi-million-dollar projects to relieve crowding, to redo our buildings and add new facilities. That happened under my watch.
That's your time.
Thank you so much.
Where enslaved communities
All right, and that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, May 24th, and early voting is underway. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information on all the debates they will host this election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. I'm Emil Moffitt. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young debate series.
So I appreciate that you want to say when the state comes with their new map, we have to look at the extent to which in drawing it, they have departed from traditional principles on racial grounds. What I'm suggesting is what do we do with the situation in which the state keeps presenting the same map? They're not departing, their map looks fine, but because of all of these race-based effects, because of the history of Jim Crow, which I appreciate happened a long time ago, but I'm positing, and Jingles allows for us to see where those effects are still occurring. I hear your test not allowing us to solve that problem when the state is continuing to present the same map under circumstances in which people are not actually being able to have equal electoral opportunity.
First is, again, our position, it does not require intent.
Hello, I'm Emil Moffat, reporter and host of WABE TechCast in Atlanta. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. This is a debate among Republican candidates for state school superintendent. Let's meet the candidates for this debate. They are, in alphabetical order, John Barge, an educator and former state school superintendent for Georgia,
why do they have to depart?
and Richard Woods
What if they
is the
just
incumbent
keep
state
on
school
doing the same
superintendent for
thing?
Georgia.
They're not changing
Now let's
the
meet our
map.
panelists.
I thought
Crystal Dixon is a
Section
reporter
2's
at
whole
Axios
point
Atlanta,
was
and
that
Ty
you gotta
Tagami covers education for the
offer
Atlanta
a remedy.
Journal-Constitution.
You gotta have a remedy where this
For
thing
complete
is
rules
happening.
on today's debate,
So
please visit the Atlanta Press Club
well-intentioned
website,
state with no intent to
atlantapressclub.org.
discriminate says the census
To
has
start the
changed.
debate,
This is where
each
people
candidate
live,
will
but
be
we're
asked
just
one
gonna
question by
provide
one
our
of the panelists,
same map.
and candidates have 60
And
seconds
if
to
we can
answer each
determine
question.
that map
Crystal
under
Dixon,
those
you get the first
circumstances
question
is not
to
providing
Richard
for
Woods.
electoral opportunity, regardless
thank you
of
for
whether
being
they've
here.
departed from traditional
Governor Kemp
principles.
last week
I
signed
thought we had to
legislation
solve
banning
for that.
what he calls
And I
divisive
guess our point
concepts
is
for
you
being
don't.
taught in
Don't.
public
It's only
schools.
where they depart from traditional
What is your
principles.
take on this
It's only
legislation, and
where
how do you
could
think
say
this
that
bill will
it's
affect
either
teachers as
intentionally
well as
or
students?
likely intentionally
So
discriminating.
I'm
intent
pleased to
does
work
come in.
with Governor
If
Kemp
you
and the
don't have to
legislature to
prove it
help
by a preponderance
craft
of
this
the evidence.
legislation.
Any other
For
results.
myself, being a former teacher and especially
Thank you,
teaching
counsel.
social studies and history,
bottom, Ms.
I
Nelson?
looked at the bill and the content and said, could I, feel uncomfortable
28
as a
months
teacher
ago,
to-
this court
to,
made it elusively clear that
use
Section
this
2
legislation as
is
a guide.
constitutional,
And I did not. I think one of the things
and
we need
that
to look
there
at is
needs
putting a
not be
process
a
in place
race-neutral
to
map
make
that
sure
is
that
presented
everyone is on
as
the
part of
same
the
page. I
illustrative
think
maps.
it protects
Many
teachers
questions that
and
are
gives them a
presented
guide
by my
and
opponents on
make
the
sure
other
that
side
we're
have
all on
been
the same
asked and
page.
answered
I think
in
for us,
Milligan.
it is looking at what is our primary role,
What
and that is to
is
make sure
also
that we're
clear is that
making sure
Louisiana
our kids
is
can read,
emblematic
write,
of the
do
ongoing
arithmetic,
need for
become good
Section 2.
citizens.
For
But
example,
more importantly,
we're
have
talking about how
the skill
close
set
this
for a
may
great
come
career.
to
And as we
intent
continue to
or
look at this,
results.
we're going to make
If we
sure
look
that
simply
the
at the
legislation
evidence
is
here
well
in
monitored, that we're
Louisiana,
doing our job,
we
that
see
we're
that
protecting our
Louisiana
kids and
had
making our
shifting
focus on
justifications for
educating
its
them
map
and giving them
whenever
great
it was
opportunities
presented
as they
with
move
a
forward.
map that met
Ty Tagami,
or
it's your
beat
turn to
its
ask a question
criteria
to John Barge.
and
Thank
gave
you for
black
being here, sir.
voters an equal opportunity
You
to
were
participate in the
state
process.
superintendent before
It
you chose not to run
rejected
for
those maps.
re-election in
The court
2014,
in
so I'm
Robinson
wondering
also
what
relied
made
on
you
the fact
decide
that
you
there
wanted
has
to
never
come back?
been a black candidate
Well, there are a lot of
elected
things.
on a statewide basis.
Ultimately,
Even when white
the major
Democrats
decision
won an
factor for
election
me
in
came in
2019,
my grandchildren.
black Democrats
My grandchildren
lost.
are beginning school
My
this
opponents
fall.
here would
The
like
oldest
to make
begins
this a partisan
kindergarten.
issue
He started
because
preschool
they
this
believe
past
the case
fall.
law will enable their
And my
case to
daughter made a
prevail,
decision
but it
to
does
put them
not.
in
This
private
is about
school.
race.
And she made that decision
Section
based
2
on a
and
lot
the
of the
Voting Rights
issues that are
Act
going on in
is
public education
laser
today.
focused on
She does not
eliminating
feel
racial discrimination
that she can
from
send
our
her
electoral
children to
process,
school and that they are
regardless
safe, that they will be
party.
educated,
And
that they will not be
if we
indoctrinated
look at
into a lot of the
many
left
of the black
woke agenda that is
congresspeople
coming through our schools.
were elected. They came
dealings
out of
with
Section 2
gender
opportunity
identity
districts.
issues, the
They
critical
don't
race theory
have to be
issues,
majority minority
and then
districts.
looking
Many
at
of them are
just
crossover
basic student
districts.
outcomes at this point.
And so, if we
our,
remove Section 2, we also
fourth
recognize
grade
that
reading
there
and
will
math
likely
scores
be
are the lowest they've been in
a
15 years.
resurgence of
Our 8th
discrimination
grade reading and
because
math
Section
scores are the
2
lowest they've
plays
been in
a
8
deterrent
years.
effect.
So we are
States
not
are drawing
headed in
maps
the
with
right
Section 2 in
direction.
mind. In fact,
We've lost a
Local
lot of
Rule
ground from the
21
time
in
that I was
Louisiana
state superintendent.
says that the
And
state
I want to
must
make sure
comply with
that
Section 2.
all parents in
The
this
fact
state,
that
not just the
HB
ones who
1,
can
which
afford
was the
private
original
schools,
map,
all
was
parents
pre-cleared by the Department of Justice
send their child
means
to a
very
quality
little.
school.
Retrogression is an
That concludes
entirely
the first
different
round of the
standard
debate. The
from what
candidates will
Section
now
2 is
ask
looking
a
at.
question to an
Retrogression
opponent
means
of their
the
choice.
state of Louisiana cannot
Each
go
candidate will
backwards.
have 30
Section
seconds to ask
2
the
is talking
question,
about
60
whether there's
seconds for the
active
response, and then the candidate
discrimination
who asked the
right
question question.
preventing
we'll have 30 seconds
the
for
additional
a rebuttal. By random
opportunities
selection,
for
John
black
Barge, you
voters
may
who
ask
meet
the
all
first
of the
question.
Jingles
Okay, thank you.
preconditions to
Mr.
have
Woods,
an equal
I've heard you
opportunity
report on
to
the success
participate
of career
in the
pathways
process.
and the increasing
Requiring
graduation
plaintiffs
rates
to
in Georgia.
control for
Since I
party
developed career pathways back in
is
2004, I
helpful if
appreciate
that
you
evidence
recognizing the
exists,
policies
and
of my
it did
administration
to
have
some
been very
extent
successful.
in Robinson,
My administration
where we
also
put on
removed the Georgia
evidence
high school
about,
graduation test, which
Democratic
stood as a major
elections and the
barrier to
preferences
graduation.
of white voters
That being said,
that still
can you point
preferred
to a single
white
initiative you
Democrats
have
over black
implemented in 8
Democrats,
years
but
that
is
has
not
helped
the
improve
only
student
question.
achievement in Georgia?
If that evidence is
And
available,
if so,
and
cite
I
the
will remind the
evidence.
court it's not often
Well, I think one of the things we
available
look
if there
at
aren't
is
primary
making sure that our
elections,
kids
or
could
if we are
have
looking
an
at more
education that
down-ballot
expands
elections,
beyond
not just the
everyone
congressional
going to a
elections
college,
at
again,
issue
celebrating
here.
whether it's technical
That evidence
college
is
or
useful,
looking
but
at
if there is significant racially polarized voting,
military or straight into the
has
workforce.
already been shown
One of
to
the things
be
we look at as far as what is our measure, we had the highest graduation rate in our state's history. So again, our teachers are doing a great job catching our kids up. Also, as we move forward board. We're looking at beating the ACT and SAT scores. But I think when you look at the pathways that, again, you developed, one of the things I inherited was that there was a takeover attempt by the governor and the technical school to remove our pathway or CTA program from us as a department. And so things were perhaps not as rosy as they seem as you were going out. And when you look at that's something you quote, quality counts. Well, you talk about Georgia being 7th, but as you were leaving office, Georgia ranked 38.
That Congress can address
Barge, 30 seconds to respond,
beyond what the 15th Amendment requires.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Well, just as a point of clarity, I think that you affirmed my question. The only initiative that you have that you are campaigning on is the success of career pathways.
In cases that
I didn't hear any other initiative or any other data that supports increases in student achievement. So thank you very much.
Calls the court's legitimacy into question
in a
unique
you have the
way.
next question.
My opponents here have
during your
not
term
done
as
the
office, or at least at what point in your term
should be
as you were
overturned. They haven't
superintendent, did you
addressed
decide to
Janice,
run
they haven't
for
addressed
governor of the
Ramos.
state
They
of Georgia?
simply said that we should overturn or tweak the precedent that governs Section 2, and I would say that there's no record to support that in this case, and this court would be remiss to not require that if it is entertaining
there are reasons
any
behind that,
significant
and Governor Deal and I have mended our
Section 2.
fences.
Any further
Governor Deal
neutering
actually
of
supports me
Section
in this
2
election.
would resurrect the 15th Amendment
it was clear
as
to me
a mere
that
parchment promise, and we asked the court to remand.
There were issues that needed to be addressed for education, and that was the best way that I saw at the time to deal with those issues. But again, that being said, Governor Deal and I are on good terms, and
Mr. Woods, 30 seconds if you'd like.
Okay. Sure. As we look at this is a tough job. And it's a job in which I committed that I made sure that I was going to stay in it and run and accomplish the things that I promised that I said I was going to do. In doing so, I addressed, the issues surrounding Common Core. We were eliminating those standards. We had the largest reduction of state-mandated testing in our state's history. Again, something that my opponent initiated, in which he says he removed tests, but actually we were about to step into a process in which every single child was going to be tested in the state of Georgia. And also we've expanded pathways, and again, making sure that our kids are on task, STEM, STEAM, expanding fine arts across the state. And again, we did not even have an individual in fine arts in over 25 years until I stepped into office. So you have to make sure that as a leader, you're going to stay the fight, because leaders find a way to win.
All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the debate between Republican candidates for state school superintendent. We will now go back to the panel to ask questions to the candidate of their choice until we run out of time. And as a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask questions of the candidates, and I'll determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Tai Tagami, you get the first question in this round.
Superintendent Woods, nice to see you here today. You said that graduation rates are the highest they've ever been, and they have been rising. However, 16% of students, more than 16%, still aren't graduating on time. That's about 21,000 kids, and I'm wondering what you are doing about that, and what are you doing for those who are already adults and didn't get their degree?
Well, one of the things we look at doing is expanding pathways. That's something that I think that we need to make sure. As I was coming into office, we assumed that every single child was going to a 4-year university. Well, that's not the reality of life. So as we continue to make sure that we expand those opportunities, we need to, change our graduation pathway, formula for what that looks like. Not every child needs to take the same 4 math, 4 science, and social studies, but we do need to align with the passion that they have, whether that is looking at a path in the military, straight into the workforce, dual enrollment. Those are things that are important for our young people. Working with our earliest of grades, I think one of the things we have to be is be proactive, continue that focus on early literacy as we move forward. Talking with US Ed, looking at them and especially, special needs. And so we don't need to necessarily get locked into the 4-year pattern, but I think we can do things by expanding and giving them some flexibility for all of our kids throughout the state.
All right, Crystal Dixon, your turn to ask a question.
Mr. Barge, you've campaigned on preventing what you call woke leftists from indoctrinating students. Can you provide any examples of what you've what you've witnessed personally or what you've experienced personally when it comes to this campaign topic?
Absolutely. Going back to my daughter and making the decision to send her children to private school, that came on seeing a school enrollment form come home from the school district that asked for the gender of the child, and it said male, female, or other. And as a parent, she decided she did not want to send her children to school to be indoctrinated into that kind of thinking. We have issues around transgender students and bathroom usage. In 2016, the Office of Civil Rights under the Obama administration sent a letter to every single superintendent in this country that I received as a local superintendent that demanded that we allow boys and girls to use whatever bathroom they choose to use based on whatever gender they identify with. I told my community, my board, that it didn't represent it wasn't law. And we weren't going to do that, but that was not the case in every school district in Georgia. So you have some school districts in Georgia that allow children to do that. You have some school districts that don't.
We will hear argument next.
We have a district right now that's being sued by the
24-624,
parents of a 5-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted in her bathroom at school by a boy.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court.
Thank you.
This court has never allowed state officials to force their way into someone's home without a warrant or probable
General
cause.
Assembly this year
It should
passed
not start
numerous
now.
bills designed,
There is no liberty interest more
sponsors said,
deeply
to
rooted in the
encourage
Fourth
parent
Amendment
participation
than
and
the sanctity
engagement.
of the home.
So we have
The
bills
court
that
has long
clarify
recognized
rights
that
to attend
physical
school board
entry
meetings
of
or
the
access
home
to curriculum,
is the chief
that
evil against
streamline
which
the
the wording of
book
the Fourth
removal,
Amendment is
book banning
directed.
process,
And the
and
facts
the
here
aforementioned
well
device
illustrate
concepts
what's at stake
legislation
with such
controls how we
entry.
discuss race
The
in
police
classrooms.
entered Trevor
I'm wondering if
Case's
you
home
think that
without
was the
permission,
right
a
approach to
warrant,
encourage
or even
engagement
probable
and what you
cause,
were doing to
and they ended up
encourage
shooting
more
him in his
parental
own
involvement and
house.
engagement.
Well, definitely so. I think
Montana
since day
seeks to
one,
justify this
since
intrusion
stepping
under
into
the
the office,
emergency
I've
aid
always had an
exception,
open door
which
policy.
permits a
That
home
meant
entry
that
only
I've
when an
talked with
officer
parents on a regular
has an
basis.
objectively
I've even gone
reasonable
out to
basis for
personal homes
believing
to have
that an
conversations
occupant
with
is
individuals
seriously
and groups.
injured or
So,
imminently
we will
threatened with
continue
such
that.
injury.
I think looking at the
As Montana
legislation, it
previously
was the right
acknowledged,
balance. It
that
was a time in
standard,
which we
quote,
definitely needed to have that transparency. One of the things we have been working on and continue to work on, is making sure that data is available to our parents. I think we have to understand in our parents that these are their children, that we are just temporary placeholders or guardians of them, but we have to respect the role of parents to govern their child's education. And I think making sure that they clearly understand what is out there, what the expectations are, what the content and materials are. This allows us to be on the same page, it allows us to be focused, and it does allow us to build relationships, not only with kids, but also the parents and community at large. Because we, as public education, we have to make sure that we continue to earn and maintain the public trust.
Within the home.
Crystal, your question.
Their proposed
Mr. Barr, this question is for you. You've mentioned that you wanted to, overhaul the Department of Education. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean about that?
Certainly. Within my platform, part of my platform is to rebuild the Department of Education. Quite honestly, as a local superintendent for the last 5 years of my career under the current administration, I can tell you that there is not very much leadership that's happening at the state level to provide local school districts with the guidance and the direction and the vision that they need from the state to be successful. So there are very few people within leadership positions at the Department of Education who have any real actual experience in leadership roles in the positions that they have. I mean, very few of them have been superintendents or even assistant superintendents, and so there are lots of issues there. The current Department of Education has been sued 3 times for whistleblower or hostile work environment lawsuits. Staff has been told not to speak to board members, not to speak to legislators. So it's a pretty toxic, dysfunctional environment that needs to be corrected.
Is probable cause the traditional standard that the court has applied? Yes, sir.
Yes, this is a question for Superintendent Woods. We, this primary season has shown us that we have a split in the Republican Party, and I'm wondering, it's been described as sort of the Trump-David Schaefer wing and then the Jeff Duncan GOP 2.0 wing, and I'm wondering where you fall on that spectrum.
Well, I think for myself, for us as Republicans, and I think you've been to meetings throughout the state, as I've left every single GOP meeting, at the end they always talk about, whatever happens in this election, we have
and
to
the
come
probable
together as a
costing.
party. And I think we have to focus that. We do have differences, and that's quite all right. You have, two different individuals on stage today that have a difference
So,
of
Mr. Chief
opinion.
Justice, here it would
And
be
so,
probable
for myself,
cause,
my
that an
focus
occupant
continues
is
to be on,
seriously injured or
on this race,
imminently threatened with
to
such
making
injury.
sure that I'm
Ordinarily, it
living
would
up
be
to the
probable
promises
cause to think
that
a
I
crime is
made
being
the people of
committed. But
Georgia.
here,
So
as
I'm
the
going to
government
commit to
explained in
that.
its brief
But
in
at the end of the
Brigham
day,
City,
once
the
we
object might
find out
change.
what happens on May
But the way that the
24th,
standard
we as
applies and the level of
Republicans are going to come
certainty
together and
does
should
not.
come together. So that's my commitment, that as we move forward, we're going to support all the Republicans that come out.
And applying these things just because we're familiar with
This question
them,
is actually for both of the
and because
candidates.
authorities
So Governor
are-
Kemp signed a bill that would make it easier to remove obscene material from school libraries.
this home because they were
First,
concerned
this is a two-part question. What do you both think of that legislation, and how do you all balance the view by some that children should have access to stories that are different from their backgrounds?
So, Your Honor, the dispatch call was for a wellness check.
So
But
I'm
think
thankful
to
for
get
the
to your
legislation.
original question,
I think
the
that
court has applied that probable cause
I
standard.
don't think that we
even
need
though
to
the
approach
object
this
of it
from a
might
position
change
of
in different contexts.
this
For
is
example,
banning
when
books.
a
It is
civil
more,
vehicle
to me,
infraction,
it is more
that's not
seen more
a
as
crime,
making sure that
and
we
the
have age-appropriate
standard's still
material for our
mapped
children.
onto it, and we
I
think
don't
that it
agree
maps
with
on
a lot
to
of
the
the resources that,
context
I mean, if it's
quite
illegal
well,
for
because
an
officers and
adult
first
to
responders don't
provide
have
some of this
complete
material
information.
to a
They're
child,
just
why
trying
is it
to
legal for
assess
them to get it
whether
from an
there's
adult
an
in a
urgent
school?
emergency that is happening behind the front
that
door.
does not make sense
and
to me.
probable
And so
cause
I think the
would help
legislation
them
is
do that.
on target.
You'd say urgent emergency. I mean,
I wish it would
let's just say
go
you-
a step further. I'm not
It's
actually
patrol or
very
whatever, he
fond
looks in the
of
window and there's
the
somebody
ability
who
to
seems to
argue
be
the
in
merit
some
of an entire piece of
distress.
work
Now, is he supposed to say,
to justify
"No, I can't tell if,
sexually
you know,
molesting
he's-
a child or
he has
or
a-
justifying rape or
whatever,
justifying
pain
some of
is-
the things
or
that are
he's
in these
having a heart
books
attack or
that
whatever
we're exposing
before,
minors to?
Entering?
Mr. Woods?
Mr.
Well,
Chief
again,
Justice, why don't you
looking at the material,
lying
again,
on the
I've
ground?
already
Why is that
stated my
person lying on the
support
ground?
of the legislation,
court
but
said in
we
Fisher
have to
that you
look
don't
at
have to have
what is the end goal, and that's
ironclad
protect our
proof
kids. We
that
want to make sure
somebody
that
is
it is
dying
age
before you
appropriate
go in, but the
for them,
standard
that
is
the
under the
content is
emergency aid
appropriate
exception as defined
for
in,
them to
in
view.
Brigham
But I think
City,
it's also working with
seriously
our
injured or
parents, and
imminently
as I
at
stated, I
risk
think
of
it's
such
extremely
injury. And
important
so
that
I
we
do think the
recognize
court
their
has
right
fixed the
to govern
threshold,
their child's
but it said
education, providing
you don't have to
options,
have
again, not
ironclad
banning
proof, and
books,
that's consistent with probable
unless
cause,
it,
because, of
it
course,
goes through the
probable cause
process and
also
says
does
this
not
is
require
really what our community, this is
ironclad
what our
proof. What
schools
it
do not
requires
want.
is a fair
We have to have that
probability or a
engagement
substantial
at all
chance. And we think
levels,
that
whether
that
that's
strikes the right
parents
balance,
with schools
given
and
the
their boards of
important and
education
really
who are elected.
fundamental
So
interest
we're
in the
committed to
sanctity
make sure
of
that
the
we
home.
work through the process. Again, I'm proud to say that we help work with the legislation, but we're going to do what's right to make sure that things are not removed unnecessarily, that there continues to be options, but at the end of the day, what material, if it does need to be moved, should be removed, and we're going to make sure we focus on that.
I think what Your Honor is asking is whether they can do it immediately, and it would not be easy to do that.
Dr. Barge. So we have for over a decade, we've had a program that allows taxpayers to contribute to private school tuition. It's a tax credit scholarship program, they call it. They get 100% back on their contribution. It started out at $50 million, like in 2008. This year, it's been growing, and this year the legislature expanded it to $120 million. I'm wondering if you agree with that expansion, and whether you think it should continue to grow, and if so,
Well, I'm not necessarily opposed. I think what you're referring to is the Gold Scholarship, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the Gold Scholarship. I'm not necessarily opposed to parents receiving a tax deduction on their credits for money that they contribute to a private school to fund a scholarship for a child. The only thing that I want to make sure that we do is that we are accountable for that money. We are accountable to the taxpayers. We know where that money is going, and the last that I recall, we didn't know who was receiving the scholarships, how much they were receiving. And so I think that there is an accountability issue that we need to make sure that we are being truthful and honest with taxpayers about where money is going. But I certainly don't have an issue with taxpayers receiving credit for money that they contribute to a scholarship.
Chief Sather testified
I think as we look at this, as being state school superintendent and over our public education, that continues to be my primary role to make sure that constitutionally we are adequately funded. I think that is mandated. I'm very appreciative of the governor and the General Assembly for restoring the austerity cuts. What I firmly believe is what we really need to look at is our funding formula for public education. It is 1985, it is antiquated, and things have changed a lot. I think about when the time that I was a classroom teacher, technology was an overhead projector. We did not have computers. We did not have the number of children we have today, and so I think we have to be focused on that. As the General Assembly determines and we have the proper funding, then we want to support all parts of education, but right now my focus continues to be on that of public education and making sure that it is fully funded and adequately funded so that we can do the job that we need to do to reach over 90% of the kids of the state.
Yes, Your Honor.
Crystal, your question?
It's actually also a question for both of you. Speaking of funding, how would you both change the current method of funding when it comes to public education in Georgia? We know that QBE is outdated. It's been in place for nearly, I guess, almost 40 years now. So how would you all change the current situation now?
As assessed by the officers on the scene.
Well, one of the things I think we need to look at is even how we procure and buy things within the state of Georgia. I think one of the things I've looked at and being a former businessman, purchasing agent, I think we can be more effective in looking how we're able to spend tax money and have that flexibility. But also looking at what the needs are. Again, looking at our population in the state of Georgia, we deal with things such as dyslexia, various forms of special needs. We have a growing population of ELA. Even just driving buses today. You think about the cost of fuel, which can be extremely overburdensome within the state. And again, one of the reasons that I asked for flexibility with that. So I think it is a combination of working with the General Assembly and the governor to come together, create a great plan, looking at flexibility and looking at what needs are. Because times have changed. Just looking at connectivity and what we had to deal with the pandemic is a clear picture that we need to expand that.
Girlfriend about circumstances that look like they're
to actually answer your question, I would address things and shortcomings within the funding formula. I would update things like the funding formula gives school districts money for textbooks based on 1984 textbook prices because the funding formula has never been updated.
On the scene, because there are deliberations that are captured on body cam.
An issue that Mr. Woods raised,
those deliberations by
there is no
officers
funding in the funding formula for technology. There are also issues within the parts of the formula, let's say that cover equalization. So there are school districts who receive equalization funds based on a formula that is flawed.
For example,
the state will identify the counties and rank them on their wealth, and they'll draw a line at a certain number, 20, 25 counties, and those top counties receive no equalization. Their 5 mil share goes to other counties. The formula doesn't take into consideration that some of those 5 counties, or those top counties, have land that's owned by the government that they can't receive and generate any tax revenues from, so they are unfairly penalized.
I thought we already had
and that is all the time we have. Questions for each candidate. We'll now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Richard Woods, you get the first closing statement.
And I didn't hear that.
To the Atlanta Press Club, to our panelists and moderator, and to GPB, I want to thank you again for this time that we've had together. As we look at this, it is a record, that we're looking at of 2 individuals who have held this office. I'm glad to say that I've led, with integrity. I've led with dedication, and I've not jumped ship to chase other offices, for whatever reason it may be. But our children need to have someone who is willing to stay in the fight. An individual who has been successful in that, and I think you will find that I have led that way. When I go out and travel, people look at me and say, Richard, you're not a politician. And I think that says a lot for somebody that's been in the area of politics for 8 years. We have accomplished a lot, and we're going to continue to accomplish a lot, whether that's be the removal of Common Core. Next year, every child will take a strong personal finance class, and we will put these laws into effect for the betterment betterment of all of Georgia. So I ask for your vote and your continuing stay in this office. Thank you.
What positive law. We don't
John
always
Barge, you get the
often
final
do.
closing statement.
Cats is another
Thank you.
thing, but
Thank you to the Press Club, and thank you, citizens of Georgia. The Department of Education is in crisis, and we're in a crisis of leadership. Due to lack of leadership, there are school districts in the state that allow boys to use girls' restrooms, school libraries that allow easy access to obscene materials to groom children for the sex industry, the Department of Education promoting and teaching concepts of critical race theory to teachers. Due to a lack of leadership, we have the 4th grade reading and math scores the lowest in 15 years. The 8th grade reading and math scores the lowest in 8 years. Our national ranking in AP exams going from 12th to 15th. The national ranking of overall quality in our state's educational system falling from 7th to 31st.
I would have thought.
I have 24 years of experience, successful educational leadership experience across the state. My opponent may attack me, he may question my motives, but he can't hide from the facts of his own record. My opponent had about 4 years of leadership experience before his contract was non-renewed. He never worked in public education again until elected state superintendent. Academic outcomes in our state in my 4 years as state superintendent far surpass what he's achieved in 8 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, May 24th, and early voting is underway. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists, Itagami, Crystal Dixon. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information on the debates they will host this election season, visit AtlantaPressClub.org. I'm Emil Moffitt. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Vladimir Young
whether the Fourth Amendment is even implicated.
Right, that's another whole question. The search here. I'll take this meeting as a search for the person and assistance, but not for other purposes. This is not a license to go run the place. It is a license perhaps to enter and search for the occupant.
But the necessity of defense was a broad-based common law tort defense, as my friend points out in the respondent's brief. It was applicable to private parties as well as constables. So it doesn't say anything specific about constable authority. But even if it did,
applied to both, it didn't require the magic words probable cause, whatever they may or may not add.
Justice Gorsuch, even if it did, even if you were to consider the necessity defense as the controlling principle here, as the state has suggested, it would hardly help the state because it was, if anything, more stringent than the probable cause requirement or the affray rule because you had to be right. So
you had it.
Well, the United States cites the restatement.
Yes, okay.
But at common law, you had to be right that the necessity actually
What's
obtained.
your best authority for that?
I would point to the state's own cases. I would point to Rex.
On the latest in
I would point to the Wacom case. In general, at common law, you had to be correct. Now, there is this reasonableness gloss in the second restatement. I would note that the state hasn't pressed this argument. It hasn't suggested that there ought to be some generalized necessity defense that would be drawn from modern-day tort principles. The way this has come up in the briefs is, as you suggested, is by way of common law. And again, I think that the relevant question is, what was the authority of constables? And they had all these specific rules that are set out in the treatises.
I thought the hesitation of the officers that you pointed out before showed care before rushing in and
Hello, and welcome to Mission at the Edge, advancing zero trust for tactical resilience. I'm Heather Caldwell-Ware, your host today with GovExec TV.
There were
In
deliberations
an era defined by contested environments, cyber disruption, and data-driven decision-making, traditional perimeter-based security models are no longer sufficient.
That amount of time
this
is inconsistent
explores how
with the
zero
kind of
trust
urgency you would
architecture is evolving
expect
to
if what you
support mission
thought was
enablement
happening was somebody was
and
either
preserve
bleeding
the
out or
safety
was
and
about.
quality of our everyday lives at the edge.
deliberations walk away
We'll discuss the unique challenges faced in cybersecurity industry while applying zero trust in forward deployed and high-risk environments.
Trying to strike a balance
Whether
between
you're responsible for cybersecurity, operations, or infrastructure modernization, this conversation will offer valuable insights into aligning zero trust principles with real-world mission demands. And with that, please welcome our esteemed panel. Joining us today are Ms. Heather Dyer, the Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Postal Service.
Thank you. Happy to be here today.
We also have Mr. Garen Lacey, the Deputy Assistant Secretary and Assistant Director of the Diplomatic Security Service. for Cyber and Technology Security in the Bureau of Diplomatic Security at the Department of State. Hello, Darren.
For some other pretextual reason.
We also have Dr. Matthew McFadden, Vice President of Cyber at GDIT.
Really
Thanks, great to be here.
Help someone.
And we also have Chris
A
Cardin,
couple of
Federal
responses.
Security Advisor
One,
at Splunk
there were
and Cisco.
certainly two risks that were possible. There was the risk
All right, let's
that
get
he was
started. Heather, I'm
going
going
to
to pick
shoot
on you
himself,
first.
and there was
What's
the
the
risk
strategic
that
role
he
of
would
Zero
try to
Trust in
provoke a
today's mission
confrontation with the
environments,
officers.
particularly those
J.H.,
operating
the
beyond
girl- the
traditional network
ex-girlfriend,
perimeters?
actually
Yeah, I mean, I think
identifies
when you
both
look at the
risks.
Postal
In the initial
Service
call,
in its
she
entirety,
expresses
we
concern
are
that Mr.
delivering
Case
to
is
more than
going to shoot himself.
nearly 169 million
When she
addresses,
arrives on the scene, because
6
she
days
comes
a
to
week.
the scene,
So the
she
size
says that
and
he
breadth
also
of our
said that he was
organization,
going
we're
to
really using Zero Trust
try to
as
shoot it
a
out with the
business
officers,
enabler
and
to
that
help us
echoes what
continue with
Officer
our
Lindstead
mission,
says
which
when he
happy to
arrives
report
on
we
the
just
scene.
celebrated
What he
our
says shortly after
250th
arriving is,
anniversary.
last
So
time we were here,
congratulations on
Mike
that.
said he was going to shoot it out
And we
with,
also
and he
welcomed
mentions
our
another officer,
76th
and then
Postmaster
later on he
General,
recounts
Mr.
another
David Steiner.
incident
So
where
250
Mr.
years,
Case
it's
tried
about
to provoke
innovation.
a confrontation.
And how do we move things forward?
sorry,
his perception.
We also
Sorry about
operate
that.
one of the largest IT
on the
and OT
articulation of the standards
infrastructures
you
in
want,
the world, with more
do you
than
have examples
31,000
where under the
locations
current law,
across the country,
officers would go in, but you
connections
think, under your
in
tests,
more
they
than
wouldn't and
150
shouldn't and
foreign
couldn't
countries
go
as
in?
well. So for us,
Well, Your Honor, I think
it's really
the
how
swatting
do we
example that
leverage
we cite in our brief is
Zero
a
Trust
very real
to
concern.
reach,
It's a pretty commonplace
remote
concern where
locations
somebody
in Alaska,
calls it
as
under
well
the
as
United States
bustling hubs in
theory.
New
I
York
think it's
City.
at page 22
And
where you
really
would use
deploying
the
it
severity
so that
of
we are
the
securing the
threat
Postal Service
to
and
ratchet down the
enabling the
level of
mission
certainty that's
across the
required. If
country.
somebody made a
Darren,
swatting
same
call and said, well,
question.
there's a bomb
So,
inside the
Heather,
house,
there's a lot
it's a
of-
pretty big
and
bomb.
Heather, there's a lot of
I
parallels
walked by
there.
the house.
I think the two things that define
and
U.S.
I'm worried that it's going to blow up
when
the
it comes
block.
to
You wouldn't
zero
even need
trust and what we're trying
corroboration.
to
You
do
could
to
just
promote
go in.
foreign
And so
policy around the
we
world
think
is
they just
our
require
global
a
reach,
fair probability
270
or
plus
substantial
locations in
chance and some
150 locations all around the world,
corroborative work.
150
And I think in a
countries
lot
around
of
the world.
heartland
And of course,
scenarios, the police would
extent
have
of
that.
the
And would-
aggressiveness of
Yes,
the
Justice.
Please, I'm
threat
sorry.
actor
Did I cut
environment
you
that
off?
we work in.
Please.
With the
And one
U.S.
of the things
Department
that
of
strikes
State,
me
this is
here
a home
is
to
that
U.S.
the term
foreign
probable
policy.
cause
This is
is
the
not
crown
itself
jewel for
self-defining,
nation-state
and most
advanced
of the way
persistent
we
threat
know what
actors.
probable cause
So the
is
amount of activity that
because
we
we
see
have a
at our
body of
perimeter,
case law
no
that
matter
talks
how
about it,
dispersed
and
it
it
is,
talks
and no
about
matter
it
how
in
uneven it
an
is,
investigatory
is
criminal context.
almost borderline
And in this
overwhelming.
context,
Zero trust
that
for us
way of
presents
figuring
that
out whether there's
natural,
probable
always
cause just
assumed
disappears
breach
because that's
segment
not the
off
context
your,
we're in.
to minimize any
I
type
guess I'm
of
wondering
lateral
whether
movement
then
from an
taking
actor.
a term
It
from a
inherently
context
gives
which
us
has
the
a body
ability
of
to
precedent
know
that is
if a
pretty much
breach is here, this is
irrelevant
where the
to
breach
this one.
only should be.
And that
is
seems like a
particularly
bad
important
idea,
when you talk
and
about
maybe
that
what we
dispersed
did
nature of foreign
in
policy activity. And of course,
City of
the
Brigham and
aggressive
in
nature of those
Fisher
actors. We're
is
always
exactly
talking about
what
the
we
big
should have
four:
done. Is
the
we just
Russians,
use
the
a
North
different
Koreans,
language,
the Chinese,
and
the
we
Iranians.